I've scored 1590 on the SAT with perfect 800s on back-to-back SAT math tests. And in this video, I show you 216 practical tips, tricks, and strategies for the digital SAT math section, each demonstrated on an actual question from digital SAT practice tests 1 through 4. For more digital SAT prep content, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Here's how to answer this SAT math question in under 20 seconds. The question is, what is 10% of 470? We can take 10% and express it as a decimal of 0.1 and then multiply it by 470, and that'll give us our answer of 47. So our answer will be answer choice B. Here's a trick that'll save you time on the SAT math section. Question 2 says, which equation has the same solution as the given equation? If we take a quick glance at our answer choices, we see we have 4x in every single one of our answer choices, which means if we look at our equation on top, we have 4x plus 6 equals 18. All we have to do is subtract 6 from both sides, and we're left with 4x is equal to 12. Now, we don't actually have to solve for x because we have 4x in every answer choice, so our answer is answer choice C. Here's a tip to be more efficient on the SAT math section. If you glance at the answer choices of question 3, you'll see that all of them are going to be inequalities. So as you read through this word problem, you want to go ahead and write out the inequality to save you time. So if we go ahead and start from the beginning, the total cost in dollars to rent a surfboard consists of a $25 service fee. So we can go ahead and write down that $25, and that's a one-time charge because it's a service fee, and a $10 per hour rental fee. So we're gonna have plus 10H. We'll use H to represent hours. A person rents a surfboard for T hours, so we have to replace H with T then, and intends to spend a maximum of $75 to rent the surfboard. So they are gonna spend a maximum of $75. So this total has to be less than or equal to 75. We find which inequality represents this situation. And as we can see, that is going to be answer choice D. So D would be our answer there. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in less than 30 seconds. The function g is defined by g of x is equal to x squared plus 9. For which value of x is g of x equal to 25? Well, since we have g of x equaling 25, we go ahead and plug that in for g of x. Now we have 25 is equal to x squared plus 9. Now we're going to subtract 9 from each side so we can start isolating that x squared value. Now we have 16 is equal to x squared. To isolate x, we need to take the square root of x squared and the square root of 16. The square root of 16 is 4, which means 4 will equal x, and our answer will be A. Here's how to solve this probability question on the SAT. Question 5 states each face of a fair 14-sided die is labeled with the number 1 through 14, with a different number appearing on each face. If the die is rolled one time, what is the probability of rolling a 2? Well, only one of the 14 faces has a 2 on it, so the answer has to be 1 over 14, which is answer choice A. Here's a trick for converting units on the SAT. Question 6 states a printer produces posters at a constant rate of 42 posters per minute. At what rate in posters per hour does the printer produce posters? So what we're going to do here is we're going to convert from 42 posters per minute, which I'll represent as P per M, and we have to convert that into posters per hour. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by 60 minutes per hour. So as you can see, our minutes, which I'm representing as M, are going to cancel here, and we'll be left with posters P per hour H. So 42 times 60 is going to equal 2,520 posters per hour. So our answer is 2,520. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 40 seconds. Question 7 states the function f is defined by the equation f of x equals 7x plus 2. What is the value of f of x when x equals 4? Well, all we have to do is plug in 4 for x. So we do 7 times 4 plus 2. 7 times 4 is going to be 28. 28 plus 2 will be 30. 30 is going to equal our value of f of x and be our answer. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. Question 8 states a teacher is creating an assignment worth 70 points. The assignment will consist of questions worth 1 point and questions worth 3 points. Which equation represents the situation where x represents the number of 1-point questions and y represents the number of 3-point questions? Well, we know our total number of points is going to be 70, so it's going to have to equal out to 70. Now, for every x question we get right, which is every 1-point question, we get 1 point. So we have x plus now our 3-point questions, which are represented as y. So x plus 3y must equal 70, and our answer will be D. Here's how to answer this similar triangles question on the SAT. Question 9 states right triangles L, M, N, and PQR are similar, where L and M correspond to P and Q, respectively. Angle M has a measure of 53 degrees. What is the measure of angle Q? So what we see here is since we have similar triangles where L and M correspond to P and Q, we also know that N must correspond to R. Okay, we see that angle M has a measure of 53 degrees, okay? And then we're asked for the measure of angle Q. We see that M corresponds to angle Q since they're similar triangles. So they're going to have the same angle measure, okay? So that 53 degrees that we are given for the angle M must also be the angle measure of angle Q. So our answer will be B. Here's a trick for the SAT math section. Question 10 states the solution to the given system of equations is xy. What is the value of x? Whenever you see stacked equations like this on the SAT, it's usually a sign that you're going to be able to add, subtract, or substitute one of the equations with the other in order to get to your answer faster. In this case, we're asked for the value of x, and we're given that y is equal to negative 3x. So what we're going to do is we're going to substitute in that negative 3x for y in this below equation. So now what we're going to have is we're going to have 4x plus y, when we know y is negative 3x, so 4x minus 3x is equal to 15. Now we know that 4x minus 3x is x, which means that x must equal 15, and our answer is answer choice C. Here's how to answer scatter plot questions on the new digital SAT. Question 11 states which of the following equations is the most appropriate linear model for the data shown in the scatter plot. What you're going to want to do here, since we're looking for a linear model to represent the scatter plot, is go ahead and draw a line just to give you a rough reference. As you can see, we have a negative slope, which means that answer choices C and D cannot be true since they have positive slopes. The next thing we'll look at is the differences between answer choices A and B, which are their y-intercept. We see that we have a positive y-intercept of right around 10. So if we look at answer choice A, it would have a y-intercept of negative 10, which cannot be correct, and our answer choice must be answer choice B. Here's how to answer this polynomials question on the SAT. Question 12 states the graph of y equals f of x is shown where the function f is defined by f of x equals ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d, where a, b, c, and d are constants. For how many values of x does f of x equal 0? Well, all we have to do is find where f of x equals 0 and count the number of points. We see we have one here, and one here. So our answer will be 3, which is answer choice C. Here's a tip to be more efficient on the SAT math section. If you see a word problem like this, you're going to want to start writing out the equation as you read it. So watch how I do this problem. Question 13 states Vivian bought party hats and cupcakes for $71. So 71 is going to be the total amount she spends. Each package of party hats costs $3. So $3 times our number of packages of party hats, which I'll represent as P. And each cupcake costs $1. So you could make it plus 1C, but since a 1 in front of C is redundant, we'll just get rid of the 1. So now we have our equation. Well, if she bought 10 packages of party hats, that means 10 is equal to P. So we can go ahead and substitute that in. So now I'll go ahead and erase that P and I can put in 10 since we know that's the amount that she had bought of those party hats. So we have 3 times 10. We know that's going to equal 30. So we're going to have 71 is equal to 30 plus C. Now we want to isolate C to solve for it. To do that, we're going to subtract 30 from each side. 71 minus 30 is going to leave us with 41. So now we have 41 is equal to C, and our answer will be 41. Here's an example of when you should use your graphing calculator on the SAT math section. If you take a look at question 14, it states what is one of the solutions to the given equation. Now you could solve this without a graphing calculator by factoring, but it's really a smarter choice just to go ahead and use the graphing calculator. Now, as you can see here, this is Desmos, and you're going to have essentially a version of Desmos on the Blue Book SAT, on the new digital SAT. Now, what I recommend doing is you just go ahead and put in this equation into the graphing calculator. Now, keep in mind, you want to substitute out Z or any other variable they put in there for X. And once you do that, you see that you have your equation graphed out. And then since it's set equal to 0, all you have to do is find where it equals 0. And you can see that that's at negative 12 and at 2. So you have 2 potential answers here. One is negative 12, and that would be correct. And the other answer is 2, and that would also be correct. So you could put in one of either of those answers, but I want to quickly touch on why I think it's smart to use the graphing calculator here instead of actually factor this out yourself. If you're factoring this out yourself, the chances of you making a mistake go up versus if you use a graphing calculator. Now keep in mind, using the graphing calculator that's built into the digital SAT only takes a couple of seconds, right? And factoring may save you a couple of seconds, but in my opinion, it's not worth the risk of you actually making a mistake doing multiplication or doing addition or doing subtraction, anything along those lines. In my opinion, with questions like this, it's just much smarter to go ahead and use the graphing calculator. You avoid making many errors that can be made when factoring. So with questions like these, just use the graphing calculator. Here's how to solve this SAT math question about exponential growth. Question 15 states that bacteria are growing in a liquid growth medium. There were 300,000 cells per milliliter during an initial observation. The number of cells per milliliter doubles every 3 hours. That's important. How many cells per milliliter will there be 15 hours after the initial observation? So our starting amount is 300,000. So let's go ahead and write that down. Now we're going to be using the equation for exponential growth. Keep in mind, we are doubling every 3 hours. Since we're doubling, a 2 is what's going to go in these parentheses. Now, we are going to raise it to the power of 15 over 3. And I'm going to explain why here, and it's very important you pay attention because this equation is commonly tested on the SAT math section. So the reason we are raising it to the power of 15 over 3, and keep in mind we're raising this 2 to the power of 15 over 3, is because we are doubling every 3 hours. Since we're doubling every 3 hours, that gives us that 3 in that denominator of that exponent. Now, we're asked how many there's going to be after 15 hours, which is why we have that 15 in the numerator. Okay, so now as you can see, we have our equation, we put this in our calculator, and we get our answer of D, 9.6 million. Here's how to solve this question about simplifying exponents on the SAT. Question 16 states which expression is equivalent to 6x to the power of 8 times y squared plus 12x squared y squared. What you're going to do here is you're going to look for common factors that you can pull out of each of these. So as we can see, we have y squared in both of them. We also have 6 and 12, which we can pull out as 6 from 12. We also have x to the power of 8 and x squared. Okay, so the way that we're going to do this is we're going to pull 6 out, we're going to pull x squared out, and we're going to pull y squared out. Now, we still have to multiply, get this equation still. Okay, so what do we have to multiply by here? Well, we're going to need x to the power of 6 still to get to that x to the power of 8. Keep in mind that this x squared times this x to the 6 is what's going to give us x to the power of 8. We're still going to have that y squared when we have that 6 out front. So now we have our first term. Now, we know that we also have to have another term because we have 6 here, but we have 12 up here. Okay, so to get to that 12 there, we're going to have to add 2, and we still have x squared and y squared here as well. So we see that we're ultimately going to end up with 6x squared y squared times x to the power of 6 plus 2, which we see is going to be answer choice C. Here's how to better interpret word problems on the SAT math section. Question 17 states a neighborhood consists of a 2-hectare park and a 35-hectare residential area. The total number of trees in the neighborhood is 3,934. The equation 2x plus 35y is equal to 3934 represents this situation. Which of the following is the best interpretation of x in this context? Well, what we have to look at here is what does this total represent? Well, it represents the total amount of trees. Now, we also have to look at what gets us to that total. Okay, we have 35 times y. Well, 35 is our area, but we have to multiply by the number of trees per unit of area. Now, keep in mind, we're asked to solve for x here, so we're looking at the amount of trees per hectare in the park. Okay, so x must be the average number of trees per hectare in the park, which is answer choice A. Here's a tip to solve SAT math questions when your answer choices aren't in point slope form. If we take a look at this question, it says the graph shows the relationship between the number of shares of stock from company A, which is represented as X, and the number of shares of stock from company B, which is represented as Y, that Simone can purchase. Which equation can represent this relationship? And we see we have company B and company A, and obviously we have the correct correspondence of X to A and Y to B, so that's good to know. Now, in this case, I see that A and C both are in point slope form. So I'm going to go ahead and just check if they're correct since that's the easiest thing to do. So here I see that both of these have y-intercepts that are not correct. I have 12 and 8, but the actual y-intercept is 40. So I can go ahead and get rid of A and I can get rid of C. Now, you could go ahead and convert B and D into point slope form, and there's not an issue with that, but it does take longer than what I'm about to show you. Instead, what you could do is you could know that the slope, which we'll represent as M, is equal to negative A over B when we have our equation set up like this, where we have a coefficient in front of X plus a coefficient in front of Y equals some constant. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check what my slopes are for each one. Okay, so for answer choice B here, we see that our slope would be negative 8, since 8 is our A value, over 12. Okay, and then for our D value, we see that we would have negative 12 over 8. Now I'm going to see what my actual slope is. Okay, my actual slope is I go down 40 and I go over 60. So that'd be negative 40 over 60, which we know we can simplify to negative 4 over 6. Okay, negative 4 over 6 is equal to negative 8 over 12 when we simplify negative 8 over 12. So our answer there is going to be answer choice B. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. Question 19 states circle A has a radius of 3n and circle B has a radius of 129n, where n is a positive constant. The area of circle B is how many times the area of circle A? Well, let's start by finding the area of circle B then. So circle B has a radius of 129n. Now keep in mind the formula for the area of a circle is pi r squared. We know our radius is 129n, and all of that is going to get squared. Now, we have to divide that then by the area of circle A to find out how many times bigger it is. So we know that the radius of circle A is 3n squared. Now, keep in mind that n here is going to end up being squared in both the top and the bottom. Okay, so first thing, it's very obvious that those pi's cancels, and most people will get that. Now, the next thing we need to understand is that 129 squared times n squared is equal to what we have here of 129 times n all to the power of 2. Now, on the bottom then, we end up with 3 squared times n squared as well. And we see that those n squareds are going to cancel. Okay, that's really important to know because now the question becomes very easy and we can just plug it into our calculator. And when we plug into our calculator 129 squared divided by 3 squared, which you can also just know is 9, then you're going to end up with answer choice D. Here's how to avoid this tricky question on the SAT. Question 20 states the frequency table summarizes the 57 data values in a data set. What is the maximum data value in the data set? Now, most people, when they look at this, might think that the answer is 11 because it has the highest frequency, and they think that that's the maximum since it's the highest value in the frequency section of the table. But that's incorrect. The actual answer here is 14. Now, the reason why is because they're asking for the maximum data value. They're not asking for the highest frequency value, okay? That would be 11 because the data value there is 11, but they are asking for the maximum data value, which means our answer has to be 14. Here's how to answer this question about circles on the SAT. Question 21 says a circle in the XY plane has a diameter with endpoints 2, 4, and 2, 14. An equation of this circle is x minus 2 squared plus y minus 9 squared equals r squared, where r is a positive constant. What is the value of r? Okay, what you need to understand here is that this is a question dealing with the circle equation. So it's important you know the circle equation going into the SAT because it is tested fairly often. Now, as far as how you answer this, it's actually pretty easy as long as you can recognize this simple trick. When you're given a circle question, you're given endpoints. Oftentimes, they're endpoints that are specifically designed to make the question easier. So you want to look at them pretty closely. And here what we notice is that we have an X coordinate that is the same in both of these. Sometimes it'll be a Y coordinate that is the same in both. But either way, try to find if you can see either the X coordinates are the same or the Y coordinates are the same because it'll make the question a lot easier. In this case, since our X coordinates are the same, we're going to look at how far apart are our Y coordinates. And we see that from 4 to 14 is a difference of 10. Now keep in mind that the circle has a diameter with these endpoints. Okay, so if the circle is like this, and this is our diameter between our points, and it's 10, well, that means our radius must be 5 because our diameter is double our radius. Okay, so the value of r, and keep in mind that this is the equation of a circle, okay, where r is representing our radius, and we're asked for the value of r, not r squared. The value of r then must be 5. Okay, so our answer is 5. Here's how to solve questions that ask you to convert from radians to degrees on the SAT. Question 22 states the measure of angle r is 2 pi over 3 radians. The measure of angle t is 5 pi over 12 radians greater than the measure of angle r. What is the measure of angle t in degrees? So we have to start by finding the measure of angle t in radians, and then after that we'll convert to degrees. So we know that the angle r is 2 pi over 3 radians. Now we have to add on to that the 5 pi over 12 radians, since 5 pi over 12 is the amount of radians that we are greater than the angle measure of r to get to angle t. From here, we need to have a common denominator in order to add these fractions. So to do that, I'm just going to go, I see 3 and 12. I'm just going to go ahead and make it 12. I know that you could sort of simplify it, but I'm not going to. So I'm going to multiply 3 by 4 to get to 12. And I'm going to multiply 2 by 4, which will give me 8. So now I have 8 pi over 12. Now I can go ahead and add these together, and I'm going to see that that's going to get me 13 pi over 12. Now from here, I need to go ahead and convert 13 pi over 12 into degrees. Now this is really easy, but some people can get tripped up on it if they don't know this trick. In order to convert from radians to degrees, you need to multiply by 180 degrees over pi radians. Now keep in mind that we have radians as our units in here with this 13 pi over 12. So to get rid of those radians, we have to have radians in the denominator right here, which is why we have pi on the bottom. Okay, so when we go ahead and do this, we're going to end up getting rid of our pi on each one. Sorry, I did not mean to erase that. Let me go ahead and put that back. Okay, we're going to end up canceling out those pi's, and we're going to end up with 13 times 180 over 12, which we're going to go ahead and put into our calculator. And once we do that, we're going to see that that turns out to be 195 degrees, which is answer choice C. Here's how to answer questions about converting units on the SAT. Question 23 states a certain town has an area of 4.36 square miles. What is the area in square yards of this town? Now, when you're converting area as your unit, you have to keep in mind that you end up squaring it, right? Since we have square miles and square yards. So when we make this conversion of 1 mile equaling 1,760 yards, what we have to actually do is we have to take our 4.36 square miles, and then we have to actually multiply that by 1760 squared, since we're converting from square miles to square yards. We have to square the unit that we are converting. Okay, and when we do that, we put it in our calculator and we end up with an answer of answer choice D, 13,505,536. Here's how to solve this difficult SAT math question. Question 24 states for line H, the table shows 3 values of X and their corresponding values of Y. Line K is the result of translating line H down 5 units in the XY plane. What is the X-intercept of line K? Well, in order to get to line K, we need to first know the equation for line H. So let's go ahead and find that. So let's start by finding our slope. We see that we go over 5 and we go up 30. So we have 30 over 5 as our slope. So let's go ahead and write that down. We're going to get 30 over 5, which we know is equal to 6, is equal to our slope, which we'll call m. Now, in order to solve for our full equation, we're going to go ahead and put in some of these points to get our y-intercept. Okay, so we see that x is 18 when y is 1. So y is 130. So we're going to have 130 is equal to 6 times 18 plus some constant b. Now let's go ahead and solve for this. So 6 times 18 is going to give us 108. So let's go ahead and subtract 108 from each side here. 130 minus 108 is going to leave us with 22 is equal to b. Okay, so now we have our equation. So let's go ahead and write out our equation. All right, so we have y is equal to 6x plus 22. Now, we don't use this to find our answer yet because we have to keep in mind that line H is translated down 5 units. So if we're going down 5 units, instead of plus 22, we would have plus 17. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in that plus 17. Okay, so now we have our equation for line H. Now we can go ahead and find our x-intercept. Well, where's our x-intercept? That is where y is equal to 0. So let's go ahead and take out y. We'll put in 0. Now all we got to subtract 17 from both sides. Okay, when we do that, we're going to end up with negative 17 is equal to 6x. Now we're going to go ahead and divide both sides by 6, and we're going to get that x is equal to negative 17 over 6, which we see is going to be answer choice D. Here's a great example of an SAT question that is made way easier by using the graphing calculator that is available on the digital SAT. Question 25 says in the xy plane, the graph of the equation y equals negative x squared plus 9x minus 100 intersects the line y equals c at exactly 1 point. What is the value of c? Now, the key thing here is that it intersects at exactly 1 point, which is what is going to allow us to do this super easily using Desmos. So as you can see, what I did here is I went ahead and I plugged in this equation into Desmos. Now, as you can see, from this negative x squared and also from the graph, it's going to open down. So in order for us to intersect at exactly 1 point with the equation y equals c, that's going to have to happen right at this maximum value. So if we take a look at the graph, all we got to do is find that point. We see that point is negative 79.75. We just have to match that up with one of our answer choices now. Now I see with our answer choices, they're all negative, but this is obviously going to be way too small a value. Negative 100 we know is not equal to negative 79.75. Negative 481 over 4 would be something below negative 100, so it can't be correct, and our answer would have to be C. Here's how to make this really difficult SAT math question much easier. If you take a look at question 26, it states for each real number r, which of the following points lies on the graph of each equation in the xy plane for the given system? Now, if you see stacked equations like this, oftentimes you'll be looking to sort of add or subtract to get to your answer. But in this case, since we're asked for which of the following points lies on the graph of each equation, what we're actually going to do is check if something lies in the first equation, if it also will be a solution to the second equation. So the way we're going to do this is, in this case, we have 2x plus 3y equals 7. We have 10x plus 15y equals 35. I'm going to look for proportions or ratios here. I see that to get from 7 to 35, I'd be multiplying by 5. I see to get from 2 to 10, I'd multiply by 5. I see to get from 3 to 15, I would multiply by 5. So in this case, I know that since all of those numbers, if they're multiplied by 5, will get me that next equation. I know that if a solution set it works on the first equation, it will also be true on the second equation, right? So now in this case, I only have to actually check on one of the equations. And if it is true, then it means that it will work for the other equation as well. So that's going to save me half the time. Now, the next important thing to help you here is the order at which you're going to check these, because the reason this question is so difficult is because it's time consuming. It's not necessarily that is extremely complex, but the real only way to check these is substitution, which is obviously not ideal at all. Substitution takes a very long time, but thankfully we already gotten rid of half the work. Let's be smart about the way we go about this. So what I'm going to look for here is which of these answer choices I would start with. Because if you start with the wrong answer choices, oftentimes it's going to be a little bit more lengthy to figure out that it's actually wrong. And the reason why is because typically the correct answer choices will just fit nicely. It's just kind of the way it works usually, most of the time, not always, but most of the time. So the way that I'm going to choose which answer choice to actually substitute in first here is I'm going to look for things that will cancel out. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is, since I see 3 out of my 4 answer choices are dealing with sort of denominators of 2 or 3, I'm going to be working with this first equation. Okay, and I would usually pick that one anyways, just because it's smaller numbers than sort of 10, 15, and 35. So that's where I'm going to be checking these possible solutions. Now, the next thing I'm going to look at is which ones will cancel out nicely, right? And the way that I look at that is I'm going to look for x values that are divided by 2 since I have this 2, and I'm going to look for y values that are divided by 3 because I have that 3. Okay, so I see here my x values are over 2. Okay, so that is one that I would probably start with. And if I look at if I look at number C, I see that in this y value, I have ones that are over 3. So that's the one that I would check next. And then I have D and A, and I'd probably just check D third and then A fourth. I'm checking A fourth because it's the most complex. I'm checking D third because it doesn't have something that nicely cancels out. Okay, so from here, this is the order that I would check these in on a substitution question. Now, from this point, I would just go ahead and start substituting. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to have 2 multiplied by negative 3r over 2 plus 7 over 2. And then we are also going to have that plus 3 times y. We know that y is going to be r, so plus 3r is going to equal 7. Now let's find out if this is true. So we can go ahead and cancel this 2 out with this 2 and that 2 out as well with this 2 because we know that we would distribute this. Okay, so once we do that, we end up with negative 3r plus 7, and then plus 3r is equal to 7. Now we have a negative 3r and a plus 3r, which will cancel out to 0. So we're going to end up with 7 is equal to 7. Okay, we end up with 7 is equal to 7. Now, is that true? Yes. So is that a solution? Yes. So is our answer B? Yes. Here's a really difficult SAT math question made super easy. Question 27 states the perimeter of an equilateral triangle is 624 centimeters. The height of the triangle is k times root 3 centimeters, where k is a constant. What is the value of k? Well, if we go ahead and draw this out, it's going to make us a lot easier to visualize. So we have our equilateral triangle. We have our height, which is going to form a right angle there. Since it's equilateral, we know that we have side lengths 60 and 60. And we also know that since we have a 90-degree angle and a 60-degree angle, this angle has to be 30 degrees. The next thing we know is that our perimeter is 624. Okay, and that's perimeter. Since we have an equilateral triangle, if we divide it by 3, we're going to get our side lengths. So that's going to be 208 as our side length. Now, the next thing to note is that we have our height in k times root 3. Now, this is important because when we have a 60, 30, 90 triangle, we know that the value here must actually be k. And the reason why, if I go ahead and draw this out very quickly, okay, is that in a 60, 30, 90 triangle, which I'll go ahead and just put those numbers there so you can recognize them, and you should try to memorize this for the SAT. If you have side length x there, you're going to have side length x times root 3 there, and you're going to have 2x here. So in order to actually solve for the value of k, I just have to divide this 208 by 2 to get the value of k right here. Okay, so 208 over 2 is going to leave me with 104 as my answer. And I'll just go ahead and put 104 as the value of k. Here's how to solve this oddly worded SAT math question. Question 1 states that Tilly earns P dollars for every W hours of work. Which expression represents the amount of money in dollars Tilly earns for 39 W hours of work? Well, we know that she's earning P dollars per every W hours of work. And we know that we can set that proportion equal to the amount that she's earning per 39 W hours of work. And now on our numerator, we'll just have that labeled as x, and that's what we need to solve for here. So to isolate x, we'll multiply both sides by 39w to isolate x. So now we have 39w times p all over w is equal to x. Now we see our w's are going to cancel, and we're going to be left with 39p. Keep in mind that that is p, so I'm going to put it in parentheses just to make it clear. So 39 times p is equal to x. And we see that that is going to be answer choice A. Here's how to solve this seemingly simple SAT math problem. Question 2 states, for a training program, Juan rides his bike at an average rate of 5.7 minutes per mile. Which function m models the number of minutes it will take Juan to ride X miles at this rate? Now, the reason this question can be troublesome for some people taking the SAT is because it really does deal in details. So let's go ahead and focus on the details that we need to pay attention to. In this case, we are asked for the model of the number of minutes it will take to ride X miles at this rate. Now, we have to keep in mind that our units we're given for our rate is 5.7 minutes per mile. So this is actually very easy, but you have to pay attention to the details, like I said. Now, we're modeling the amount of time it takes him to ride X amount of miles. So we're already given that ratio, and our answer is D. M of X equals 5.7X. You have to make sure here that you're paying attention to the details, because some people would fall for the misconception that you have to convert minutes per mile into miles per minute or miles per hour, and you do not need to do that in this case. Your answer is, here's an SAT math tip that can save you a ton of time. Question 3 states the solution to the given system of equations is x, y. What is the value of y? Since we want to solve for y and we see that we have stacked equations, we're going to look for a way to get rid of x. To do that in this case, I see we can add these two equations together, because 3x plus negative 3x is going to give us 0x. So what we're going to end up with then is y is equal to 12 plus negative 6, which is the same as 12 minus 6, which is 6. So our answer there will be B for the value of y. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. Question 4 states the equation gives the speed s in miles per hour of a certain car t seconds after it began to accelerate. What is the speed in miles per hour of the car 5 seconds after it began to accelerate? Well, given our equation, we want to know how fast is it going 5 seconds after it begins to accelerate. We know that the amount of time after it begins to accelerate is represented as t, so we plug in 5 for t, and we're going to have our speed is equal to 40 plus 3 times 5. 3 times 5 is going to be 15. 15 plus 40 is going to equal 55, and our answer will be answer choice D. Here's how to solve this question that deals with the Pythagorean theorem on the SAT. Question 5 states, for the right triangle shown, A equals 4 and B equals 5, which expression represents the value of C? Well, when you're given a triangle question on the SAT, it's often helpful to go ahead and label your sides. So as you can see, we go ahead and do that. We're asked for the value of C. We're going to use the Pythagorean theorem, which means that we're going to take A squared plus B squared and make it equal to C squared. And when you do that, you're going to get your value of C as the square root of 4 squared plus 5 squared, which we see is going to be answer choice D. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. Question 6 states, what is the solution to the given equation? We have 4x plus 5 equals 165. We want to isolate x, so we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. We're going to end up with 160 is equal to 4x. Then we'll divide both sides by 4 to isolate x. When we do that, we have 160 over 4, which is going to end up giving us 40 as our value of x. So our answer there is 40. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 30 seconds. The question states the x-intercept of the graph is x0. What is the value of x? In this case, since we're asked for the value of x and 0, we know that our y-coordinate is 0. At y being 0, we have our x value of 7, so the value of x is 7. Here's how to solve this SAT math question that deals with slope-intercept form. The function f is defined by f of x equals 1/10 x minus 2. What is the y-intercept of the graph of y equals f of x in the xy plane? Well, all that this means is you have an equation y equals 1/10 x minus 2. All you got to do is find the y-intercept. Your y-intercept is where x is 0. If you substitute in 0 for x, you're going to end up with y is equal to -2. So as you can see, your answer has to be where x is 0 and where y is -2, and your answer has to be answer choice B. Here's how to solve this SAT math question that deals with transformations. Question 9 says the function f is defined by f of x equals 7x cubed in the xy plane. The graph of y equals g of x is the result of shifting the graph of y equals f of x down 2 units. Which equation defines the function g? Well, the function g of x is the same as f of x, except we are moving it down 2 units, which means that g of x will equal 7x cubed minus 2. We can see that that is answer choice D. Here's how to solve this system of equations question really easily. The question states which ordered pair x, y is a solution to the given system of equations. Now, as we can see, we have one equation, x plus 7 equals 10. We know that in that case, we can subtract 7 from both sides, and we're going to get that x is equal to 3. Now that we have the value of x, we can go ahead and plug that in on our second equation. We will end up with 3 plus 7 squared, which is equal to 10 squared, which is equal to 100, is equal to y. So we know that it will have to be 3 and 100, which is answer choice A. Here's how to solve this SAT math question that deals with adding and subtracting variables with exponents. The question states which expression is equivalent to 7x cubed plus 7x in parentheses minus 6x cubed minus 3x. What we're going to go ahead and do here is distribute this minus sign to both that 6x cubed and that minus 3x. Once we do that, we're going to go ahead and combine like terms. So we have 7x minus negative 3x, which is the same as plus 3x. And then we also have a 7x cubed minus 6x cubed. Now keep in mind that these are going to get summed together. I just didn't have room on one line to write them, but that is ultimately going to give us 10x plus our x cubed value for a total of x cubed plus 10x, which we see as answer choice A. So A is our answer there. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. Question 12 states the function p is defined by p of n is equal to 7n cubed. What is the value of n when p of n is equal to 56? Well, when p of n is equal to 56 means we just substitute in that 56 for p of n in our equation, and we get 56 is equal to 7n cubed. Next thing we're going to do is try to isolate n, because that's what we need to solve for, is the value of n. Now we got 56 over 7. That's going to leave us with 8 is equal to n cubed. Now from here, you should hopefully be able to recognize that if we take the third root of each side, we'll be able to isolate the value of n. And we will also have the third root of 8, which is 2. So 2 is equal to the value of n, and our answer will be A. Here's how to solve SAT math questions that deal with intersecting lines. This question states, in the figure shown, line C intersects parallel lines S and T. What is the value of X? Well, since we have parallel lines S and T with something intersecting them, we know that this angle next to X also has to be 110. The next thing that we can notice is that since we have this straight line here, that has to sum to 180. So we can go ahead and do 180 minus 110, and that will give us our answer for the value of X as 70 degrees. So our answer will be 70. Here's how to solve questions that ask you to find the mean of a data set on the SAT. Question 14 states a list of 10 data values is shown. What is the mean of these data? Since the SAT has gone digital, you will be able to use a calculator on each part of the test as of the filming of this video. So in that case, if you're asked to find the mean, I will 100% recommend that you use a calculator exclusively, because you can. And it makes much more sense to find the mean of a data set using a calculator rather than doing it by handwritten math, because you're less likely to make an error. So what you would do is you would take all of these values and you would sum them together. And then you would take that sum and you would divide it by the number of values, and that will get you your mean. So that is how you would solve this question. And once you do that, you will end up with an answer of 10. Here's how to answer this question that asks about the exponential growth formula on the SAT. Question 15 states the equation E of t is equal to 5 times 1.8 to the power of t gives the estimated number of employees at a restaurant where t is the number of years since the restaurant opened. Which of the following is the best interpretation of the number 5 in this context? The number 5 is our initial value. It is our starting value. It is the amount that when t is 0, we will have, because any number raised to the power of 0 is 1. So this is our initial amount, and that is a very important thing to know for the SAT math section. Let's go ahead and run through our answer choices. We have A, the estimated number of employees when the restaurant opened. That is the correct answer. Here's how to solve this SAT math question super quickly. Question 16 states, what is the minimum value of the given function? We have g of x equals x squared plus 55. Now, since we have an x squared value, we don't have any sort of minus 5x value or anything like that. We know that any number that is squared is going to be positive, and that's just being added to 55. So our minimum value will be 55. Now, if you come across a question like this and it's a little bit more complicated, for example, say that the question was something like x squared minus 12x plus 55, then in that case, what you should do is you should go ahead and graph it. Use on the digital SAT, you pretty much have access to Desmos within sort of the testing environment, and you should use that and then just find the minimum on the graph. But in this case, this is a trick you can use since you know that x squared will always be positive. You're not subtracting anything as x changes. So in this case, this is a trick you can use to move faster. Here's something you need to know about exponential and linear functions for the SAT. Question 17 states each year the value of an investment increases by 0.49% of its value the previous year. Which of the following functions best models how the value of the investment changes over time? Now, since it is dependent on the value of the investment the previous year, since we are going up by 0.49% each year, that is exponential growth. So that is increasing exponential. Now, I want to cover these other three options as well so you know them and you can answer them correctly on the SAT if they come up on a different question. So let's go over it. Increasing exponential. In this case, since we're going up by 0.49% of our previous year's value, the number that would be within our exponential growth equation for the growth rate would be 1.0049. Now, what if that number, instead of being above 1, what if it was below 1, right? Let's say that our rate, instead of being that, our rate was 0.09. Well, 0.09 is a decreasing exponential function. So in that case, it would be A. Now, what if instead of being dependent on the previous year's value, it was independent of the previous year's value? So in that case, let's say that we just went up by $50. So we went up by $50 each day. Right? It's a dollar sign. We're going up by $50 each day. Well, that would be increasing linear. And what if we were going down by $50 each day? That'd be decreasing linear. If we are not dependent on the previous year's value, then it's likely going to be, then it will be linear. Now, if we are dependent on the previous year's value, then it will be exponential. And then you can use the rate of growth to determine if it's increasing or decreasing. Here's how to solve this SAT math question about percentages. Question 18 states the population of Greenville increased by 7% from 2015 to 2016. If the 2016 population is K times the 2015 population, what is the value of K? Well, if we're increasing by 7%, then the way we would represent this is the 2015 population, which we're just going to label as P, multiplied by K, which is how many times we are bigger than the 2015 population, will give us our new population. Now we have to solve for K, and we know we're increasing by 7%. And since we're increasing by 7%, we would represent that as 1.07. So our answer will be answer choice C. Here's how to answer this tricky SAT math question about exponents. The question states, which expression is equivalent to a to the power of 11 over 12 where a is positive? Now, the first thing I would immediately check for is if we have a to the 11 over 12 just rewritten in the same format, which would be the 12th root of a to the 11th power, but we see that that's not the case. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and multiply by 12 over 12 to this exponent up here. And the reason why we're doing that is because I see that all of these have 132 on the power, on the, what a is being raised to the power as. And I know to get to 132, I ultimately have to multiply by 12. So we're going to go ahead and multiply by 12 over 12. Now, why is this okay? Well, it's okay because we're multiplying by 1. So we're taking that 11, 12, we're multiplying by 1, so it would stay the same. We're just making it a larger number. So when we do that, 11 times 12, we know is going to equal 132. And we know in our denominator, 12 times 12 will equal 144. So now we're going to find our answer choice. It will be answer choice B, which is 144th root of a to the power of 132. Here's how to solve this SAT math question that deals with an inequality. The question states an event planner is planning a party. It costs the event planner a one-time fee of $35. Now, keep in mind when you're dealing with a word problem like this, you want to start writing out equations as you come across the numbers. So in this case, we have a one-time fee of $35. That's not reoccurring, so I can just go ahead and add that. To rent the venue and $10.25 per attendee. So it's going to be, our cost will be plus 10.25 per attendee, which I'm just going to call A for now, unless I'm given a variable it needs to be. The event planner has a budget of $200. What is the greatest number of attendees possible without exceeding the budget? So since we cannot exceed the budget, it has to be less than or equal to 200. Now from here, I want to go ahead and solve for the maximum amount of attendees I can have without going over. So I need to solve for A. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 35 from both sides. That will cancel to 0. Subtract 35 here. Okay, so now I'm going to end up with 10.25a, and then 200 minus 35 is going to end up giving us 165. From here, I will divide both sides by 10.25. Okay, so I divide both sides by 10.25. Now, 165 divided by 10.25 is going to give me 16.09. Now, since I know I can't have, a partial amount of a person and I can't go over my budget, since that gives me 16.09, I know that A must equal 16. Okay. And I got that by using my calculator on the new digital SAT. You can use your calculator on the section. So our answer will be A is equal to 16. So our answer would just be 16. Here's how to solve this SAT math question that deals with absolute value. Question 21 states if the absolute value of 4x minus 4 is equal to 112, what is the positive value of x minus 1? Now keep in mind here that when you have an absolute value question like this, you can have two answers for the value of x, but in this case, we are asked for the positive value of x minus 1. So there is only one right answer here, but there are two answers for the value of x. So let's go ahead and talk about why that is and how you can approach this question. So the first thing I would do is I would do 4x minus 4 is equal to 112. Then I will add 4 to both sides. Add 4 to both sides. This will cancel to 0. 112 plus 4 will give us 116. So I can just go ahead and write this as 4x is equal to 116. And then from there, I divide both sides by 4. And we are going to get that x is equal to, let's see what that is in my calculator. That'll be 29. Okay, so x is equal to 29. Now, we see that if we plug in 29 for x, we're going to get 29 minus 1. That's positive. That's 28. So 28 will be our answer. Okay, so 28 is our answer. Now, I want to show you what would happen if we came across the negative number first, okay? Because the other way to get x, because there are two values that x can be here, is you would do negative, and I'm just going to actually erase this so you can see how you would do this, right? So you saw me get one of the values of x. There is another value of x, however, because when you have absolute value like this, you also have to do this to find the other solution. Okay, so negative 4x minus 4, you distribute your negative sign. Okay, and notice how I'm distributing that negative sign to everything that was within that absolute value. And that gets us negative 4x plus 4 is equal to 112. We will subtract 4 and we will get 108. Okay, so now we have negative 4x is equal to 108. I'm just going to go ahead and write that neater. Negative 4x is equal to 108. We divide both sides by negative 4. Divide both sides by negative 4. Okay, and we see that x is going to equal 108 divided by negative 4, which if we go ahead and put that in our calculator, 108 divided by negative 4, that's going to give us negative 27. Okay, and then in that case, you would see negative 27 minus 1 is negative 28. That is not a positive solution, which is why our answer there has to be 28. Okay, so it's important that you understand absolute value on the SAT math section, which is why I wanted to go over this, even though we got to the answer sooner without having to get this other value for x. Here's how to solve this difficult SAT math question that deals with volume. Question 22 states that a cube has an edge length of 68 inches. A solid sphere with a radius of 34 inches is inside the cube, such that the sphere touches the center of each face of the cube. To the nearest cubic inch, what is the volume of the space in the cube that is not taken up by the sphere? And just a quick note, anytime you have something that is underlined on the SAT, pay close attention to it because they are underlining it for a reason. Because in a sense, it's almost trying to trick you. They're telling you, hey, this is important. It sticks out from the rest because it is different and you need to pay attention to it. So anytime you see that, pay close attention to it. Now, since we're asked to find the volume of the space in the cube not taken up by the sphere, we have to calculate first the volume of the cube, then we have to subtract the volume of the sphere. So let's start with the volume of the cube. We know that a cube has an edge length of 68 inches. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and have 68 inches. Now the volume of a cube, okay, all the side lengths are the same. So that's going to be 68 to the power of 3 is the volume of the cube. Now let's subtract the volume of the sphere. So the volume of a sphere is 4/3 times pi times the radius cubed. We know our radius is 34 inches, so I'll go ahead and put 34 in parentheses, cubed. Now all you have to do is put this into your calculator and you will ultimately get your answer of 149,796. So our answer there will be answer choice A. Here's how to solve this question on the SAT about circles super easily. Question 23 states, what is the diameter of the circle in the XY plane with this equation? Now, if you know the circle equation, you know that this value of 16 is equal to the radius squared. Now, if 16 is equal to the radius squared, all you have to do is take the square root of the radius squared to isolate the radius. The square root of 16 we know is 4, so we know that 4 is equal to the radius. To get the diameter, we know that the diameter, which we'll just call D, is equal to 2 times the radius, so that's going to be 2 times 4, which will equal 8, and our answer there will be answer choice B. Here's a trick to make this difficult SAT math question super simple. Question 24 states, for the exponential function f, the value of f of 1 is k, where k is a constant. Which of the following equivalent forms of the function f shows the value of k as the coefficient or the base? Well, in this case, all of our answer choices are in the exponential growth formula or the exponential growth equation. So our coefficients are going to be 50, 80, 128, and 204.8. Now, in order for the value of f of 1 to be that in a situation where we have exponential growth like this, we need to have the exponent be 0. Because if the exponent is 0 and we're multiplying it by 1.6, that's going to give us 1, which means that our value will just be that of the coefficient. So f of x will equal the value of the coefficient when x is equal to 1, which is what we need. So all we got to do is find the answer choice where we are raising it to the power of 0. So 1 plus 1 would be 2, so we can go ahead and get rid of a. If we just have 1, that's not 0. If we have 1 minus 1, we get that equal to 0 as the exponent. So our answer there has to be answer choice C. And I will just quickly show you how this works just to prove it to you in case you are in disbelief. 128 times 1.6 raised to the power of 0. Well, 1.6 to the power of 0 is going to be 1. So that will equal 128 when we have f of 1. We know that we have 128 as our coefficient, therefore our answer has to be C. So there's just some quick proof in case you were doubting me. Here's a really difficult SAT math question made super simple just by knowing the exponential growth formula. So question 25 states a model estimates that at the end of each year from 2015 to 2020, the number of squirrels in the population was 150% more than the number of squirrels in the population at the end of the previous year. The model estimates that at the end of 2016, now the reason that I'm underlining this is because I noticed that here we had 2015 to 2020. Now we have 2016. So we are moving 1 year into this growth. There were 180 squirrels in the population. Which of the following equations represents this model where n is the estimated number of squirrels in the population t years after the end of 2015? And t must be less than or equal to 5. Key thing here is they're kind of trying to throw you off with answer choices C and D because we are modeling it after the end of 2015, and that 180 number that they gave us is at the end of 2016. So that's 1 year in. So our initial value is not 180. Our initial value is 72. Now, as far as the rate of increase, they're also trying to throw you off with answer choice A because they know that you're going to see that 150% and think, oh, that's just 1.5, but it's not. You have to keep in mind that it's 150% more than the number of squirrels in the population at the end of the previous year, right? So if we were multiplying by, let's say we're increasing by 50%, then it would be 1.5, but we're not increasing by 50%. We're increasing by 150%, which means we have to multiply that by 2.5. So our answer there has to be B. So if you know the exponential growth formula, this question is really easy. If you don't, you're probably going to get it wrong. Here's one of the most difficult SAT math questions made super simple. Question 26 states that in the given pair of equations, A and B are constants. The graph of the pair of equations in the XY plane is a pair of perpendicular lines. Which of the following pairs of equations also represents a pair of perpendicular lines? So the key thing here is that you understand what perpendicular lines mean. It means that these slopes are negative reciprocals of each other. So for example, if we look at our equations that we are given, we have 5x plus 7y equals 1, ax plus by equals 1. Now, the slope of this first one, I'm going to call m our slope. So m is going to equal negative a over b. Now, the form negative a over b works when you have the form of a coefficient in front of x plus a coefficient in front of y is equal to some constant, which we have in both of these equations, so we can use it. Okay, so that means that our slope is going to equal, let me go ahead and get that, it's going to equal negative 5 over 7. Okay, now our slope for this bottom equation is going to be m is going to equal, well, that's going to have to equal 7 over 5. And how do we know that? Well, we need the opposite sign and the reciprocal. Okay, so that's going to have to be 7 over 5. Let me go ahead and write that a little bit bigger so you can see it better. 7 over 5. Okay, and I'll just draw the arrow that's there. All right, well, if that's going to be 7 over 5, we know that our a value then, well, that must be negative 7. Okay, and the reason we know it has to be negative 7 is because we know that the formula for our slope is negative a over b in this form. Okay, and we know our b value then has to be 5. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and write that down, that our b value is going to equal 5, because we need to know that in order to solve this. Now, the other thing that I think is important to notice here, and that will ultimately help you solve this extremely quickly once you know this trick, is that if you look at our equations up top here, we have negative 7x plus 5y is equal to 1. Now, what I want you to notice here is that when you're dealing with perpendicular lines in this format of, you know, the format where you have them set equal to a constant, right? Notice how we have 5x and 5x. And then notice how we have 7y and 7y. Obviously, they are changed places, right? That coefficient of 7 has now changed from being attached to the y to being attached to the x. And then we have one singular change in sign. So that change in sign, it can be out in front of this a value, or it could also be in front of the b value. But either way, we have that one change in sign. So now that we've noticed that, we can pretty much solve these pretty quickly, right? So if we look at answer choice A, if we were to plug in for A, we know our value of A is negative 7, so we can go ahead and do that. So negative 7. We know that we have the sign change, right? We're switching from that 7 being in front of the Y to being in front of the X, so that part's good. But then we have minus 2 times B. We know that our B value is 5, right? So we're going to end up getting minus 10Y. Now, the problem with that is that we changed both signs. We can only change one of the signs, so A is going to be wrong. And then we look at B, we've got 10x plus 7y. And then down here, we know that our A value is -7. So once again, we're changing the sign. That looks good. And then we got plus 2 times B. We know B is 5, so that's going to end up giving us plus 10y, right? And now we see that both of the coefficient in front of x is now in front of y, coefficient that was in front of y is now in front of x, and we only changed one of the signs, so that means that B has to be our correct answer. Okay, so I know it took a little while for me to explain that, but I wanted to make sure that you guys understand how this works and why this works, because once you understand this trick, you can then apply it and it becomes very, very quick to find the right answer. And also, I will just note that this is one of the more difficult questions on the SAT. So being able to save time by understanding this trick is going to be very, very beneficial, especially for students who are looking to score high in the math section, in particular above 700. Here's what you need to know about calculating the number of real solutions on the SAT math section, along with a problem to help you apply it. Question 27 says, in the equation above, C is a constant. The equation has no real solutions if C is greater than N. What is the least possible value of N? Well, let's start by discussing how you know the number of real solutions. The way you know that for a quadratic equation like this is by using the value of b squared minus 4ac. Now, one thing I want to have you make note of is that in the quadratic equation, it is set equal to 0. That's very important. Okay, so b squared minus 4ac. If that value is greater than 0, then that means that you're going to have two real solutions, which I'll represent as rs. Now, if b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, then that means you're going to have one real solution. Now, if you can kind of figure out where I'm going with this, b squared minus 4ac, if that is less than 0, then you're going to have no real solutions. Okay, so now that we know this, and we know that in our question, we are asked to find the equation having no real solutions if c is greater than n, we know that we can go ahead and set up this equation. So we know our a value is 1, we know our b value is going to be -34, and we know our c value is just going to be represented as c in this case. So we have b squared, we know b is -34, so we'll go ahead and take that and square it. We're going to subtract 4 times a is 1, and then we'll multiply it by c. Next thing we have to do is we have to set that as less than 0. So -34 squared is going to become 11, I believe, let me just quick check on the calculator, 1156. Okay, so 1156 minus 4c is going to be less than 0. I'm going to go ahead and add 4c to each side. Okay, so I'll add 4c to each side. And then next thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to divide by 4 in order to isolate c so we can get it all alone. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll divide both sides by 4. We'll get that c must be greater than 1156 over 4, which is going to be 289. All right, so now that we have this, we know that c has to be greater than n, okay? And we know that n, if we go ahead and let me just draw this, right? This inequality is going to equal this other inequality of c being greater than n. Well, in that case, n is going to have to equal 289. Okay, so our answer for the least possible value of n is 289. Here's how to answer this SAT math question in under 30 seconds. The question states the line graph shows the percent of cars for sale at a used car lot on a given day by model year. For what model year is the percent of cars for sale the smallest? Well, we see on our y-axis, we have the percent of cars for sale, and we just have to find where that's the smallest. We see that that's in the year 2014, so our answer is going to be answer choice C. Here's how to answer this probability question on the SAT. Question 2 states for a particular machine that produces beads, 29 out of every 100 beads it produces have a defect. A bead produced by the machine will be selected at random. What is the probability of selecting a bead that has a defect? In this case, we are looking for those that have a defect, which we know is 29 out of every 100. So we know that our probability of that must be answer choice C, 29 out of 100. Here's how to answer this question about intersecting lines on the SAT. Question 3 states, in the figure, line M is parallel to line N and line T intersects both lines. What is the value of X? Well, since M and N are parallel and line T is intersecting them, we know that X is going to be the same as the angle X I just drew next to that angle 33. Now, we also know that a semicircle has 180 degrees in it, so all we have to do is 180 degrees minus 33 degrees, and that will give us our answer of 147 degrees as the angle X. So our answer is D. Here's how to find the y-intercept of this graph on the SAT. The question states, what is the y-intercept of the graph shown? All you got to do is find where we're crossing that y-axis where x is 0, and we see that that is at 8, so our answer there is going to be 0, 8. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. The question states the total cost f of x in dollars to lease a car for 36 months from a particular car dealership is given by f of x equals 36x plus 1,000, where x is the monthly payment in dollars. What is the total cost to lease a car when the monthly payment is 400? We know the monthly payments are represented by x, so we can go ahead and substitute 400 in for x, and we will have 36 times 400 plus 1,000, and that will end up giving us our answer of $15,400, which is answer choice C. Here's how to solve this question about perimeters on the SAT. Question 6 states each side of a square has a length of 45. What is the perimeter of a square? Well, we know a square's sides are all the same, so the perimeter will just be 4 times the side length, which we know is 45. We can go ahead and put 4 times 45 in our calculator, or you can just do it in your head, and you're going to get 180 for your answer as the perimeter of the square. Here's how to solve this SAT math question that deals with factoring. Question 7 states, what is the positive solution to the given equation? In order to solve this, we need to ultimately get it set equal to 0. So let's go ahead and do that by multiplying both sides by x plus 6. Once we do that, we have x times x plus 6. We'll also go ahead and subtract 55 from each side so we can set it equal to 0. And now we have our equation. So let's go ahead and distribute this x to this other x to get x squared and then also plus 6x. So now we have x squared plus 6x minus 55 is equal to 0. Now let's go ahead and factor. So I'm looking for factors of negative 55 that will sum to have positive 6. So when I do that, I can think we've got 11 and 5. I need to keep it positive. So I'm going to have x plus 11 and I would have to have x minus 5. Now we factor, we have to keep in mind that we can't just pick either one. We need to have the positive solution to the given equation. So we know that x plus 11 will ultimately mean that x could equal negative 11, but we can't choose that because that's negative. We need to have x equals 5. So our answer there would be 5. Here's how to translate this word problem into an equation and solve it on the SAT. Question 8 states an object travels at a constant speed of 12 centimeters per second. At this speed, what is the time in seconds that it will take for the object to travel 108 centimeters? Well, this is pretty easy. The distance that you're traveling is 108 centimeters. You want to know how long it's going to take you. You are traveling at 12 centimeters per second. Okay, you're multiplying by your time in seconds. Okay, we'll have t represented as time. In order to solve for t then, all you got to do is divide 108 by 12 to get your answer. When you do that, you're going to end up with your answer of 9, which is answer choice A. Here's how to solve this question about comparing the mean of two data sets on the SAT. Question 9 states the list gives the values in data sets X and Y. Which statement correctly compares the mean of data set X with the mean of data set Y? Well, let's go ahead and find the means of both. We'll start with data set X. So the mean is going to be the sum of these numbers divided by 4. So 5 plus 9 plus 9 plus 13. Now I see I have these same numbers in data set Y. Now I also have a 27 added onto data set Y. Now, since we've got these same 4 numbers in data set X as in Y, and then we are just adding in 27, we know 27 has to be greater than whatever the mean is in data set X because the maximum value in data set X is 13 and 27 is higher than that. So it's going to have to bring that mean up. Therefore, we know that data set Y has to have a larger mean than data set X without even having to calculate the means just by looking at this. So we know our answer there has to be B. If you want to calculate the means for this, you can, but you could also just recognize that 27 is larger than the maximum data set X. Other than that, they're the same. Therefore, data set Y has to be a larger mean. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. Question 10 states a rocket contained 467,000 kilograms of propellant before launch. Exactly 21 seconds after launch, 362,105 kilograms of the propellant remained. On average, approximately how much propellant in kilograms did the rocket burn each second after launch? Well, our starting amount of propellant is 467,000. We then have to subtract how much propellant remained, and then we have to divide all of that by the amount of seconds that this took place, which is 21 seconds. Once we put that into our calculator, we're going to end up with answer choice A, and that'll give us exactly or approximately how much propellant in kilograms the rocket burned each second after launch. Here's how to use ratios to move faster on the SAT math section. Question 11 states if 4x plus 2 equals 12, what is the value of 16x plus 8? Whenever I see a question like this, I'm always looking for proportions. I see 4x plus 2. If I multiply that by 4, I get 16x plus 8. So all I got to do is multiply 12 by 4. 12 times 4 is going to equal 48. So my answer is 48. My answer there is B. This way I don't have to solve for x, so I get it done faster. Here's how to interpret a common situation on the SAT math section. Question 12 states an object is kicked from a platform. The equation h equals negative 4.9t squared plus 7t plus 9 represents the situation where h is the height of the object above the ground in meters t seconds after it is kicked. Which number represents the height in meters from which the object was kicked? Okay, a question on the SAT deals with something falling from some certain height, whether it's thrown off, kicked off, launched off, things like that. And the way that it's usually represented is in an equation like this. In this case, we're asked which number represents the height from which the object was kicked. Well, the height at which it is kicked is when time is at 0, right? It's only kicked once the time is 0. So that means t would be 0, which makes this 0, which makes that 0, which means that 9 is the height when it is first kicked. So our answer there has to be D. Here's the type of question where you should use Desmos on the digital SAT. Question 13 states that f of x is equal to 4x squared minus 50x plus 126. The given equation defines the function f for what value of x does f of x reach its minimum. If I saw a question on like this on the new digital SAT, I would use Desmos for it 100%. I would just check where the minimum is. So I'll go ahead and show you how you would do that. All you got to do, pull up Desmos. You can do this on the digital SAT. It's built into the College Board's Blue Book. So you put in the equation, you look for where the minimum is. The minimum's at 6.25 for the X value of the minimum. So your answer there would be 6.25. So this is a great example of the type of question where it really does make sense to use Desmos on the new digital SAT. Here's how to set up and solve the system of inequalities question on the SAT. Question 14 states a small business owner budgets $2,200 to purchase candles. The owner must purchase a minimum of 200 candles to maintain the discounted pricing. If the owner pays $4.90 per candle to purchase small candles and $11.60 per candle to purchase large candles, okay, I'm using S for small candles, I'll use L for large candles. What is the maximum number of large candles the owner can purchase to stay within the budget and maintain the discounted pricing? So we only have 2 candle sizes, so we can go ahead and determine the total number of our candles will be L plus S. I want to quickly point something out. You saw as I read through this, I was writing out the system of inequalities as I go. If you encounter a question on the SAT math section that is 3 lines or longer, it is most likely going to end up being a question that involves either system of inequalities, 2 equations that you need to set up, possibly something to do with converting units or something along those lines. But either way, my general recommendation is if a question is 3 lines or longer on the SAT math section, you try to write down units, variables, and obviously like the coefficients in front of certain units, any sort of constants, things like that. Basically, you want to start writing your equation as you read through the word problem, because otherwise, if I hadn't written down these 2 inequalities, I would have to go back and do a second read through. So this is a strategy that I use and that I recommend you use to save time. That being said, let's go ahead and solve for the number of large candles. One thing I want to point out here is you'll notice I'm solving for L right away, not S. That's because I don't give about S. I don't care about S at all, right? We don't need S, we just need L. So that's all we're going to focus on solving. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and subtract, we're going to subtract L from each side because we want to isolate S. And the reason why is we want to substitute in for S, something with L. Okay, so let's go ahead and get S by subtracting L from both sides. We get 200 minus L is going to be less than or equal to S. Now we can go ahead and substitute in. Okay, so let's go ahead and substitute that in for S. Okay, so we got 4.9 times S, which we know we can represent as 200 minus L. Okay, and keep in mind that we still have a plus 11.6 L right here. So let's go ahead and distribute the 4.9 to the negative L into the 200. 4.9 times 200 is going to give us 980. Okay, so equals 980. And then we're going to have minus 4.9 L and plus 11.6 L, which will give us plus 6.7 L in total. Okay, because 11.6 L minus 4.9 L gives us that plus 6.7 L. Now that all is still going to be 2200 over there. We'll subtract 980 from both sides, minus 980. That's going to end up leaving us with 1220. 20 is going to be greater than or equal to 6.7 L. Okay, from there, we would divide both sides by 6.7. So we'll go ahead and do that. Divide both sides by 6.7. Okay, 1220 divided by 6.7. Go ahead and put that in my calculator. That's going to be 182.09. Okay, 182 point, I'll just call it 0.1. Okay, it's 0.09. All right, now we have to see that L has to be less than or equal to that. Okay, so in order to be less than 182.1, we would go to 182. We can't have 0.1 of something. Okay, so our answer there, in this case, we can't because we have 0.1 of a candle, right? So our answer there would be 182. So we can go ahead and write that down and we'll circle that. So 182, there's our answer. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 30 seconds. Question 15 states in the linear function f of 0 is equal to 8 and f of 1 is equal to 12. Which equation defines f? Immediately I see I have that f of 0 is equal to 8, which means that my y-intercept is 8. I see all of these are in slope-intercept form, and I see the intercept of C and B is not 8, so I can get rid of them. Next thing I see as the difference between A and D is the slope. If I look at my slope, I'm going over 1 and I'm going up by 4, so my slope is 4, so my answer there has to be answer choice D. Here's how to interpret this SAT math problem. Question 16 states that the function f of w is equal to 6w squared gives the area of a rectangle in square feet. If its width is w feet and its length is 6 times its width, which of the following is the best interpretation of f of 14 is equal to 1,176? All right, well, ultimately this function is giving us our area. We know that w represents our width. So f of 14 means that our width is 14 feet. And then that 1,176 means that when our width is 14 feet, our area of our rectangle is 1,176 feet. That's answer choice A, so A is our correct answer there. Here's how to answer this SAT math problem about arc lengths by using ratios and proportions. Question 17 states that the circle shown has center O, circumference 144 pi, and diameters PR and QS. The length of arc PS is twice the length of arc PQ. So we'll call arc PQ X. And the length of arc PS we know is twice that. So we'll call that 2X. I'll go ahead and mark those lengths here. Okay, the next thing we are asked is what is the length of arc QR? Well, arc QR is going to be the same length as arc PS. So I'm going to go ahead and focus on solving for PS just because it's easier for me to show on this video. So if we go ahead and draw this, we see that it's x plus 2x, so that's going to be 3x. We also know our circumference is 144 pi. If our circumference is 144 pi, our circumference is that whole line around the circle, right? It's all of this, that line right there. Okay, so if our circumference is 144 pi, then that semicircle, right, that semi-arc is going to be 72 pi. Okay, so then we know that 72 pi is equal to 3x, right? Because it's the sum of that 2x and that x. Therefore, you would know that PS, which is the same as QR, okay, is 2/3 of that. Okay, so it'd just be 72 pi, times 2/3. Okay, and when you put that in your calculator, or you can just do it in your head, you're going to end up with 48 pi as the value for Q to R. You could have also done it by doing that 72 pi is equal to 3x, okay, and then solving for x and then taking it in and multiplying it by 2. But easier way is just to recognize that, hey, this is a ratio, right? It's 2/3. 2/3 times 72 pi gets you 48 pi. It's a lot easier than going through and solving for x. So I wanted to put the x down there just so you guys could see and understand sort of how it breaks down. But ultimately, it's a lot better if you can just recognize, hey, this is a ratio. We've got half of this whole circumference is 72 pi. We are taking 2/3 of that to get arc of QR. So answer there is B. Here's a couple tips for the SAT math section to help you be more efficient. I'm going to illustrate them with question 18. Question 18 states a company that provides whale watching tours takes groups of 21 people at a time. The company's revenue is $80 per adult. So I'm going to represent that as 80A, and $60 per child, which I'll represent as 60 times C. If the company's revenue for one group consisting of adults and children was $1,440. Okay, so that's going to be the sum of these, the value of the number of adults times the cost per adult plus the number of kids times cost per kid. How many people in the group were children? Well, we know that it consists of adults and children, so we can represent that as A plus C. As you can see, I did one read through and I have both my equations, so that's tip number one here. As you read through an SAT math problem that is 3 or more lines, as you can see in this case, it was 6. That's why I knew that I wanted to use this sort of tip or trick. Anytime you've got an SAT math problem longer than 3 lines, try to write out the equation or the system of equations as you read through. That way you save time by not having to do a reread through, right afterwards to find your variables and things like that. Okay, that being said, let's go ahead and keep talking because there's more tips to come here. Now, keep in mind, we are asked to solve for how many people in the group were children. So you could go through and you could solve for A first and then get to C, but you shouldn't do that. You should go ahead and solve for C first. You want the most direct path to your answer on the SAT math section because it's a timed exam and you want to be efficient. So we're going straight for C. We don't want to get A. We don't need it. So we just don't want to even see it. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to substitute in a value with C for this A value there. The way we do that is by subtracting C from both sides to get 21 minus C is equal to A. Now we go ahead and substitute in. Okay, so it will be 80 times 21 minus C plus 60C is equal to 14. We go ahead and distribute our 80 to our 21 and to our C. 80 times 21 is going to be 1680. And then we are also going to have minus 80C plus 60C is going to equal 14. Now we want to start isolating our C. So minus 80C and plus 60C is going to leave us with negative 20C. Okay, and we're also going to go ahead and subtract 1680 from both sides. Okay, subtract 1680 from both sides. This is going to leave us with 240, or I guess negative 240 is equal to negative 20C. Now from here, we're going to go ahead and divide both sides by negative 20. Negative 240 divided by negative 20 is going to leave you with your answer of C is 12. So our answer there will be answer choice C, because we have 12 children. And as you can see, by solving for the number of children first, we didn't have to go back through and solve for the number of adults. We never have to know the number of adults. If you wanted to go back through and see, obviously you could just put in the number 12 there for C, but it's not necessary. You don't need to know the number of adults, so don't care about it. Don't need to focus on it. Just get the number you need to get to and move on to the next question. Here's how to find x and y intercepts quickly when you have an equation in slope-intercept form. Question 19 states the function h is defined by h of x is equal to 4x plus 28. The graph of y equals h of x in the xy plane has an x-intercept at a and 0 and a y-intercept at 0, b, where a and b are constants. What is the value of a plus b? Well, in this case, there's no way to just get to A plus B. Normally, if I see something like that, that's what I'd look to do. In this case, you have to actually find both A and B. So in this case, let's go ahead and start by finding A. We see that A is where our Y value is 0. Well, where our Y value is 0, we have 4x plus 28 is equal to 0. We subtract 28 from both sides and we get negative 28 is equal to 4x. We divide both sides by 4. Negative 28 over 4 is going to equal negative 7 as the value of x. Now let's go ahead and solve for our b value. And keep in mind that x there would equal that a value. Okay, so a is negative 7. Now let's go ahead and solve for what b is equal to. Okay, b is where our x value is 0. So we just put in 0 there, and we see that we ultimately are going to get 28. Okay, so we're asked for the value of a plus b. So we just do 28 plus negative 7, which is the same as 28 minus 7. That's going to leave us with 21. So our answer there is A. Here's an example of an SAT math question that's gotten way easier now that the SAT has gone digital. Question 20 states one of the factors of 2x cubed plus 42x squared plus 208x is x plus b, where b is a positive constant. What is the smallest possible value of b? Now keep in mind you need the smallest possible value of b, and that's important here because there's going to be two possible answers. But I want to show you why this question is so much easier now that you have Desmos built into Blue Book on the digital SAT. Before, you would have to factor this out, and that could be a bit difficult, and there's a lot of room for error when you're doing that. But now that you have Desmos in the Blue Book app when you're taking the digital SAT, you can just put it into Desmos. Now, you have to also understand how to work the problem with Desmos. So in this case, you know that you need the value x plus b. Now, what that means is that you're looking specifically in this case at the negative x values or the negative x values in regards to the x-intercept, right? So let me go ahead and zoom in here. The reason that we're going to the negative section is because it can't be a positive number because these are ultimately our zeros. They're not our values for b, okay? Our zeros here, and as you can see, the first negative or the first zero there is at negative 8. Okay, now that does not mean negative 8 is our answer because it's not, okay? Because you have to keep in mind that we're looking for the value of b and x plus b. And x plus b, since it's one of our factors, has to be set equal to 0, which means that x is actually going to equal negative b. Now we know our value for x, okay? Our value for x is negative 8, which means that b has to equal positive 8. Okay, so our answer there will be 8. Now, you really need to make sure that if you are using Desmos, which I do recommend you do take close account to the signs of values and you understand how to interpret these graphs. Because if you don't understand how to interpret these graphs, but you try to use them, it's not going to help you. So as you saw, when I looked here, I had to understand that I'm looking for the value of b. Okay, to get to that, I need to understand how a factor works, right? The factor has to be set equal to 0. And then once I find this value of x, I have to remember to get that back to b. So make sure that when you do use Desmos on the digital SAT, which I do recommend you do because it helps a ton and makes you faster, less prone to error, that you do at least understand how to interpret these graphs. Here's what you need to know about questions that ask you about the number of real solutions to a quadratic equation on the SAT. I'm going to illustrate this with question 21. Question 21 states in the given system of equations, a is a positive constant. The system has exactly one distinct real solution. What is the value of a? Whenever you have a question asking you about 2 real solutions, 1 real solutions, no real solutions, or the number of real solutions, it's basically testing, do you know this crucial rule? And that rule is b squared minus 4ac. Okay. Now this works when you have an equation, a quadratic equation that is set equal to 0. Okay. So a quadratic equation looks like this, and it's got to equal out to 0. Now I'll show you how we get to there in regards to this question in a second, but first I want to explain this rule. So b squared minus 4ac, if this value is greater than 0, then that means that there are going to be 2 real solutions. Now, what if this value is equal to 0? In that case, there is 1 real solution. And what if this value is less than 0? Well, if b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, then that means that there are going to be no real solutions. Okay, so 0 real solutions. Okay, I guess I should actually express that as 0 because that's the way it is commonly shown on the SAT, is 0 real solutions. Okay, with this being said, I want to go ahead and go over how we apply this in this question. Okay, so in order to get our b squared minus 4ac value, like I said, we have to set it equal to 0. In this case, it is not set to equal to 0 yet. We have to substitute in this minus 1.5 for y first. So then we would end up with minus 1.5 is equal to x squared plus 8x plus a. Okay, from here, I'm gonna go ahead and add 1.5 to each side so that we can get it set equal to 0. So we can use this rule of b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so then we have that much plus a plus 1.5. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to pick essentially a random variable, which I'm just gonna call, we'll use I'm trying to pick one that doesn't sound like or look like a number. Let's use, we're gonna use z. Okay, and I'll try to make it very differentiated. Okay, I'm gonna let z equal a plus 1.5. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and substitute in z for a plus 1.5, and you'll see why I'm doing this in a moment here. Okay, so now we have our quadratic equation. It's set equal to 0. Now we can do b squared minus 4ac. Now you may be wondering, what's b, what's a, and what's c? Well, I'll go ahead and show you. Okay, our a value is whatever coefficient is in front of this x squared. Since there's no coefficient in front of it, it's 1. Okay, so our a value is 1. Our b value is going to be 8. It's whatever's in front of that x, okay? And our c value is the constant, which in this case we're representing as z. All right, so b is 8, so that's going to be squared. 8 squared is 64, okay? So b squared minus 4 times a. Our a value is 1, okay? So we don't need to show that, okay? And then times c, which we're representing as z, to represent that a plus 1.5. All right, now we know that there has to be exactly one real solution, which means we have to set it equal to 0. Now it's pretty easy to solve. We're going to go ahead and add 4z to each side. So we'll have 4z is equal to 64. We'll divide both sides by 4 to isolate z. So now we have z all alone. We know that z is equal to 64 over 4, which is going to equal 16. Okay, so now z is 16. Well, now that we have z is 16, we can go back up here, and we have 16 is equal to a plus 1.5. I'm going to erase this so you can kind of see what I'm doing back up here. 16 is equal to a plus 1.5. I subtract 1.5 from each side, and I get 14.5 is equal to a. Okay, so there's what you need to know about the number of real solutions on the SAT math section, along with this question as an example of how you can apply it. Here's how to quickly answer this SAT math question by understanding zeros. Question 22 states f of x is equal to x plus 6 times x plus 5 times x minus 4. The function f is given. Which table of values represents y is equal to f of x minus 3? Very important thing to here is to recognize is that f of x is this equation. We have to do that minus 3 there, okay? So what we can actually call this is I'm just going to scratch this out. I'll call it y, and then I'll just add that minus 3 at the end. It's the same thing. All right, so now we have our new equation y. The next thing that we see is that we have to find the table of values that represents it. The key thing that I'm looking for here is I want to find where I have a 0 in parentheses, which we're going to have when x is, sorry, let me write that where you can see it. We're going to have that where x is at -6, because -6 plus 6 is 0. We're going to have that where x is -5, because -5 plus 5 is 0. We'll have that where x is 4, 4 minus 4 is 0. I'm going to look for those x values in my table here. I see all of them are in here, okay? So I know they're all there. Anytime I have one of these, I'm going to have a y value of -3, because 0 times anything is going to end up being 0. So then I just end up with 0 minus 3. Okay, as we can see, a has to then be incorrect. B has to be correct because it has all of these values of our zeros in this x side of the table and it has -3 for all of them. So B is our correct answer. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question by understanding the equation for exponential growth. Question 23 states that for the function q, the value of q of x decreases by 45% for every increase in the value of x by 1. If q of 0 is equal to 14, which equation defines q? Well, q of 0 being 14 means that our y-intercept, where x is 0, is going to be 14, which means our initial value is 14. So we can get rid of a and b because their initial values are not 14. Next thing we need to recognize is our growth rate, okay, or our growth factor. We have q of x decreasing by 45% for every increase in the value of x by 1. If we're decreasing by 45%, that means our growth factor is 0.55. Okay, we're not getting bigger. Answer choice D would mean that we are increasing. We're decreasing, so that growth factor has to be less than 1. So our answer there is C. Here's a trap to avoid on the SAT math section. Question 24 states the graph of y equals f of x plus 14 is shown. Which equation defines the function f? Many people will pick answer choice C on this question because they'll see the y-intercept is 2 and pick answer choice C, but that's not correct. And the reason why is because you have to pay close attention to the details on the SAT math section. This question states the graph of y equals f of x plus 14 is shown, and we're asked to define the function f, not the function y, not y equals f of x plus 14. So the function f has to be down. It has to have a y-intercept that is 14 below where it is on this graph. So if we go down 14 from 2, we have to be at -12, which means our y-intercept has to be -12, and our answer has to be answer choice A because that's the only answer choice with -12 as the y-intercept. So on the SAT math section, pay very close attention to details with what you're asked to answer with and any equations that you're given, any equations or functions that you're given in the context of the question. Here's how to solve this question about tangents. Here's how to solve this question about similar triangles and tangents on the SAT math section. Question 25 states the side lengths of right triangle RST are given. Triangle RST is similar to triangle UVW, where S corresponds to V and T corresponds to W. What is the value of tan of W? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is since I have RST as the triangle and they're similar, the tangent values are also going to be the same for the corresponding angle. So I'm going to go ahead and find that W, what is it equal to in RST? Okay, so if I've got V and T correspond, let's see, S corresponds to V. All right, so S corresponds to V. Okay, I see that's the middle one, that's the middle one. And then T corresponds to W. Okay, I see that that's the last one, that's the last one. That means that R will correspond to U. Okay, but we've got tan of W. Okay, so that's going to be T. All right, so we have to find tan of T. Okay, I can just write that as then tan of T. Okay, it's the same thing because these are similar triangles. They're going to have the same tan values for the same angle. All right, so now what is the value of it? Well, let's go ahead and draw out this triangle, okay, because that's just gonna make it easier to visualize. We have a right triangle. We've got RST, so let's go ahead and just mark that. RST, we know T to R is 52. We know S to T is 48. Okay, and keep in mind, this is obviously not drawn to scale. Okay, it's just a quick sketch because we're only really worried about the actual values, not really the angle measures. All right, so now we wanna know the value of tan of T. All right, well, we know that the tan is the opposite over our adjacent. Okay, so our opposite from T would be 20 and our adjacent would be 48. So that's going to equal 20 over 48, which we can simplify down, and we see we have to because they're 20, 48 is not an answer choice. So if we're simplifying this down, we can go ahead and divide them both into 4, and that's going to give us 5 over 12 as our answer. So that'd be answer choice B. Here's how to solve this SAT math question that deals with rearranging variables. Question 26 states 1 gallon of paint will cover 220 square feet of a surface. A room has a total wall area of W square feet, which equation represents the total amount of paint, P, in gallons needed to paint the walls of the room twice. All right. So here's how I ended up with this equation. One quick note, you saw I started writing down variables and sort of the coefficients in front of those variables as I read through. That's a strategy I recommend that you do anytime that you have an SAT math word problem that is 3 lines or longer. Okay, just because it helps you avoid having to reread as much. So just want to make note of that. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about how I got there. All right, so we have 1 gallon of paint is going to cover 220 square feet of the surface. Okay, so we have 220 is the amount of square feet 1 gallon P is going to cover. Okay, so this gets us the amount of coverage that we're getting. Now we know that has to equal the area of the wall times 2 because we're going to do it twice, right? We're going to paint the walls twice. Okay, so now we have our equation. Now we see that we need to solve for P. So we just have to find what P equals. Now, all of this question basically hinges on you setting up this equation correctly initially. If you don't set it up correctly initially, you're not going to get to the right answer. So you have to make sure that you understand how the units work, right? Because as you can see here, we are ultimately getting to an area by taking the amount of coverage we get per gallon of paint, multiplying it by the number of gallons. Now we get our area, and we're setting that equal to an area as well. So checking if your units match is a good way to check your work as well. So I wanted to point that out. Okay, we're ultimately getting area equals area. All right, that being said, let's go ahead and solve for P now. We know that P is going to equal W times 2 all over 220 because we divide both sides by 220. Next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and simplify. Okay, we can divide 2 by 2 and 220 by 2. That's ultimately going to give us, if we go ahead and cross both those out, we'll end up with 110 in that denominator. So P is equal to W over 110. Our answer there will be answer choice A. Here's how to solve this difficult SAT math question. Question 27 states the number A is 110% greater than the number B. Well, that means that A is going to equal 2.1 times B because it's 110% greater than the number B. Okay, keep in mind, pay attention to that greater there. That means it's going to be 2.1 times B. All right, the number B is 90% less than 4.7. Well, another way to say that is the number B is 10% of 47. Okay, so that means that B is going to equal 0.1 times 47, which is going to equal 4.7. Now we're asked, what is the value of A? Well, this is pretty easy to solve for now. Okay, in order to get A, we need to know the value of B, which we now know is 4.7. So we just do 2.1 times 4.7. And if we put that into our calculator, we will get 9.87 as the value of A. So our answer is 9.87. Here's how to answer statistical inference questions on the SAT. Question 1 states that there are 55 students in Spanish Club. A sample of Spanish Club students was selected at random. That's important whenever you're doing statistical sampling. It must be random sampling in order to provide an accurate statistical inference for you to use later on, and asked whether they intend to enroll in a new study program. Of those surveyed, 20% responded they intend to enroll. Always pay attention to if it's they intend or they not to intend, because sometimes they will put in something that has only 2 options and they will give you one of those being they do or the other being they do not. And you have to pay attention to what you're given. In this case, we're given that they do intend to enroll in the study program. Based on the survey, which of the following is the best estimate of the total number of Spanish Club students who intended to enroll in the study program? In this case, this question's super straightforward. We have 55 total students. We're told that of those who responded, which was a random sample, 20% said they would intend to enroll. We're asked for those who would intend to enroll. So all we have to do is 55 times 0.2, and that'll give us 11. So our answer there would be A. Here's a tip to help you be more efficient on the SAT. Question 2 states Jay walks at a speed of 3 miles per hour and runs at a speed of 5 miles per hour. He walks for W hours and runs for R hours for a combined total of 14 miles. Which equation represents this situation? Okay, well, as you can see, I've already got my answer without having to read through a second time. And the reason why is because I wrote down my variables as I read through. As you can see, it's a little bit messy because my focus is on reading, but I don't have to read through again. And the reason you want to do this is because if you were to read through this word problem without writing anything down, and then you get to the end and it says which equation represents the situation, you now have to go back through, you have to look for your numbers, you have to look for your variables. So what I do when I encounter a word problem on the SAT, and you can usually tell pretty much right off the bat if it's a word problem because it'll be usually at least 3 lines or longer. In this case, it was 4 lines. You want to write down any numbers they give you and any variables they give you as you go through. And you want to try to sort of get it in the equation form that you're expecting. And this comes with a little bit of practice, but as you can see, once I saw we've got walking at 3 miles per hour, right? Running at 5 miles per hour. I'm guessing it's going to be a summation to get us distance. So I went ahead and I put the 3 here, the 5 here. And then once I got my variables, went ahead and attached them to the appropriate number that I got earlier in the question, and then got the equation, not having to read through twice. So this is a great way to save time on the SAT, and I highly recommend doing it. Here's how I recommend approaching questions about scatter plots on the SAT. Question 3 states the scatter plot shows the relationship between 2 variables x and y. A line of best fit is also shown. Which of the following equations best represents the line of best fit shown? What I do in this situation is I take a quick glance at the answer choices to see what format they're in. In this case, I see they're all in slope-intercept form, which is going to make this question really easy. So let's start by finding our intercept. We see our intercept is positive right around 3, which means we can go ahead and get rid of C and D because they both have negative y-intercepts. The next thing I'll take a look at is the slope. In this case, I see my slope is positive. If I look at answer choices A and B, I see only one of them has a positive slope, so my answer has to be answer choice A. Here's how to answer this question that deals with y-intercepts really quickly on the SAT. The question states the graph of y equals f of x is shown in the xy plane. What is the value of f of 0? Well, the value of f of 0 is just the y-intercept. So if we take a look at our graph, we see our answer is going to be 3. So our answer is answer choice D. Here's how to answer questions about adding exponents on the SAT. Question 5 states which expression is equivalent to, and then we have this multiplication question where m, q, and z are positive. What you need to understand in order to answer this question correctly is how to add exponents when you have the same base. So to illustrate this, let's look at m. M to the power of 4 times m is equal to m to the power of 5. Because it's the same base, we add their exponents when we multiply them together. Same thing with q. We have q to the power of 4 times q to the power of 5. That'll give us q to the power of 9. Same thing with z. In this case, we have z to the power of -1 times z to the power of 3. In this case, what we have is z to the power of 2 because it's 3 minus 1, or in other words, 3 plus -1. And as we can see, our answer then has to be answer choice B. Here's how to find the median on the SAT. Question 6 states, what is the median of the data shown? We're going to start by getting rid of our minimum value, then our maximum value, then our next minimum value, then our next maximum value, then our next minimum value, then our next maximum value, then our next minimum value, then our next maximum value to find our answer of 79. Now, what if we had 2 values in the middle? And we didn't have an odd number total of values, we had an even number. Well, in that case, let's say, for example, that we had 79 plus 81, or in this case, I guess we'll use 82 since that's the one to the left of it. But it's all arbitrary. We've already answered this question, but I just want to show you what we do in that case. In that case, if we had 79 plus 82, we divide by 2, we take the average, and we use that as the median. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 30 seconds. The question states what value of x is the solution to the given equation. Well, we got to isolate x then, so let's go ahead and subtract 40 from both sides. 95 minus 40 is going to leave us with 55 is equal to x. So the value of x that is the solution to the given equation is 55. Here's a tip to be way more efficient on the SAT. Question 8 states the solution to the given system of equations is xy. What is the value of x plus y? What you always want to do on the SAT is look for what you're asked to answer with. In this case, that's the value of x plus y. So does that mean we need to solve for x and y? Not necessarily, and I'll show you why here. If I see I have stacked equations like this, I'm almost always going to look to add or subtract the bottom equation from the top equation, and sometimes that will also mean I need to multiply by some number. But in this case, I don't need to multiply by a number, and what I see immediately is I have 5x and 4x, and I have to get x plus y. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to add these equations together, and that's going to give me x plus y, because 5x plus -4x is going to leave me with x, and then I have plus y is going to equal 15 plus -2, which is equal to 15 minus 2, which is equal to 13. So our answer there is C, and we don't have to solve for x and y because we were able to get the value of x plus y. Here's an example of how to interpret a word problem on the SAT math section. Question 9 states the given function g models the number of gallons of gasoline that remains from a full gas tank in a car after driving m miles. According to the model, about how many gallons of gasoline are used to drive each mile? Well, we know that g of m is how much gas remains in the tank. Okay, presumably, since before we have driven any miles, this number here is going to end up being 0 since m would be 0. We would start with 12.1 gallons of gas, which means that for every mile m that we drive, we are losing 0.05 gallons of gas. So our answer would have to be answer choice A. Here's an example of how to solve questions that ask you to rearrange variables on the SAT math section. In this case, we're asked the given equation relates the positive numbers b, x, and y. Which equation correctly expresses x in terms of b and y? Well, in order to get our answer, we have to isolate x. Let's go ahead and do that by multiplying both sides by y to start. And then to get 11x to just x, we have to divide both sides by 11. And now we have isolated x. So we have y over 11 times 7b. Which, as we can see, 11 times 7 is going to give us 77, and we would have y over 77b. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in two different ways. Question 11 states the graph of the given equations in the xy plane intersect at the point xy. What is a possible value of x? Now, many people would go through and solve this by hand. So let's go ahead and do that, and then I'll talk about the other way you can solve this one. So you have y equals 76 and y equals x squared minus 5. In this case, we can go ahead and plug in 76 for y. So we have 76 is equal to x squared minus 5. The next thing we'll do is we'll isolate that x squared value. So we'll add 5 to each side, and we'll end up with 81 is equal to x squared. From here, you should be able to recognize that your answers are going to be positive and negative 9 for the value of x. But I'll go ahead and show you how we do that. We can take the square root of both sides, which is going to give us plus or minus 9 is equal to x. The reason why it's plus or minus is because x squared, if you put in a negative number, it will still become positive. If you put in a positive number, it will become positive because it's being squared. So our answer there would be B. Now, here's what I want to show you about this question. That's the way I just showed you is one way to do it, and it's perfectly fine. But there is another way to do it. This question is from the digital SAT, which means you'll have access to Desmos while you are taking the SAT. And this is another perfectly valid way to do it. You just put in both equations in Desmos, and you find where they intersect, which in this case we can see here is at negative 9. So both ways are valid. The way I would recommend approaching it is with a question as simple as this. You can do it by hand if you want to, and if you are very confident. For example, if you're someone who's consistently scoring over 1400 on SAT practice tests, in particular over 700 on the math section, and you come across this question and you think it's faster for you to do it by hand, that's fine. You can go ahead and do it. If you're someone who's scoring less than 700 on the SAT math section on practice tests, I'd use Desmos. In my opinion, now that you can use Desmos on the digital SAT, you should be using it fairly often for questions that involve graphing because it helps you avoid human error. So even on a question as simple as this, if someone wanted to use Desmos, I wouldn't fault them at all, and I wouldn't tell them not to. Desmos is a great tool for the digital SAT, and you shouldn't be afraid to use it. Here's how to solve this SAT math question about the solution to a system of inequalities. The question states the point x and 53 is a solution to the system of inequalities in the xy plane. Which of the following could be the value of x? So in this case, we need to solve for x, and we already know that this point is a solution. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this 53y, and we're going to, which is a y value, and we're going to plug it in for y. So pretty simple on how we're going to set this up. It's going to end up being 4x plus 53 must be less than 18. Okay, now that we've got this set up, let's go ahead and isolate x and solve for it. So we'll subtract 53 from each side. That'll end up leaving us with negative 35 must be greater than 4x. From there, we want to isolate x, as I said, so we divide both sides by 4. Now we see that x must be less than negative 35 over 4. Now what you should be able to recognize here is that 35 over 4, pretty close to 36 over 4, or in other words, 9. Okay, so we know that x has to be less than negative 35 over 4, which means x cannot be negative 5, 5, or 9 because they do not pass that inequality. The only number that does here is answer choice A. Here's how to efficiently answer this SAT math question about percentages, as well as one thing you want to look out for on questions that are simple like this one. Question 13 states that out of 300 seeds that were planted, 80% sprouted. How many of these seeds sprouted? So it's pretty easy to get to our answer. That's going to be 0.8 to represent that 80%. And we're going to multiply it by 300, and that is going to give us our answer of 240. Now, what you want to watch out for on questions that are as simple as this one is whether or not the SAT is going to put something like this. How many of these seeds did not sprout? Okay, and they would probably underline the word not, okay, because that would change the math, right? If you're calculating for the percent or the amount of seeds that didn't sprout, then you would end up with 60. So that is something you want to watch out for on questions on the SAT that are simple like this, is whether or not there's something that could trip you up like that. Here's how to efficiently answer this SAT math question. Question 14 states the function f is defined by f of x equals 4x. For what value of x does f of x equal 8? Well, since we're asked to find the value where f of x equals 8, we go ahead and plug in 8 for f of x, which leaves us with 8 is equal to 4x. From there, we just want to isolate x by dividing both sides by 4. 8 over 4 is equal to 2, which means that the value of x would be 2, and 2 is our answer. Here's how to efficiently answer this SAT math question that deals with division and factors. Question 15 states which expression is equivalent to 8x times x minus 7 minus 3 times x minus 7 all over 2x minus 14, where x is greater than 7. Immediately what I'm seeing is I have x minus 7 here and here. So what I'm going to see is if I have x minus 7 in my denominator, which in this case I see I do because I have 2x minus 14, and I can change that into 2 times x minus 7. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this division problem so you can see what I'm looking for a little bit more neatly. The way we rewrite this is 8x times x minus 7 all over 2 times x minus 7 minus 3 times x minus 7 all over 2 times x minus 7. And now that we've written this, it's very easy to see that these x minus 7s are going to cancel out, which makes this equation very, very simple. Okay, ultimately we have 8x minus 3 all over 2, which once again, we can rewrite this as 8x minus 3 all over 2, which we see as answer choice B. So to answer this question, what you really need to understand is, one, how to factor so you can get that x minus 7 out, and then second, how to sort of change between these similar sort of forms, right, of division, right? You can write 8x minus 3 over 2 like this, and you can also write it like this. So that's really what you need to understand for this question. Here's how to find the slope of equations in standard linear form and use that slope to answer questions very quickly. Question 16 states line P is defined by 2y plus 18x equals 9. Line R is perpendicular to line P in the xy plane. What is the slope of line R? In order to find the slope of line R, we need to first know the slope of line P. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that we have 2y plus 18x equals 9. This is called standard linear form. It's when we have our y and our x on the same side being added together and they are set equal to some constant. Now, because it's in standard linear form, we can use the equation m equals negative a over b, where a is the value or the coefficient in front of x and b is the coefficient in front of y. So in this case, that would be m equals negative a, in this case our a value is 18, so negative 18 over 2, which is going to equal negative 9. Now, in order to get a perpendicular slope to negative 9, you have to do the negative reciprocal. So negative 9 is the same as negative 9 over 1. So to do the negative reciprocal, we have to change the sign from negative to positive, and then we have to flip the fraction to 1 over 9. So 1 over 9 will be our new slope of line R. So we can go slope of R, which means that our answer has to be answer choice C. Here's an example of why you need to know the exponential growth formula for the SAT. Question 17 states the given function f models the number of coupons a company sent to their customers at the end of each year, where t represents the number of years since the end of 1998 and t is between 0 and 5 inclusive. If y is equal to f of t is graphed in the ty plane, which of the following is the best interpretation of the y-intercept of the graph in this context? Your y-intercept, when you have an exponential growth formula like this, is going to be where t is equal to 0, where the exponent is equal to 0. And when that exponent is equal to 0, 0.65 to the power of 0 is just 1, and you end up with this y-intercept of 8,000. Now, in this case, we know that that is at the end of 1998, since that's our start year. That is where t is 0. So from that, it's very easy to find the answer. So let's go ahead and read through A through D, and let's find the answer. A, the minimum estimated number of coupons the company sent to their customers during the 5 years was 1,400 and no. B, the minimum estimated number of coupons the company sent to their customers during the 5 years was 8,000. No, this is just the value at the beginning of the time. So this is the number of coupons that they sent at the end of 1998. And then C, the estimated number of coupons the company sent to their customers was 1,428. No, we know it's 8,000. 8,000 is our initial value. D, the estimated number of coupons the company sent to their customers at the end of 1998 was 8,000. Yes, D is our answer. Here's something you need to know about similar triangles for the SAT math section. Question 18 states that triangle XYZ is similar to triangle RST such that X, Y, and Z correspond to R, S, and T respectively. The measure of angle Z is 20 degrees and 2XY is equal to RS. What is the measure of angle T? The answer is C, 20 degrees. Now, how do you know that right away? Well, this piece of information is completely irrelevant and you don't need to know it in order to know the answer is 20 degrees. And here is why. You are told that these are similar triangles. You are also told that Z corresponds to angle T. These two angles correspond to one another, which means that they must have the same angle measure. So this piece of information does not matter. Okay, all you need is that angle Z is 20, angle T must also be 20, and your answer is C. Here's what you need to know about systems of linear equations that have no solution on the SAT. Question 19 states one of the equations in a system of two linear equations is given. The system has no solution. Which equation could be the second equation in the system? First thing we need to know is our slope, which we see is going to be 6. Okay, we see our y-intercept is going to be 18. Now, the reason we need to know these things is because in order for a system of linear equations to have no solution, they need to have the same slope but a different y-intercept. Next thing I notice is answer choices A through D are all in standard linear form, which means that we can use the formula m equals negative a over b, where m is representing the slope. Now, if we do that for answer choice A, we see that answer choice A would be negative 6, which would give us positive 6 over 1, since 1 is the coefficient in front of y. So answer choices A and B, I see, are both going to have a slope of 6. Now, they have the right slope, but which one of them has the correct y-intercept? And by correct y-intercept, it means the y-intercept that is different from the one that we are given, because if they have the same y-intercept, there is infinitely many solutions. And as we can see, answer choice A has y being equal to 6x plus 18 if we were able to convert it to slope-intercept form. And in that case, it's the same equation as is up here. So A is incorrect because that would be the same equation and there are infinitely many solutions to that. Now, B has a different y-intercept. Its y-intercept here is going to be 22. So our answer is going to be answer choice just B has a different y-intercept but the same slope, so there is no solutions possible. Here's how to quickly solve this question about area on the SAT math section. Question 20 states, what is the area in square centimeters of a rectangle with a length of 34 centimeters and a width of 29 centimeters? This question's pretty easy. All you need to know is the area formula for a rectangle, and that's going to be the length times the width. These are both the same unit. They're both centimeters. That's one thing you do want to watch out for on the SAT is if you have different units for one side than the other, then you would have to convert units. In this case, we do not have to do that, and it is very simple. It is just 29 times 34. We are able to use the calculator on the section. This is the digital SAT, so you're going to be able to use your calculator on both of the sections for the math. So you just put it in your calculator, you're going to end up with 986 as your answer. Here's a bunch of tips that I can illustrate with this question to help you ace the SAT. Question 21 states the solution to the given system of equations is xy. What is the value of x minus y? Anytime that you're taking the SAT math section, you always want to pay very, very close attention to what you're asked to answer with. That is the key to moving faster and being as efficient as possible. Know what you want to answer with. In this case, they're asking for the value of x minus y. So what I would do is if I have a system of equations like this, I would look for if there's a way that I can do an addition or subtraction of this bottom equation from the top one in order to get the value of x minus y right away. And sometimes that may involve multiplying one of these equations by some number. Now, in this case, I don't see any way that I can quickly get to x minus y doing this. So it's not applicable here, but we still have the plus minus in order to get the value of x quickly. And I'll show you how we're going to do that. Okay. Like I said, sometimes you're gonna have to multiply. In this case, I can see that I have y and 4y. So I'll just multiply this top one by 4 to get rid of my y. So I'll do subtraction here. Okay. So I distribute this 4 to the y. I get 4y minus 4y. Now my y's are gone. Okay, so I'm going to end up with 0 here. And then I'm going to have 4 times 4x of 16x minus 15x will leave me with just x. And then 4 times 1, I'm going to have 4 minus negative 8, which is the same as 4 plus 8. That's going to give me plus 12. So I can see here that if I subtract 12 from both sides, I'm going to end up with x is equal to negative 12. Okay, so now that I've solved for x, I'll go ahead and solve for y. So if x is negative 12, I'll go ahead and erase up here so we can do this quickly. X is negative 12. I'll substitute that in here. So we have negative 12. And the reason I'm choosing this top equation is because we already have y isolated with no coefficients in front of it. So keep in mind that's strategic. Now that since I need y now, I'm not going to pick the y that has a coefficient in front of it. That doesn't make sense to do. We want to just go ahead and get y right away. So we plug in that negative 12, multiply it by 4, we get negative 48. Negative 48 plus 1 is going to equal negative 47. Okay, so now we want the value of x minus y. So that's going to be negative 12 minus negative 47. Okay, so keep in mind, subtracting a negative, it's the same as adding. So we're going to have negative 12 plus 47, and that is going to give us our answer of positive 35. Here's what you need to know about calculating the number of real solutions for quadratic equations on the SAT math section. Question 22 states, how many distinct real solutions does a given equation have? Well, in order to solve this, we're going to use b squared minus 4ac because this is a quadratic equation. Now, if the value of b squared minus 4z is positive, then that means that there are going to be 2 real solutions. Now, if the value of b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, then that means that there are going to be 1 real solution. And I should have said there is going to be 1 real solution. Don't at me in the comments. Okay, and then b squared minus 4ac, if that is less than 0, then that means that you're going to have no real solutions. Okay, now that we've gone ahead and gone over the value of b squared minus 4ac and what that means for the number of real solutions, let's go ahead and calculate it. So your b value is what's in front of the x. Your a value is what's in front of your x squared, and your c value is your constant. Keep in mind it must be set equal to 0 for this to work. So b squared minus 4ac, our b value is 10. 10 squared minus 4 times 5 times 16. What does that equal out to? That is going to equal out to a negative 220. We know is less than 0. Therefore, we must have no real solutions. So our answer is going to be D, 0. There are 0 real solutions. Here's how to convert units on the SAT. Question 23 states a certain park has an area of 11,863,808 square yards. What is the area in square miles of this park? And one thing I want to point out here is anytime you have something underlined on the SAT, it means you need to pay very close attention to it. In this case, it's because we're converting units from square yards to square miles. That being said, we are given what 1 mile is equal to in yards, and that's 1,760. So the key to this question is that you are dealing with square yards, not just yards, square yards, not cubic yards, square yards. That's the key to this whole thing. This makes it super easy as long as you understand that. What you're going to do here is you're going to take your 11,863,808 and you're going to divide it by 1760 squared. And the reason why you have to square that 1760 is because you are dealing in units of square yards to square miles. So you have to square that conversion unit as well. Once you do this, you just put it in your calculator and you're going to end up with 3.83. So your answer there is going to be answer choice B. Here's how to use the circle equation to answer this question on the SAT. Question 24 states, which of the following equations represents a circle in the XY plane that intersects the y-axis at exactly one point? Well, first, I'm going to quickly teach the circle equation to anyone who doesn't know it. So the circle equation we can write as this: x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to our radius squared, where r is our radius. Okay, now in this situation, we would have a center for the circle of HK. So as you can see, you want to pay attention to the fact that we have those minus signs, but our center is still at H and K. So now that we've gone over that, I'm going to quickly show you how I would approach this. The first thing I would take a look at is what my radius value is for all of these. Now, keep in mind, 16 is the radius squared, which means that the actual radius here, your radius, is actually going to equal 4. Okay, and that's important because we're only intersecting the y-axis at one point. And if you're ever kind of in doubt on a question dealing with sort of circles and graphs, go ahead and draw it out. It's very useful. So I'll go ahead and draw that out to illustrate what I'm looking for here. So if I know my radius is 4, if my x value is anything greater than 4, and I'll put 4 here. For example, I see that my x value for the center, right, is going to be 8 for A and B. There's no way that I can reach that y-intercept, right? No matter where my y is, there's just no way I can get there because my radius is only 4. So I can get rid of A and B already, okay? I have to find somewhere where I'm either at 4 or I'm at -4. And the only place that happens, and keep in mind, I'm specifically referring to the x coordinate for your center here. And we see the only place that happens is C. In answer choice D, we see that x's center is at 0. Now, if we had a center at 0, we'd end up with a circle that looks like this, right? And we're crossing that y-intercept twice. So our answer there has to be answer choice C. Here's a term that you need to know for the SAT math section. Question 25 states in triangles ABC and DEF, angles B and E each have measure 27. We see that B and E are here. Okay, so they match up in that triangle. Angles C and F each have a measure of 41. So we see C and F. They also match up in this triangle. Which additional piece of information is sufficient to determine whether triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF? The key thing to understand here and pay attention to is the fact that we are asked about congruency, which means that they are the same triangles. We are not asked about similarity. Two triangles that are similar can have different side lengths, but two triangles that are congruent must have the same side lengths and the same angles. Now, we already know that these triangles are similar because if 2 out of these 3 angles are the same, that means the third angle is the same in them as well. So what we need to know then is if the side lengths are all the same. And the way that we can get that, we can't get that from just one side length because that's only from one of the triangles. Okay, we can't get that from another angle measure. We already know they're all the same. We do need more information because we need to know whether or not these side lengths are the same. And to do that, we need to get these side lengths of 2 corresponding sides, which we see we get here in BC. If we go up here, BC, right here, these last 2 letters, and EF. Okay, so our answer there has to be C. And once again, make sure you understand the difference between congruency, which is when triangles are the exact same, and similarity, which is just when they have the same angle measures. This is one of the most difficult SAT math questions, and it has less to do with the actual math involved and more to do with the actual logic that's required to set up the problem. So with that being said, let's go ahead and go over it and let's simplify it down. So question 26 states that 2 data sets of 23 integers each are summarized in the histograms shown. For each of the histograms, the first interval represents the frequency of integers greater than or equal to 10, but less than 20. So the key thing that we need to understand here is that this line right here, right, this 30 number is included inside of here. Right? So it's really going, whatever is sort of inside of a box, keep in mind, it's sort of the 0 through 9. It doesn't include that next 0. Okay, so with that being said, let's keep reading through. The second interval represents the frequency of integers greater than or equal to 20, but less than 30, and so on. What is the smallest possible difference between the mean of data set A and the mean of data set B? So as you can see, pretty much sort of a logical sort of question as for the setup of this, right? So to get the smallest possible difference between these 2 data sets, you want to keep a couple of things in mind. First of all, if you ever have histograms on the SAT, you want to pay attention to the shape of them. Now, if you have 2 of them, like you do in this case, you want to pay attention to the shape of each of them. And as we can see, the shape of them is the same. There's just a shift, right? So the actual shape is the same. As you can see, this one right here goes across into 9. This goes to 7. This goes to 4. This goes to 3. Same thing over here. We have 3, 4, 7, and 9. Right? And we have the same number of bars, obviously. So these are the same shape, but you want to also pay attention to your x-axis as well. And as we can see, data set B is shifted to the left 10 for each of these, right? So now, in order to set up the smallest difference in means, we would actually have to calculate the mean of each, right? But we don't just calculate the mean because we can't, right? It's a histogram. We know that these numbers fall in between these. So the key thing we need to recognize is in order to find the difference, we need to know which one's larger and which one is smaller. Now, this data set A, it has to be larger because all of these are shifted to the right. Okay, so they can't all fall in the same number because, as I pointed out, right? This 30, and this is true for all of these, these rectangles or these bars on the graph, it's not inclusive of, this, for example, right? It's 20 to 29. That doesn't include that 30, right? That 30 is its own. And that's what makes it so there has to be a difference here. Okay, so we already know that the answer can't be 0 because like I said, there has to be a difference, because we are dealing with the fact that it's 20 to 29, 30 to 39, and so on. So if we are shifting one of them, to the, in this case, to the right, if you're doing from B to A, it would be to the right. If you're doing A to B, it would be to the left. There has to be some difference there. Okay, so with that being said, let's go and calculate that difference. Well, if we're going to calculate what the smallest difference is, we need the minimum value for data set A and we would need the maximum value for data set B because we are subtracting B from A. Okay, so let's start with getting the minimum value of data set A. Okay, so minimum value of data set A. Let me go ahead and go up here. Okay, so minimum value of data set A. What we would do to set this up is we would start by getting the lowest value from our first bar, right? So that's going to be 20. Okay, so we're getting our minimum value of A. So that'd be 20 times 3. Okay, and then we'll have to add on to that 30 times 4. Then we'll have to add on to that 40 times 7. And then we'll have to add on to that 50 times 9. Okay, and then once we get that, we're going to have to divide by our total, which is going to be 3 plus 4, which is 7, 7 plus 7, which is 14, and then 14 plus 9, which is 23. Okay, so we're going to take all that, we will divide it by 23. Okay, now keep in mind that we're going to also have that division by 23 over in data set B as well. All right, now we have to calculate our number for data set B, and I'm going to have to scroll down a little bit just so you can see all of this getting written out. So go ahead and try to scroll down. Okay. So we're gonna have to set up a pretty similar thing, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and put in our subtraction sign, and I know it's not super great formatted, but that's okay. All right, so we're gonna have minus now. We have to do kind of the opposite thing that we just did in A. So in this case, we're taking our maximum values. Now, keep in mind that our maximum values are not inclusive, right? So this is a range of 10 to 19. Okay, so we have to take 19 there. So that'd be minus 19 times 3, plus 29 times 4, plus 39 times 7, plus 49 times 9. Okay, and this is all also over 23. Okay, and then when we put this into our calculator, which is what you'd do. Okay, I wrote this out. You would just be typing this in your calculator. Okay, this is ultimately going to get you your answer of 1. So your answer there is going to be B, and that's how you solve this tricky SAT math problem. Here's something you need to know for the SAT, and that's how to extract numbers from underneath the square root. Question 27 states a triangle has legs with lengths of 24 centimeters and 21 centimeters. If the length of the triangle's hypotenuse in centimeters can be written in the form 3 times the square root of D, where D is an integer, what is the value of D? Well, in order to get in this form of 3 times root D, we need to first actually know what the hypotenuse's length is. So let's go ahead and solve for that. So we have a right triangle. We know we have lengths of 24 and 21 as our side lengths. We need to solve for hypotenuse, which we're going to represent as c squared, and we're going to use Pythagorean theorem. So we're going to go ahead and do 24 squared plus 21 squared. That's going to equal c squared. Okay, we know that this is going to equal, let's put it in our calculator, and we're going to get 1017. Okay, so we'll take the square root of each side to isolate c. Okay, so we know that c is going to equal that square root of 1017. Okay, so now that we have that, I'm gonna go ahead and write this out a little bit more neatly. We know c is equal to root of 1017. C is our hypotenuse, so that's what we're trying to solve for. Now, we need to ultimately rewrite this in a form where 3 is extracted. Okay, well, underneath the square root, in order to extract the value of 3, we would have to have the value of 9 underneath that square root. And the way we get that's just pretty simple, right? It's by 3 squared, okay? Since we have square root here, we'd be squaring 3 and we would get 9. All right, so now what we have to do is we have to do 1017 divided by 9, and that's gonna give us 113. And now what we do is we set this equal to 9 times 113, which as you can see, is still gonna equal 1017 since we had 1017 over 9 equal 113. So because of that, we now have 9 underneath the square root, which means that we can extract 3 because, and I'll just write this over here, okay, because the root 9 times 113 is the same as root 9 times root 113. And what is root 9 equal to? Well, root 9 is equal to 3. Okay, so now we've extracted that 3, and we see we have 3 root 113, which is the same format as we got in this question. So we know the value of D has to be 113 as well. So our answer is 113. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 30 seconds. Question 1 states, what is the solution to the given equation? All we have to do here is isolate K by subtracting 12 from both sides. 336 minus 12 is 324, so we know that K will equal 324, and our answer is B. Here's how to efficiently solve this SAT math question. Question 2 states the function f is defined by f of x is equal to x cubed plus 15. What is the value of f of 2? In this case, all we have to do is plug in 2 for x, and we're going to get 2 cubed, which is equal to 8, and we have to add 15 to that. So 8 plus 15 will leave us with 23, so our answer is C. Here's how to interpret this SAT word problem. Question 3 states that Sean rents a tent at a cost of $11 per day plus a one-time insurance fee of $10. Which equation represents the total cost, C, in dollars to rent the tent with insurance for D days? We know our total cost is going to equal our one-time insurance fee of $10 plus our $11 per day, giving us our answer as answer choice C. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question about intersecting parallel lines. Question 4 states, in the figure shown, line M is parallel to line N. What is the value of X? Well, we know that this angle of 26 is also going to be the same angle that is right here. Therefore, we know that we have this semicircle of X and angle that is 26 degrees. So we can do 180 degrees for that angle of the semicircle minus the 26 degrees. And then we're going to get the value of X in degrees, which we know will equal 154. So our answer is answer choice D. So I'll go ahead and scroll down so you can see that. Our answer will be D. Here's how to be more efficient on the SAT math section. Question 5 states that John paid a total of $165 for a microscope by making a down payment of $37 plus P monthly payments of $16 each. Which of the following equations represents the situation? And as you can see, as I read through the problem, I wrote down the equation that I would eventually come up with. So we see that our answer there has to be C. Now I want to talk about why this is a good strategy and when to use it. What I do is when I see an SAT math question with 3 lines or more, then as I read through the question, I'll start writing down any coefficients, variables, or key units that I will need to solve the question. So as you saw, when I saw that I had a total of 165, I knew I was probably going to sum up something else to get to that total of 165. So I wrote down 165 first. Then as I kept reading, I saw I had a down payment of $37. A down payment is a one-time payment. So there's not going to be a variable next to it. So I went ahead and wrote down 37. Okay, and keep in mind, I'm trying to add up to a total here. So I could probably insinuate that I'm going to have a summation after that. Then we have plus P monthly payments. So plus, indicating I need to add, plus P monthly payments of $16 each. In this case, P is our variable representing the monthly payments, and our coefficient in front of that is $16 each, which is how I was able to write out this equation before I finished the question. Okay, so this is a key strategy I recommend you use on the SAT when you have a word problem that is 3 lines or longer. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. Question 6 states that if y is equal to 5x plus 10, what is the value of y when x is equal to 8? Well, all we got to do here is plug in 8 for x. So we're going to have 5 times 8, which is going to give us 40. 40 plus 10 is going to give us 50, and our answer will be 50. Here's how to interpret bar graphs on the SAT math section. Question 7 states the bar graph shows the distribution of 419 cans collected by 10 different groups for a food drive. How many cans were collected by group 6? Well, let's first take a look at our y-axis. We see we have their number of cans. We need to know how many cans were collected by group 6. So we find group 6. We see that they collected 40 cans. So the answer there is 40. Here's how to efficiently solve this SAT math question about probability. Question 8 says the table gives a distribution of votes for a new school mascot and grade level for 80 students. If one of these students is selected at random, what is the probability of selecting a student whose vote for the new mascot was a lion? So a couple key things to look for on probability questions. Number 1 is look for the pool that you are selecting from. In this case, we are selecting one of the students at random. Keep in mind, sometimes they may ask if we are selecting a 7th grader, an 8th grader, a 6th grader, if we are selecting one of the students who voted for the Badger mascot. So you always want to pay attention to the pool that you are selecting from. In this case, it's just one of the students. So that means we're going to be pulling from this total right here. Okay. Now the key thing here is we are looking for the probability that the student voted for a mascot that was a lion. Okay, which we see is going to be this value here. So our total probability then is going to be 20, which is the part that we are selecting, which is those students who voted for a lion, over the total that we are selecting from, which is all of the students. So 20 over 80 is going to equal 1 over 4. So if we go ahead and scroll down, we're going to see that that'll be answer choice C. So C will be our answer there. Here's how to interpret slope in context for the SAT math section. Question 9 states the graph represents the total charge in dollars by an electrician for X hours of work. The electrician charges a one-time fee plus an hourly rate. What is the best interpretation of the slope of the graph? Well, we know that he has a one-time fee, which is already represented by our y-intercept, and then the slope is representative of his hourly rate. Okay, so we have option A, the electrician's hourly rate, and that'll be the correct answer there. Here's how to solve this SAT math question that is really a proportions question, but disguised as a perimeters question. Question 10 states that square x has a side length of 12 centimeters. The perimeter of square y is 2 times the perimeter of square x. What is the length in centimeters of one side of square y? Well, a couple things to keep in mind here. 1, these are both squares. Number 2, the perimeter is going to be the same equation for both of them, just with a different value for the side length. So if we want to actually double the perimeter, all we have to do is actually double the side length. And because we know that, we know the answer is D, having to do very little math here. Keep in mind, we didn't actually have to calculate the perimeter for either square x or square y because we're able to recognize that the equation for the calculation of the perimeter is the same. The only difference is the actual side length. So if we wanted to double the output of the perimeter, or double the perimeter value in this equation, all we have to do is double that side length because the equations are set up the same. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question by understanding slope and y-intercepts. Question 11 states, what is the equation of a line that passes through the point 0, 5? Well, the point 0, 5 means that we have a y-intercept of 5 because that x-coordinate is 0. So that is where we are crossing the y-axis. And is parallel to the graph of y is equal to 7x plus 4 in the xy plane. Well, if we're parallel to the graph of y equals 7x plus 4, that graph has a slope of 7. And since we're parallel to it, we also must have a slope of 7. So we know that our slope must be 7x. Okay, so slope equals 7x. We know our y-intercept must be 5. Okay, so our y-intercept must be 5. Therefore, we know that our equation has to be by is equal to 7x plus 5. Here's how to efficiently solve this SAT math question by understanding how to calculate slope and y-intercept quickly. Question 12 states in a linear function h of 0 is 41. We know that when we have h of 0, f of 0, g of 0, any function where we have that 0 as our x-coordinate, then we are getting our y-intercept. So in this case, our y-intercept is 41. Then we have h of 1 is 40 immediately. I'll go ahead and finish reading the question first. Which equation defines h? Well, immediately what I see here is that we are moving over 1. Okay, so if we go over 1, we see that we are going down by 1 from 41 to 40. Okay, so negative 1 over 1 is going to be our slope. Okay, so a negative 1 coefficient for our slope. So now we have our y-intercept of 41. We have our slope of negative 1. It's very easy to define this equation. All right, so we're going to have that negative x as our slope. So our b is incorrect because it doesn't have that 41 as our y-intercept. Okay, so A is our correct answer there. We've got negative x as the slope plus 41 y-intercept. Answer there has to be answer choice A. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question by understanding the equation for exponential growth. Question 13 states the function f of t is equal to 60,000 times 2 to the power of t over 410. Gives the number of bacteria in a population t minutes after an initial observation. How much time in minutes does it take for the number of bacteria in the population to double? Well, we know that we are doubling when we have this 2 to the power of 1. This 2 is our growth factor, this 60,000 is our initial amount, and this t over 410 is representing how often we are doing this doubling, okay? And we will double every 410 minutes, okay? Because at 410 minutes, we'll get our first double, and then if we go up another 410, then we'll get our second double, okay? In this case, we are asked for the amount of time it takes for the population to double only one time, so t would be 410, and our answer will indeed be 410. Here's how to translate graphs up on the SAT math section. Question 14 states the function f is defined by f of x is equal to x minus 6 times x minus 2 times x plus 6 in the xy plane. The graph of y equals g of x is the result of translating the graph of y equals f of x up 4 units. Now keep in mind our f of x graph is already defined up here. What is the value of g of 0? In other words, that's the y-intercept of g of x. Okay, now keep in mind that g of x is f of x translated up 4 units. So we have to start by finding what the y-intercept is of f of x and then add another 4 units on top of that since g of x is a translation up 4 units of it. All right, so let's go ahead and solve for first the y-intercept of f of x. So we know that the y-intercept is where x is 0. So let's go ahead and plug in 0 for x. So we'd have 0 minus 6, and then 0 minus 2, and then 0 plus 6. Okay, and this is all going to equal out to negative 6 times negative 2, which will give us positive 12 times 6, which will give us 72. Okay, so now we have our y-intercept for our f of 0, right? Now, g of 0 is what we need to solve for here. And we know that that's going to be up 4 units. So that means that g of 0 will equal f of 0, which we know is 72, plus 4, which means that g of 0 will equal 76, and our final answer will be 76. Here's how to efficiently solve this SAT math question. Question 15 states a candle is made of 17 ounces of wax. When the candle is burning, the amount of wax in the candle decreases by 1 ounce every 4 hours. If 6 ounces of wax remain in this candle, for how many hours has it been burning? Okay, so we know that we start out with 17 ounces. We know that we are going down by 1/4 ounce every hour. So in this case, I'm having x represent hours. And the way that I got this minus 1/4 x is by the fact that we're losing 1 ounce every 4 hours. That means every hour we are losing 1/4 of an ounce. All right, so from here, the way I'm gonna set up my equation is actually setting it equal to how many ounces are remaining. Okay, so the amount of ounces that are remaining, I'm gonna call f of x. Okay, and that's gonna equal our initial amount minus how much we're losing every hour. And keep in mind, hour I'm representing as x here. All right, so now from here, we wanna find if 6 ounces remain. Okay, so that would mean that we have 6 remaining, and that's going to equal our starting amount minus 1/4 x. Now we wanna solve for what time, for how many hours it's been burning. So we wanna solve for x now that we have this equation. We'll go ahead and subtract 17 from both sides. That's gonna end up giving us negative 11 is equal to negative 1/4 x. From there, we will multiply both sides by negative 4 in order to get rid of this minus 1/4. Okay, so we multiply both sides by -4. -4 times -11 is going to give us positive 44 is equal to x, so our answer will be 44. Here's how to rearrange variables on the SAT math section. Question 16 states the given equation relates the numbers j, k, and m, which equation correctly expresses k in terms of j and m. All right, so we got to solve for what k is equal to. So to do that, we're going to isolate it by subtracting 14j from both sides. So we'll subtract 14j from both sides. Okay, so now this is gone. Next thing we have to do is divide both sides by 5 to isolate k. All right, so now we're going to end up with k is equal to m minus 14j all over 5. Okay, and keep in mind that we divided that by 5. All right, so let's find which equation matches up with ours. We see that's going to be answer choice A, so A will be our answer there. Here's something you need to know about similar triangles for the SAT math section. Question 17 states triangle FGH is similar to triangle JKL, where angle F corresponds to angle J, and angles G and K are right angles. If sine of F is equal to 308 over 317, what is the value of sine of J? Okay, well, we know that F and J are referring to the same angle. These are similar triangles. They have all the same angle measures. Because they have the same angle measures, the value for their sines are going to be the same when it's the same angle that is inputted in these parentheses, which we see it is, okay? J and F are the corresponding angles within these similar triangles, okay? As you can see up here, it says F corresponds to angle J. Therefore, they're going to have the same sine values, and our answer for the sine of J will also be 308 over 317. Here's how to efficiently set up and solve this SAT math question. Question 18 states the product of two positive integers is 546. If the first integer is 11 greater than twice the second integer, what is the smaller of the two integers? Okay, so we want to solve for the smaller of the two integers. Well, in this case, since we have greater and smaller, I'm going to use G and S as my variables, okay? So G and S. We know 546 is going to equal the product of these two variables, G and S. We also know that the first integer, which we're representing as, or actually, I guess let's use F and S for the first and the second. Okay, so we're going to use F and S. All right, so we know that the first integer is equal to 11 plus twice the second integer. Okay, that's 2S. Now we want to solve for the smaller, so we want to solve for S here. So to solve for S, I'm going to go ahead and plug in F into this top equation. Okay, we know F is also represented as 11 plus 2S. So we're going to end up with 546 is equal to 11 plus 2S times S. We'll go ahead and distribute our S. And then we're going to end up with 11S plus 2S squared. Okay, from here, we want to set this all equal to 0 so we can solve for S. So we're going to subtract 546 from both sides to get 0 is equal to 2S squared plus 11S minus 546. Now, this question is from the digital SAT, which means that you have access to Desmos within the testing environment. Okay, it's through Bluebook, which is the sort of the software that they're using to test for you to take the SAT, the digital SAT. So at this point, what I would do is I would actually plug this into my graphing calculator. So I'm going to show you what I did. So I put it in my graphing calculator. And now it's very easy to actually solve for where it equals 0 because it equals 0 where it crosses the x-axis. And as you can see, there's 2 points, but we only are able to use one of them. And the reason why is because we have to remember that the product is of two positive integers. So yes, there are two values where S will equal, where this equation here will equal 0, but ultimately there's only one that is a positive value, and that is going to be at 14. Okay, so 14 is going to have to be your answer for the value of S. Okay, so our answer there is 14, which is answer choice B. Here's an example of an SAT math question where I would use substitution to solve the question quickly. Question 19 states, which point xy is a solution to the given system of inequalities in the xy plane? So I've got negative 14 for my x value. I'll go ahead and plug that in up here. Okay, negative 14 plus 7 is ultimately going to give me a value of negative 7. My y value 0 is 0. Less than or equal to negative 7? No, so A is wrong. B, I go ahead and put in a 0 for the value of x this time, and a negative 14 for the value of y. Is negative 14 less than or equal to 7? Yes, that's true. Let me check my next point. Okay, I'd have negative 14 again for the value of y. I've got 0 here. All right, is negative 1 less than or equal to negative 14? No, B's wrong. Next one, I jump up onto C. I plug in 0 for x again. Okay, so I'm going to end up with 7. I'm going to end up with negative 1. And then this time I have 14 for my value of y. Is 14 less than or equal to 7? No, it is not. So C is wrong. Our answer there would have to be D. I will check it just to make sure that I did this correctly. And as you should, if you get to a question like this, and if you're using substitution on a question, I actually do recommend that unless you're in a massive time crunch, you do actually check the last answer choice just to make sure you didn't mess up. Because as you can see, I just did like mental math pretty much 6 times. So odds of making a mistake for me aren't high, but for the average test taker, like you could have made a mistake. Even I could have made a mistake. I definitely just came across really arrogant, but I'm just going to keep going. Anyways, I would plug in 14 for the value of x. So 14 plus 7, that's going to be 21. And then right here, for the value of y, 0 is 0 less than or equal to 21. Yes. Plugging in 0 again, plugging in 14 here, I'm going to end up with negative 28 minus 1. So that'd be negative 29. Okay, as we can see, negative 29 is less than or equal to 0, so our answer there would be D. So I guess the quick lesson here is if you're doing substitution, try to move quickly. Once you do eliminate 3 answer choices, you should still check the 4th one because there's a chance you made a mistake. So that's something I do on the SAT math section. Even as someone who scored perfectly on back-to-back SAT math sections, I would still check that answer D just to make sure I didn't make a mistake on the mental math because, as I said, I did basically six sort of situations of mental math before getting to answer choice D. So there is a chance that anyone could make a mistake there. So wanted to quickly go over that question on substitution. And with that being said, let's move on. Here's how to solve this difficult SAT math question efficiently. Question 20 states, what is the smallest solution to the given equation? To start, I'm going to get rid of these square roots by going ahead and squaring both sides. From there, I'm going to end up getting x minus 2 squared, which is going to end up equaling 30x plus 34. Now from here, I want to ultimately get this set equal to 0 so I can solve for x. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and expand x minus 2 squared. To do that, I use the FOIL method. So I'm going to end up with x squared minus 4x plus 4 is equal to 3x plus 34. Now, like I said, I want to get this set equal to 0 so that I can ultimately solve for it. Okay, so setting equal to 0, I'm going to get x squared minus 4x, but I also have to subtract 3x from both sides to get it set equal to 0. So that's going to give me minus 7x total. And then I have that 4, but I have to subtract 34, so that's going to give me minus 30. Now from here, this is from the digital SAT. So you could plug this into Desmos and then solve for x. But in this case, I want to just go ahead and show you how you could also solve for this by hand, since that would be the little bit more difficult way to do it, but it could possibly be a little bit quicker depending on whether you're skilled at factoring like this. If you're not skilled at factoring, you can go ahead and use Desmos. Like I said, perfectly valid way of doing it. But in this case, I'll talk to you about how to factor this. So 30, you want to think about what multiplies together to get negative 30 that adds to get negative 7. So immediately I would think negative 10 and positive 3. So I would end up with x minus 10 and then x plus 3. Okay, so that's set equal to 0. Now from there, I've got two possible solutions. One would be x is equal to 10 and one would be x is equal to negative 3. Now, keep in mind that we have to have the smallest solution to the given equations. Now, the smallest solution here is negative 3 because it's obviously negative and the other value is positive. So our answer here would be negative 3. Now, if you were to graph this out, you also still need to pay attention to the fact that you need the smallest solution to the given equation. So make sure on the SAT that you always pay really close attention to what you're asked to answer with, because if you don't, you're probably going to miss points. Here's how to efficiently solve this multi-step SAT math question. Question 21 states that the regular price of a shirt at a store is $11.70. The sale price of a shirt the shirt is 80% less than the regular price, and the sale price is 30% greater than the store's cost for the shirt. What was the store's cost in dollars for the shirt? Okay, so we want to solve for the store's cost. Well, we know that the price, the regular price, is 11.7. We know it's on sale for 80%. So let's go ahead and solve for the sale price, because in order to get the store's cost, we need to first know the sale price. So the sale price is 11.7 times 0.2 because the shirt is 80% off. All right, so now we have the sale price. So that's going to equal our sale price. So I'm just going to write that as sale. Well, we also know that the sale price is equal to, well, it's 30% greater than the store's cost. So we want to solve for the store's cost. So the store's cost times 1.3 is going to give us the sale price. Well, we already know the sale price and we want to solve for costs. We know that the sale price divided by 1.3 will equal our cost. We have our sale price up here, so we can go ahead and go like this, 11.7 divided by 11.7 times 0.2. That is our sale price. We then divide that by 1.3 and we get our cost. Okay, so now we can go ahead and plug this into our calculator and let's see what we get. So we got 11.7 times 0.2 divided by 1.3. And that'll give us our answer of 1.8 is equal to the cost. So 1.8 is our answer there. Here's how to efficiently solve this SAT math question about density. Question 22 states that a sample of oak has a density of 807 kilograms per cubic meter. The sample is in the shape of a cube where each edge has a length of 0.9 meters. To the nearest whole number, what is the mass in kilograms of this sample? All right, so we know our equation for density is mass over volume is equal to our density. In this case, we're told our density is 807 kilograms per cubic meter. Make sure we're paying close attention to units. In this case, it's kilograms per cubic meter. We also see we're dealing in meters and we're asked for our answer in kilograms. So we're not going to be dealing with any unit conversion. So that makes this a lot easier. Now we know that our mass is what we're trying to solve for. Okay, so we know our mass then is going to equal 807 times our volume. Now we have to solve for our volume. We know that is from a cube, which has each length of 0.9 meters. Now keep in mind our equation for volume of a cube would be the cube's edge length cubed, okay? Because all of these side lengths are the same in a cube. All right, so ultimately that's going to be 0.9 cubed. All right, so now we've got our equation. Let's go ahead and put it into our calculator and we will get our answer. So we're gonna do 807 multiplied by 0.9 cubed, and that'll give us our answer of 588 for the value of our mass. So our answer is answer choice A. Here's how to avoid a common misconception on the SAT. Question 23 states for x is positive, the function f is defined as follows. F of x equals 201% of x. Which of the following could describe this function? Many people would be tempted to pick increasing exponential here because they see this 201%, but that's not correct. The correct answer here is increasing linear. And the reason why is because if f of x is equaling 201% of x, it's going to scale linearly with x. And here's why. If you were to write this out as an equation, it would be f of x is equal to 1 times x. Because think about it. If x is 1 and f of x is 200, and I'll just draw this as a table actually really quick. Okay, we'll do x is 1 and x is 2, and you'll kind of be able to see how this works. Okay, so our y value when x is 1 in this case would be 2. Well, what's our y value when x is 2 then? Well, that would be 4.02. Now, what about when it's 3? Well, then it'd be 6 point. And as you can see, each time we are increasing by 2.01. So this is linear increasing. Okay, so if you see a question like this on the SAT, don't fall for the misconception of it being exponential when it's actually linear. And if you want something to help you figure out if it is exponential or linear, try making a table with 3 values and that should help you figure it out. Here's how to solve this difficult SAT math question that deals with transformations left and right of graphs. Question 24 states the rational function f is defined by an equation in the form f of x equals a over x plus b, where a and b are constants. The partial graph of y equals f of x is shown. If g of x is equal to f of x plus 4, which equation could define g? The key thing to help you solve this quickly is to understand that when g of x is equal to f of x plus 4, that is a transformation of the graph of f of x to the left by 4 units. Okay, now if it was x minus 4, it'd be a transformation to the right 4 units. But since we know it's a transformation to the left 4 units, this is gonna make this question a lot easier. Now, as you can see, I'm making a dot up here at the point -10 and -1. And the reason why I'm doing that is because if you take a quick glance at your answer choices, it's gonna help you see that getting to the point of -1 for your y value or your g of x value should be pretty easy because all of your numerators are 6. So in order to find that value, you have to find the answer choice that will get you to a g of x value of -1, okay, because that's that y value, when x is -14. And you may be wondering how I get to that -14 number, but I'll quickly show you. Okay, if we're transforming this by going to the left 4, okay, I'll go ahead and draw -11, -12, -13, -14. Okay, then this dot has to shift over to that -14. Okay, so the new point will need to be at -14 and -1. So as you can see, what I did is I just put those points in, and now I'm just going to check my answer choices and find which one has that correct. I see in option A, that'd be 6 over -14, which does not equal -1. I see in B, I'd have 6 over -10, which is also not equal to -1. I see in C that I would have 6 over -14 plus 8. -14 plus 8 is -6. That'd be 6 over -6, which is equal to -1. So I see C would be my answer. I can quickly check D. The D I see is actually just going to be g of x is equal to 6. So that could never be the correct answer. Okay, so my answer there would have to be answer choice C. Here's how to solve questions about adding fractions on the SAT math section. Question 25 states which expression is equivalent to, and then you've got kind of this mess of fractions that you're adding together with a bunch of variables. But I'm going to simplify this down for you and show you how you can do this pretty easily. What you ultimately need to first get is a common denominator in both of these fractions. I see I have x minus 8 here, which means I'm probably going to be looking at x minus 8 as one of the factors in this right here. So let's go ahead and see if we do have that as a factor. Okay, we see that x squared y minus 8xy can also be rewritten as, let's see, x minus 8 times xy. All right, so that's going to be the same. So from there, we see that this right here, we don't really need to do anything to. But what we do have to do is with this y plus 12 over x minus 8. Okay, we ultimately need to multiply this by xy over xy. Okay, so now we have to go ahead and distribute our xy to 12 and also to y. Once we do that, we're going to end up with xy squared plus 12xy. Okay, and since we have the same denominators here, we can go ahead and add this y times x minus 8. Well, we know that y times x is going to give us another yx, so plus another xy, and then we'll also have a y times minus 8, which will give us a minus 8y. Okay, and keep in mind that this is still all over that denominator of x minus 8 times xy. Well, let's go ahead and simplify this down. That's going to end up being xy squared. Let me go ahead and write that a little bit neater. Xy squared plus 13xy, since we are combining these two terms. Okay, and then we also have minus 8y, and keep in mind this is all still over that denominator of x squared y minus 8. All right, from here, we go ahead and find which answer choice matches this, and we see that'll be answer choice C, so C will be our answer there. Here's why you need to pay attention to details on the SAT math section. Question 26 states that the table shows the results of a poll. A total of 803 voters selected at random were asked if the candidate they would vote for in the upcoming were asked which candidate they would vote for in the upcoming election. According to the poll, if 6,424 people would vote in the election, by how many votes would Angel Cruz be expected to win? The key thing with the SAT math section in general is you need to know what you need to answer with. In this case, it is by how many votes Angel Cruz would be expected to win. So it's not how many votes Angel Cruz would get. It's not how many votes his competitor would get. It's by how many votes he would beat his competitor by. So it's the difference between the two. So because it's the difference between the two, what we ultimately want to do is we want to take this poll and we want to find the difference between those two. So we're going to do 483 minus 320. And we have to put that all over the number of people who are in the poll, which is 803. Okay, and the next thing we have to do is we have to multiply that number by the amount of people who are actually going to be voting in the election, because we're wanting to write how many votes they are expecting him to win by, right? The difference in the expectations of what will happen with the actual number of people, which is 6,424. Okay, so I'll go ahead and multiply that by 6,424. All right, now we'll put this into our calculator and get the answer. So the answer is 1,304, which we see is going to be answer choice B. Here's how to use Desmos to be more efficient on the digital SAT. Question 27 states that the graph of x squared plus x plus y squared plus y is equal to 199 over 2 in the xy plane is a circle. What is the length of the circle's radius? With a question like this, there's a lot of room for error if you try to do it by hand. So I highly recommend using the graphing calculator that's available on the digital SAT to do this. So the graphing calculator on the digital SAT pretty much works just like Desmos. So I'll go ahead and give you a look at how I would set this up. It's really simple. All I would do is put in this equation into the graphing calculator. And since I'm looking for the circle's radius, I would first find 2 points that are really easy to calculate. So I see I have one here at the x coordinate negative 0.5 and the y coordinate 9.5. And then I just find the opposite coordinate, right? So I just go straight down. And I see I have at negative 0.5, so the same x coordinate. My y coordinate is negative 10.5. So that difference is from 9.5 down to negative 10.5. So that means that I know my diameter is 20. Go ahead and write that. We know that our diameter is 20, so 20 is equal to d. We know that our radius then has to equal 10. And we're asked to answer with our radius, so that gives us our answer right there. The answer is 10. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math problem. Question 1 states Isabel grows potatoes in her garden. This year she harvested 760 potatoes and saved 10% of them to plant next year. How many of the harvested potatoes did Isabel save to plant next year? All you got to do is take your total amount of potatoes, multiply that by the percentage that she saved, which represented as a decimal of 0.1. And you're going to get your answer of 76, which is answer choice B. Here's how to find the y-intercept of this graph on the SAT. Question 2 states, what is the y-intercept of the graph shown? We find where it crosses that y-axis, and we see that's at 2. So our answer there will be 0, 2, which is answer choice B. Here's how to convert units on the SAT math section. Question 3 states, what length in centimeters is equivalent to a length of 51 meters, where 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeters? Well, we know that we have 51 meters, which I'm going to represent with meters as m for that unit. It's not a variable, but it's the unit. Okay, now we want to get rid of meters. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by the fact that we have 1 meter per 100 centimeters. Now notice how my number of meters is going to cancel out, and the unit that I'm going to be left with is centimeters. So as we can see, 51 times 100 is going to leave us with 5,100 centimeters. So our answer is answer choice C. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question about distance. Question 4 states a bus is traveling at a constant speed along a straight portion of a road. The equation d is equal to 30t gives the distance d in feet from a road marker, that the bus will be t seconds after passing the marker. How many feet from the marker will the bus be 2 seconds after passing the marker? Well, all we have to do is plug in 2 for t, since t represents the number of seconds after passing the marker, and that'll give us our distance d that we are from the marker. So d will equal 30 times 2 in this situation, since we are doing the distance 2 seconds after passing the marker, and that will give us 60. So our answer there will be answer choice C. Here's how to simplify on the SAT math section by distributing a negative sign. Question 5 states which expression is equivalent to 20w minus 4w plus 3w. What you'll do here is you'll distribute that negative sign to that 4w and to that 3w, and that'll leave you with 20w minus 4w minus 3w. And that's ultimately going to end up being the same as 20w minus 7w, which is 13w. So our answer there is answer choice B. Here's how to use proportions to solve this SAT math question faster. The question is, if 6 plus x equals 9, what is the value of 18 plus 3x? Immediately, I recognize that 6 plus x, if we multiply it by 3, we get 18 plus 3x. All we got to do is take this 9 and multiply it by 3, which will give us 27 as our answer. So if you see a question like this on the SAT, see if you can multiply it by something to get what's right here, and that will help you get to your answer faster without having to solve for your variable x. Here's how to quickly find the x coordinate of a vertex of a quadratic. If you you take a look at this question, it states the given equation relates the variables x and y. For what value of x does the value of y reach its minimum? Well, in this case, we see we have a quadratic x squared minus 14x plus 22. Now, what you have to do then is you have to take the value of negative b over 2a, and that will give you the x coordinate of your vertex. Now, in this case, we're asked for the value of x where y reaches its minimum. Now, y will reach its minimum at the x coordinate of the vertex. So all we got to do is do negative b over 2a. Well, our b value is negative 14. So we have negative 14, which will give us positive 14 over 2 times a. We see in this case, our a value is just 1. So 14 over 2 will give us a value of 7. So our answer there has to be 7. Here's how to find an equivalent expression for a question like number 8. Which expression is equivalent to 9x squared plus 5x? In this situation, I see I can pull out an x by factoring. So if I do that, I'm going to end up with x times 9x plus 5. Okay, let's see if we have that anywhere. We see we do have that as option A, so that'd be our answer. I'll quickly show you why B, C, and D are wrong as well. Okay, obviously 5 times 9 gets us 45. That's not found anywhere. 9 times 5 again. Okay, that's not found anywhere. And then right here, we'd end up with an x cubed value. Okay, so as we can see, our answer there would have to be D. Okay, you can tell that just by factoring, but I want to go ahead and show you why B, C, and D are wrong as well. Here's how to quickly solve this question about finding angle measures in a triangle on the SAT. Question 9 states in triangle ABC, the measure of angle B is 52, the measure of angle C is 17. What is the measure of angle A? Well, we know that the sum of all the angles in a triangle must add to 180. So all we have to do here is do 180 degrees minus 17 degrees minus 52 degrees, and that'll give us the value of angle A. And 50 plus 17 is going to give us 69. 180 minus 69 will give us 111. So our answer there would be answer choice D. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question. Question 10 states the graphs of the equations in the given systems of equations intersect at the point xy in the xy plane. What is the value of y? All right, it's pretty easy to solve for y here. All you got to do is go ahead and substitute x equals 8. And for x, we know 8 squared is 64. So we're going to end up with y is equal to 64 plus 8, which we know is going to equal 72. So our answer there is D. Here's how to answer scatter plot questions on the SAT math section. Question 11 states a scatter plot shows the relationship between two variables, x and y. A line of best fit is also shown. Which of the following equations best represents the line of best fit shown? So immediately what I'm going to look for is my y-intercept, which I see is right around 13.5. Then I'm also going to look at my slope, which I see is negative. So I see that I have positive slopes and answer choice is C and answer choice is A, so I can get rid of them. I see I have the wrong y-intercept and answer choice D, so my answer there has to be answer choice B. Here's a trick to make your life easier on the SAT when dealing with square roots. Question 12 states the function f is defined by f of x equals 8 times the square root of x. For what value of x does f of x equal 48? Well, let's go ahead and start by writing out our equation. So we're going to have 48 is equal to 8 root x. Now, you could go ahead and square both sides, but I don't recommend doing that because you're going to end up with a really large number. Instead, what I recommend doing is dividing both sides by 8 to start. 48 over 8 is going to leave you with 6 is equal to the square root of x. From here, now's a great time to go ahead and square both sides because you don't have to square the value of 48. Now you end up with 36 is equal to x. So your answer there is going to be C. Here's how to efficiently solve this geometry problem on the SAT. Question 13 states a circle has center O and points R and S lie on the circle. In triangle ORS, the measure of angle ROS is 88. And what is the measure of RSO in degrees? All right, let's draw this out because it's going to make it a lot easier to visualize. Okay, we've got this center O and we've got ROS, which is 88 degrees. So ROS. Key thing we need to understand here is that the side length from R to O and O to S are going to be the same length. Now, that's important because we can go ahead and put in this 88 degrees for this angle measure. Now, we want to know what the measure of angle RSO is. So let's go ahead and draw this triangle. Okay, now, as you can see, we have an isosceles triangle. Now, an isosceles triangle means that these two sides are the same, which also means that the angle ORS and the angle RSO are the same. So now, since we know all of the degrees in a triangle will sum, all of the angles in a triangle will sum to 180 degrees. We can do 180 degrees. We'll subtract the 88 degrees that we have in this angle here, and then we will divide it by 2 since we know that we have 2 of these angles that will have the same measure. Okay, and once we do that, we will get that angle RSO. So 180 minus 88 is going to leave us with 92. 92 divided by 2 is going to leave us with 46 as our answer for angle RSO. Here's how to efficiently solve this SAT math question. Question 14 states, what is the sum of the solutions to the given equation? Well, let's go ahead and distribute our x. Ultimately, we're going to want to set this equal to 0. So let's go ahead and just try to do that, right? So we'll distribute this x. We're going to end up with x squared plus x minus 56 is equal to 4x squared because we're going to distribute that 4x. And then we will have minus 28x. All right, let's go ahead and set it equal to 0. To do that, I'm actually going to subtract everything on my left side because I don't want to deal with subtracting a 4x squared because then I have a negative coefficient in front of my x squared value. And just a piece of advice, I would generally try to avoid having a negative coefficient in front of your x squared value, just something that I would usually recommend, right? And it's also easier to subtract, just a coefficient of 1 than it is 1 of 4. So anyways, that's why I'm choosing to do it this way. So we'll go ahead and do this. We'll have to add 56. Okay, so we're going to end up getting a 4x squared minus x squared. It's going to leave us with 3x squared. We have minus 28x, which we also have to subtract another x. That's going to end up leaving us with a minus 29x. And then we also have this plus 56. So plus 56. Okay, now from here, you have a couple of options. You could try to factor this out, or you could just use Desmos. In a situation like this, honestly, I would just use Desmos. You're dealing with 56, 29, 3. You might be able to factor something out there, but there's really not necessary. So let's go ahead and use Desmos to solve this. So as you can see in the graph, we've got two solutions. And keep in mind, we have to answer with the sum of the solutions. So the first solution that we have is at 2.667. So in other words, if we convert that into thirds, that would be 8 over 3. Okay, so we have 8 over 3, and then we also have 7. Okay, if we convert 7 into thirds, that'd be 21 over 3. So 8 plus 21 is going to give us 29 over 3 as our final answer there. Okay, so 29 over 3 is the sum of the solutions. Now, once again, as always on the SAT math section, you have to pay very close attention to what you're asked to answer with. In this case, it is the sum of the solutions. So that's how we get to that 29 over 3. So always make sure you're paying close attention to what you're asked to answer with on the SAT math section. In this case, the answer 29 over 3. Here's a trick you can use to save time on the SAT math section. Question 15, it says, the solution to the given system of equations is xy. What is the value of 5x? On the SAT, you always want to pay attention to what you're asked to answer with. In this case, it's the value of 5x. We don't necessarily have to actually solve for x to get our answer. We just need to know the value of 5x. So the reason that's important is because if you see stacked equations like this on the SAT, you're typically going to look to add, subtract, or substitute something in order to get to the value asked to answer with, because like I said, you don't always actually have to solve for x, and you don't always have to actually solve for x and y. So in this case, what I'm actually going to be looking to do is substitution, because I see I have y is equal to 3x, and I see I have a 2x here. I know 2x plus 3x is going to give me 5x. So when I substitute in that 3x for y, I end up with 5x is equal to 12, and I know my answer has to be C, and I never had to actually find the value of x. Here's how to solve this question about volume on the SAT. Question 16 states a cube has an edge length of 41 inches. What is the volume in cubic inches of the cube? One thing you want to pay attention to on the SAT math section is units. In this case, you see they're both inches, so it's very easy. Okay, all you have to do is take your 41 inches for your edge length and raise it to the power of 3. Okay, so 41 raised to the power of 3. You put it in your calculator and you're going to get answer choice D, 68,921. The reason we're raising it to the power of 3 is because a cube has a length, width, and height that are all the same, so the volume is just 41 cubed. Here's how to answer this question about population growth on the SAT math section. Question 17 states the given function P models the population of Lowell T years after a census. Which of the following functions best models the population of Lowell M months after the consensus? The key thing to understand here is that this equation up here, P of T, is representing the population T years after the consensus. But we have to convert this into months after the consensus. So to do that, we need this T to turn into that T needs to turn into an M over 12. That way, at 12 months, we have 12 over 12, which is 1 year, which would be the same as T being 1 year. So we can go ahead and get rid of A and B. Next thing we can look at is the difference between C and D. Now, we have to keep in mind, we aren't needing to divide our growth factor at all. Because think about it, if we divide 1.06 over 12, we now have a decreasing population because that's going to result in a value that's less than 1. And that's not the case. We know our population is increasing every year. Okay, our growth factor remains the same. All we're changing is the unit of time. So we have M over 12 to account for the fact we are changing from years to months. Our growth factor remains the same and our initial population remains the same, and our answer is D. Here's a trick to use on the SAT math section to be way more efficient. If you take a look at question 18, it says the solution to the given system of equations is x, y. What is the value of y? On the SAT math section, especially whenever you see stacked equations like this, always pay really close attention to what you're asked to answer with. In this case, it's the value of y. Now, whenever I see stacked equations like this, what I'm usually going to look to do is either substitute if I have something like y equals and then something that doesn't include another variable. But in this case, they both have variables. There's an x and y in each of these equations. So instead of substitution, I am looking for addition and subtraction of adding or subtracting this bottom equation from the top one. Now, sometimes that'll require me to multiply the bottom and the top equation by some number. In this case, it does. I'm going to multiply this bottom equation by 3. And the reason why is because once I do that and I distribute this 3 to all of these numbers, I will end up with 6x, and then I can subtract my bottom equation from my top, and I'll end up with 6x minus 6x. I'll be able to get rid of my x's. I'll have 7y minus 6y, and that will leave me with my value of y. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to end up with 6x minus 6x. X's are gone. 7y minus 6y, which means that we have 1y left, and then we have 28 minus 30, which leaves us with -2, and our value of y is -2, and our answer there is A. So there's some advice on how you can deal with stacked equations on the SAT and work them to your advantage to be more efficient. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. Question 19 states the minimum value of x is 12 less than 6 times another number n, which inequality shows possible values of x. Well, we know that the minimum value of x, which means that x must be greater than or equal to this number, okay? And it's 12 less, so it's gonna be minus 12, 6 times another number n, so 6 times n. And as we can see, this perfectly matches up with answer choice B. So B will be our correct answer there. Here's how to efficiently solve this SAT math question. Question 20 states dataset A consists of the height of 75 buildings and has a mean of 32 meters. Dataset B consists of a height of 50 buildings and has a mean of 62 meters. Dataset C consists of the heights of 125 buildings from datasets A and B. What is the mean in meters of dataset C? Okay, so ultimately for this question, we need to calculate the mean of dataset C. Well, we know that that is a composite of the dataset A and B together. So what we need to do is we need to get the total amount of height in meters from datasets A and B combined. So to do that, we're going to take the 75 buildings that are in dataset A, multiply it by the mean of 32, and that'll give us that total height from dataset A. We then have to add on to that the total height from dataset B, which is going to be those 50 buildings multiplied by those 62 meters of those 50 buildings. So from there, we then have to divide by that 125 buildings total. So here we're getting our total height in our numerator and the number of buildings in the denominator, and that will ultimately get us to our answer. Once we put it in our calculator, let's see what we get, of 44. So 44 is our answer. Here's 3 different strategies that you can use to solve question 21, and stick around to the end because at the end, I'm gonna discuss how to know which strategies you should be using on certain questions when there's different ways that you can get to the right answer. All right, so let's go ahead and read through the question. The graph of 9x minus 10y equals 19 is translated down 4 units in the xy plane. What is the x-coordinate of the x-intercept of the resulting graph? So a couple things that jump out right away. If we're looking for the x-intercept, we know that's going to be where y is 0. We need to find the x-coordinate of that x-intercept. We're going down 4 units, and we also want to make note that this is in standard linear form, not slope-intercept form. Okay, so let's start with the first and probably the most commonly used approach. That would be converting this into slope-intercept form, and then translating it down those 4 units. So let's go ahead and do that. If we're converting this into slope-intercept form, the way that I would approach it is we're gonna have 9x minus 10y is equal to 19. I would isolate y. In this case, I would actually add 10y to the right and left sides, and I would subtract 19. So I'd end up with 9x minus 19 is equal to 10y. I divide both sides by 10, and I'd end up with 9 over 10x minus 19 over 10. All right, now keep in mind that we are ultimately going to translate this graph down 4 units in the xy plane. So if we're translating it down 4 units, we would subtract by 40 over 10, okay, is equal to y. Now we want to find where our x-intercept is. Well, our x-intercept is going to be where y is equal to 0. So we can now set this equal to 0. Now from here, I'm going to combine this negative 19 over 10 and this negative 40 over 10 into negative 59 over 10. Then I'll add it to both sides and I'll end up with 59 over 10 is equal to 9 over 10x. Okay, now from here, all we got to do is multiply both sides by 10 and we get 59 is equal to 9x. From there to isolate x, we see that x would equal 59 over 9. Okay, so 59 over 9 is our right answer, but that's just one of the ways to get there. Let's talk about the other 2 different ways to get there. Okay, so one of them is pretty similar to the way that we just did, but probably a couple less steps. Okay, and this is kind of for people who are a little bit more advanced in math, who maybe are able to sort of pick up on something like this a little bit quicker. Okay, let's say that we have 9x minus 10y equals 19. All right, now if we're translating this down 4 units, okay, then that's the same as doing 9x minus 10y plus 4 in parentheses equals 19. Okay, and this just kind of saves a couple steps, right? We distribute that 10 over, we're going to end up with 9x minus 10y, and then minus 40 is equal to 19. All right, so from here, once again, like I said before, our x-intercept is where y is equal to 0. So this would ultimately, and I'm just going to kind of bring this up here, okay, we put in 0 for y, we end up with 9x minus 40 is equal to 19. We add 40 to both sides, we get 59 is equal to 9x. We divide both sides by 9, and once again, we get that same answer of 59 over 9. Okay, so now there is also a third way to solve this. Okay, I want to make a point at the end that'll help you with other questions on the SAT too. So the third way is kind of a halfway point between this one and the other one, but it's more so like the first step that we did. So let me go ahead and pull up Desmos because this is for the digital SAT. So you do have access to Desmos in your testing environment. So the way that I would do this using Desmos is I would pretty much convert it into slope-intercept form, and then I would put it into Desmos and use that to get to the rest of the answer. So as you can see, if you do that, you look for where it equals 0, and that's at 6.556, which is 59/9. Now, the disadvantage of using Desmos is it's not going to give you a perfect fraction, but most of the time, it's pretty easy to figure it out. This is probably one of the more difficult cases where it's something being divided over 9, and it's a little bit more difficult to discern what the fraction is. But most of the time, it's usually something over 3 or over 5 or over 4, and it's pretty easy to do. But now that we've talked about the 3 different methods that you can use for solving this question, I want to talk about how you know which method you should use just generally on certain questions, because there are oftentimes certain shortcuts you can use, and many times, maybe not many times, but some people may not know those shortcuts exist. So are they worth learning? When should you use them? How much focus should you put into using shortcuts versus using Desmos? I think it's something we really do need to talk about, because with the digital SAT, everything is very different. And I think it really comes down to how comfortable you are using sort of shortcuts like the one I showed you in the second way of solving this, where you know that it's translated y plus 4, right? If you don't know those shortcuts, rely more on Desmos, convert things into slope-intercept form. There's so many different, maybe not so many, but there's sometimes a couple different ways to get to an answer. And you ultimately need to use what you're most comfortable with. Now, is it good to still learn shortcuts? Yes, because it can save you time. So especially if you're someone who struggles with time, it's probably worth learning them. But if you're someone who can move really fast by converting things into slope-intercept form and using Desmos, then do it. And maybe don't worry as much about learning these shortcuts. My job is to give you as many tools as you can to be successful, but ultimately you do need to pay attention to what you're most comfortable with. There are certain times where the method that I use, I'll show you 2 different methods, and you may choose one that I don't necessarily prefer to use. And that's okay, but you ultimately should be focused on what you're most comfortable with, what you're fastest with, what you're fastest and most accurate with. So you kind of got to make a judgment call for yourself. My job is to give you as many strategies as you can to be successful. If you find that some of them are a little bit too advanced for you, that's okay. Notice how you could get to this answer using slope-intercept form and Desmos, right? So it's possible to still do highly well, extremely well in the SAT math section and not know every shortcut. But like I said, if you do struggle with time, it is worth knowing those shortcuts. So I guess to wrap all this up and to bring it to a conclusion, I'm going to give you the tools and as many different ways to solve things as I can. I'll give you what I recommend. I'll try to give you strategies, but you also need to take into account your personal situation, how comfortable you are using certain strategies, and that'll help you do the best that you possibly can on the SAT. So there's my little rant for this question. Here's how to answer this question about the exponential growth formula on the SAT. Question 22 states 2 variables, x and y, are related such that for each increase of 1 in the value of x, the value of y increases by a factor of 4. When x equals 0, y equals 200, which equation represents the relationship? Well, this piece of information right here is giving us our initial value. When x is 0, y is 200. So we need to have that y equals 200. So we can go ahead and get rid of a and b because they both don't have the correct initial value. Now, as for our growth factor, we know our growth factor is 4. It's stated pretty explicitly right here. For every increase in the value of x by 1, we increase our value in y by a factor of 4. Now we have to keep in mind we are going to raise this to the power of x because this is exponential growth. Every time we increase the value of x by 1, we increase y by a factor of 4. That is exponential growth down to the definition. So we know our answer there has to be answer choice D, and there's a quick review on exponential growth for you. Here's how to solve one of the most difficult SAT math questions in a standard way and a way to finesse the question if you're not sure how to do the standard way. All right, so question 23 states one solution to a given equation can be written as 1 plus root k, where k is a constant. What is the value of k? So the key part to this is you seeing that you have 1 plus the square root of k and recognizing that you're probably going to be dealing with some sort of squares there. All right, so the next thing you really need to understand is how to ultimately get this into the point where you're completing a square, right? And if this sounds complicated, it kind of is, but at the end, I'll show you a way that you can finesse this. So just hang with me here. All right, so you're going to start by adding 9 to both sides. You'll end up with x squared minus 2x is equal to positive 9. Now, what you ultimately want to get and what your goal is here is, since you saw you have this, you want to get to a point where you have x something squared set equal to some constant. Okay, and the reason why is because, I guess I'll just get to that kind of as I go through this, but you'll see why you want to get there, and that's what I'm trying to get to. All right, so we have x squared minus 2x is equal to 9. Now, like I said, I want to get to x something squared. Now, x squared minus 2x, I know x minus 1 squared isn't going to quite get me exactly x squared minus 2x. It would give me x squared minus 2x plus 1. So what do I have to do here? Well, I've got to add 1 to both sides. So if I add 1 to both sides, I'm going to end up with x squared minus 2x plus 1 is equal to 9 plus 1, which is 10. Well, now from here, I can set that equal to that x minus 1 squared. So now I'm where I want to be, okay? Because from here, I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of both sides. And now I have root 10. And now keep in mind that root 10 is plus or minus, okay? Because we are taking the square root of it. So it'll be plus or minus root 10. It's going to equal our x minus 1, okay? Now from here, we go ahead and add 1 to both sides. We get 1 plus or minus root 10 is equal to x. Okay, now if we look at the format for the solutions, right, we need to be writing it as 1 plus root k. Well, we see that one of our solutions here would be 1 plus root 10. Okay, so we know our answer for the value of k is 10. Okay, so our answer there would be B. Now, let's say you don't know how to do this, which honestly, like it's one of the most difficult SAT math questions, so it wouldn't be that surprising. Okay, if you don't know how to do this and you get to the SAT and maybe you are able to do it in practice, but on the SAT you just kind of panic or you're running out of time, here's an alternative method that you can kind of finesse to get to the right answer. All right, so I'm going to use Desmos here. And keep in mind, the reason I'm using this is because on the new digital SAT, you pretty much have access to Desmos within Blue Book, the testing platform. So you'll be able to use this. So what I'm going to do here is I plug in my equation. Now, keep in mind, this is set equal to 0, right? I'll go ahead and circle that so you see what I'm referring to, right? We're set equal to 0. So we want to find where we are equaling 0, okay? So where we are crossing our x-axis. Now, if we take a look, we see that we cross our x-axis at 4.162. Now, what else do we know? And I'm going to go ahead and erase this. Since we have that the solution must be 1 plus root k, and we know that our solution is equal to 4.162, because we see that on Desmos, we can do this. We've got 4.162. We subtract 1 from that. We get 3.162. We know that that's got to equal the square root of some number k. Now, since this is multiple choice, we can actually just plug in these numbers and get to our right answer. But I want to talk about what if this was free response. You can still finesse it even if it was free response. And here's how. The way I would look at this is I know that the square root of 9 is 3. And I see that we need to get a little bit higher than that. So then what I would do is I would put in the square root of 10. And keep in mind, this might not work if you're dealing with numbers that are like the square root of 500, but that question typically wouldn't be asked on the SAT because that would be extremely complex. And if you already have a question as complex as this, you're probably going to be dealing with a k value that's not, extreme, right? So I see 3.162. I know that 9, if I take square root of that, it's 3. I go up 1, I take square root of 10, and I get 3.162. So that's how you can finesse this, even if it's not multiple choice. Obviously, since it's multiple choice, you could just go ahead and plug in the 8, the 10, the 20, and see which one works, and you'd get 10. So I wanted to go ahead and show you this because it's a great example of how you can use the digital SATs. Desmo is basically being built in to your advantage. And if you have a graphing calculator, it's the same thing. So hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully you understand better how you can finesse the SAT if you do forget how to do things, the normal way, quote unquote. Here's something you need to know about standard deviation for the SAT math section. I'm going to illustrate this through question 24. The dot plots represent the distributions of values in datasets A and B. Which of the following statements must be true? Then we have two statements here. One being the median of dataset A is equal to the median of dataset B, and then 2 being the standard deviation of dataset A is equal to the standard deviation of dataset B. Now, whenever you have anything like a histogram or scatter plots or 2 datasets, you always want to compare the shape of them to each other, okay? Or the values of them to each other if it's the case that they are just listed out in numerical form. But in this case, we have the shapes. So we want to compare the shapes of these two together. And as you can see, they're the same except for these 2 dots in dataset A. We see that there's 3 dots here for 13, but in dataset B, there's only 1. Okay, so we're looking at this as the only difference. Now, as far as the medians, we see that since everything else is the same, right, we would cross out these and we would end up getting a median of 13. And then over here in dataset B, we'd also get a median of 13. So their medians are the same. Okay, so we know that 1 is true. Let's see if we can answer it just based on that. We know that 1 must be true. Doesn't look like that will get us there on its own. So let's go ahead and look at number 2. Standard deviation of dataset A is equal to standard deviation of dataset B. Well, we know that that can't be true. And here's why. Okay, even though these things have the mostly the same shape, this difference of 2 more values being centered around the median is going to make it so that the standard deviation of dataset A is lower than that of dataset B. Okay, they can't be the same. In order for the standard deviations to be the same, they have to be the same, right? They have to be the same data sets for the most part. Generally on the SAT, that's pretty much the case, okay? Because they don't really get too in-depth into the actual equation for standard of deviation. They pretty much just want you to be able to visually tell in terms of standard deviation. So yeah, what you need to know here is that since we're adding more concentration around the median, around the mean value, okay, that means that our standard deviation is going to be lower in dataset A. Okay, so the answer here is that 1 is true, number 2 is false. Okay, so that would be, which of the following must be true? The answer is A, 1 only. Here's how to solve this really difficult SAT math problem. The first way being how you can finesse it since it's a multiple choice, and the second way I'll show you how you can solve it on the off case that you come up with a question like this that is a free response answer. So that being said, let's go and get into it. Question 25 states an isosceles right triangle has a perimeter of 94 plus 94 root 2 inches. What is the length in inches of one leg of the triangle? Okay, so ultimately the length of one leg is pretty easy to find, and the reason why is it's an isosceles right triangle. So isosceles right triangle, and I'm going to draw this out as I recommend you do with questions about triangles and circles on the SAT. We've got these two side lengths will be the same because, like I said, isosceles. Now that means it's going to be a 45, 45, 90 triangle. Okay, therefore, we know our hypotenuse will be x root 2, where x is the value of one of the legs. Okay, from here, let's go ahead and set up our equation. We know our perimeter is 94 plus 94 root 2. We know that's going to equal 2x plus x root 2. Okay, we get that by taking x plus x plus x root 2. Okay, from here, I'm looking to solve for x, right? So I'm going to go ahead and factor out x from my right side. I'm going to get x times 2 plus root 2. Okay. Now, to ultimately solve for x, then I just divide both sides by this 2 plus root 2. Okay, so now I have isolated my x. This is over 2 plus root 2. Now, since this is multiple choice, what I would do at this point is I would just go ahead and put this right here in my calculator. I'd get whatever it is as a decimal, and then I would just check A through D and find the answer. That is the fastest way to do it since it's multiple choice. So that's what I would 100% recommend. And I would, without a doubt, with no question, that's what I'm doing if it's multiple choice, which it is in this case. So that's a strategy you should use on multiple choice. However, this question or one like it could come up as a free response question. And the way that they would do that, since it's dealing with a square root, is they would probably say, they would do something like this. They would put like some variable underneath the square root and say, what's the value of D in the answer? So I am going to show you how you solve this in case you come across one of these that is free response. So let's continue this question. Okay, so we know that x is equal to this right here. Now, we need to ultimately get this so it's actually a number, right? We need to get it so that it's something we can put in on free response. Now, to do that, we have to multiply by 2 minus the square root of 2. Okay, so we multiply by 2 minus square root of 2. And the reason that we have to do this is because we have 2 plus root 2 here. And by taking the difference of these squares, it's going to help us get rid of the square root that's in the denominator. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. Okay, we're going to have this 2 times 2, and I'll do the denominator first. So we'd have this 2 times 2, that's going to give us 4. Okay, we're going to have 4 times, let's see, we're going to have this plus root 2 times 2, and we're going to have this minus root 2 times 2. So keep in mind, those are going to cancel. That's why we're doing this. We're doing the difference of these squares. Okay, so that square root is now going to get canceled out. Okay, one thing we will still have is this root 2 times this negative root 2, which will give us a minus 2, right? So we're going to end up with a 4 minus 2, minus 2. Okay, now in our denominator, or I'm sorry, our numerator, we also have to do this, right? So we have to take the same thing and we have to FOIL it out. All right, so we got 94 times 2. We know that's going to be 188, so we got 188. We've also got 94 root 2 times 2, so that's going to give us plus a 1 root 2. We've also got a 94 times negative root 2, which will give us a minus 94 root 2. Okay, and I know I'm running out of room there, so I'm actually going to erase this and bring it up. Okay, so as you can see, I folded out. I brought it up here so you can see it a little bit better and it's a little bit bigger. Now from here, we can go ahead and see that we have 188 minus 188. Okay, so those are going to cancel, so I'm just going to go ahead and erase those. Okay, we still have this plus 188 square root 2 minus 94 square root 2. That's going to leave us with a positive 94 square root 2. So now we have 94 square root 2 over 2. 94 over 2 will leave us with 47. And now we are left with our answer of 47 root 2. So that's how you solve it if it is free response. Okay, the key thing being right here, down in your denominator, you have to multiply by flipping the sign within that parentheses, okay, in order to get that difference of squares. Okay, so that's the key to solving this if it is free response. Remember though, if it's multiple choice, do not do this. It will take way too long. Just put it in a calculator and then plug in A through D and find the right answer. Here's how to solve SAT math questions that deal with the number of real solutions. Question 26 states in the given equation, C is a constant. The equation has exactly one real solution. What is the value of C? Well, if you're unfamiliar with how to calculate the number of real solutions, you're going to use this formula called b squared minus 4ac. Okay, and keep in mind, you use this when you have a quadratic equation like here, set equal to 0. Okay, and in this equation, your a value is what's in front of your x squared value, your b value is what's in front of x, and then your c value is your constant, which in this case is just being represented as c. Now, If b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, then that means that there are two real solutions. So that means there are two real solutions. In this case, we want one real solution. So when b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, that's when we get one real solution, okay? Now, there is a third case, which is where b squared minus 4ac is less than 0. And in that case, there are no real solutions, or in other words, there are 0 real solutions. Okay, now in our case, we know that we have to set this equal to 0 since we're looking for where there is one real solution. Well, we know our a value is going to be -9. We know our b value is 30, and we obviously have c. So b value is 30. We're going to take that, and we're going to square it. So we'll have 30 squared minus 4 times a. We know our a value is -9 times c, which we're just representing as c, and that's got to all equal 0. 30 squared is going to be 900, so we'll have 900 minus 4 times -9, which is going to end up being positive 36. So a positive 36c is going to equal 0. From here, we'll subtract 900 from both sides, and we'll end up with 36c is equal to -900. And then from there, we'll divide both sides by 36 to get that c is equal to -900 divided by 36. Okay, now -900 divided by 36 is going to give us -25, so we know our value for c must be -25. This SAT math problem may seem scary, but it's actually really easy, and today I'm going to explain why. Question 27 states, in the given system of equations, p is a constant. If the system has no solution, what is the value of p? So this is a system of linear equations, and in order for a system of linear equations to have no solution, the slopes must be the same, but the y-intercepts must be different. Now, these are going to be in standard linear form. Now, they aren't really in it yet, but we're going to put them in it, and that'll make it a lot easier. So let's start with the top equation. Now, standard linear form is where you have a coefficient in front of your y, and then a coefficient in front of your x, and it's set equal to a constant. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll start with equation 1, which I'm just going to mark with a 1 right here. Now we have 3 over 2y minus 1 over 4x equals 2/3 minus 3 over 2y. Now we need to move this right here over here, and we're going to do that by adding it. Since it's minus 3 over 2y, we're going to add 3 over 2y to both sides. Now that's going to end up leaving us with 3 over 2y plus 3 over 2y, which will ultimately simplify down to 3y. So now we have 3y minus 1 over 4x is equal to 2 over 3 for our first equation. Now, like I said, we have to have the same slope. So let's go ahead and find the slope for this first equation. Well, when we have standard linear form, which is where we have a coefficient in front of our y and a coefficient in front of our x set equal to a constant, our slope is going to equal -a over b, where, okay, and m is going to represent our slope, where the a value is the value that is in front of our x, which in this case is -1 over 4. Okay, so we're going to end up with positive 1 over 4 because we have negative 1 over 4, which gives us that positive 1 over 4. We're going to divide that by b value being 3. So we're going to divide that by 3. Now, keep in mind when you are dividing by 3, right, divide by 3 over 1, okay, we multiply by the reciprocal, right? So that'd be the same as multiplying by 1/3. Okay, so that makes it a lot more simple. So we got 1 over 12 now. Okay, so now we know that our slope is 1 over 12. Now, like I said, we need to have the same slope in this next equation in order for there to be no solutions. All right, so let's get to that same slope. Once again, we want to put it in the same form. So let's go ahead and bring this py over by subtracting it. Okay, so we're going to end up right here. This is going to be our second equation, 1/2 x. We have this plus 3 over 2, which we can actually just go ahead and move to the other side. So we'll move it to the other side. Okay, but we're going to have minus py. Okay, and then we have 9 over 2 minus 3 over 2. Okay, which is ultimately going to leave us with 6 over 2, which is 3. So we'll just put that equal to 3. Okay, so now we got to solve for what p is. Well, we know we need to get the same slope. So we're going to have 1 over 12. 1 over 12 must equal. Now we got -a. Our a value here is 1/2, so that'd be -1/2. Okay, and then we have to divide that by our b value. So we have to divide that by this -p. So we have to divide that by -p over 1. Now, like I said, we can just change this division and multiplication by doing multiplying by 1 over -p. So multiply by 1 over -p, multiply it by 1 over -p. Okay, so now we see that these negative signs are going to cancel. So we'll just go ahead and get rid of those negative signs. All right, so now we have 1s in all of our numerators, and then we have 12 is equal to 2p. So we have 12 equals 2p. We divide both sides by 2, and we're going to end up getting that 6 is equal to p. So we see our answer there will be 6. So even though this problem looks really scary, it's actually pretty simple. It's just a matter of knowing how to set it up, understanding standard linear form, how to get your slope, and the fact that in order for there to be no solution, you have to have the same slope and a different y-intercept, which as you can see here, we do have different y-intercepts as well. Here's how to interpret bar graphs on the SAT math section. Question 1 states a group of students voted on 5 after-school activities. The bar graph shows the number of students who voted for each of the 5 activities. How many students chose activity 3? In this case, we'll take a look at our y-axis. We see that that's number of students. Therefore, we want to know the number of students who voted for activity 3. We find that bar, and if we go ahead and go across, we see it's somewhere around 38 or 39, which we see is answer choice B. Here's how to answer this SAT math question about percentages in under 60 seconds. Question 2 states, what percentage of 300 is 75? All you got to do is do 75 divided by 300, and then that will get you your decimal. To convert that to a percentage, you multiply it by 100, and that would get you 25%. So your answer is answer choice A. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. The question states, what is the solution to the given equation? In order to solve this, we need to isolate x. We'll start by multiplying both sides by 25. Next thing we have to do is get x all alone. So we have to take the square root of x squared, which means we also have to take the square root of 36 times 25. This leaves us with x is equal to the square root of 36 times 25, which will equal out to 30. So we know our answer there is going to be answer choice B. Here's how to efficiently solve this SAT math question. The question states 3 more than 8 times a number x is equal to 83. Which equation represents this situation? So one thing you'll note is as I read the question, I started writing down the equation. I noticed we have 3 more. That means 3 plus something, 8 times a number, which is represented as x. So plus 8x is equal to 83. Whereas for the equation, we've already got it. So 3 plus 8x equals 83. We see that we have that in answer choice D, so D will be our correct answer there. Here's how to interpret this word problem on the SAT. Question 5 states, Hannah deposited a fixed amount into her bank account each month. The function f of t equals 100 plus 25t gives the amount in dollars in Hannah's bank account after t monthly deposits. What is the best interpretation of 25 in this context? Well, we know f of t represents the amount in her bank account. This 100, since it doesn't have any variables next to it, is her initial amount, and then she's adding on $25 every month. So that 25 is the amount that she's depositing every month. So we have option A, with each monthly deposit, the amount in Hannah's bank account increases by $25. Yes, that is a correct interpretation, so our answer is A. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question and a trick to check your work. Question 6 states, a customer spent $27 to purchase oranges at $3 per pound. How many pounds of oranges did the customer purchase? Well, we know that she spent $27, so that's $27. Now, we have to divide that by that $3 per pound. Okay, so that's $3 per pound. I'll represent pound as LB. Okay, now what we see here is that our dollars are going to cancel, and what we're left with is 27 over 3, which is 9 pounds. Okay, so we have 9 pounds. And obviously, you're seeing that this is the correct sort of equation to set up because we end with pounds. We want to know how many pounds of oranges the customer purchased. So that's one way you can check it, is by making sure you end with the correct units. And as you can see, our answer there will be 9. Here's a tip to help you be more efficient on the SAT math section and how to apply it. So when you glance at question 7, you see it's going to be more than 3 lines. Now, because it's more than 3 lines, I'm probably going to be dealing with some sort of equation or system of equations or system of inequalities. So what I'm going to do is, as I read through it, I'm going to start writing down coefficients and variables so that I can kind of get my equation on my initial read through, hopefully, which should save me time. So let's go ahead and read through. Now, see about 9 storage bins that were each the same price. He used a coupon for $63 off the entire purchase. The cost for the entire purchase after using the coupon was $27. Okay, and we know that he got $63 off, and it's 9 times some variable. We'll see if we get what that is. What was the original price in dollars for one storage bin? We're not given it, so we'll just call that X. Okay, so now we have to solve for X. X is the cost per storage bin. So all we got to do here is isolate X. We'll add 63 to both sides. Okay, we're going to end up with 90 is equal to 9X. We divide both sides by 9, and that will give us X is equal to 10. So our answer there will be 10. So as you can see, by writing down our coefficients and variables on our initial read through, we're able to save time because we don't have to go back and find these coefficients and variables. We're able to get that equation set up immediately after our first read through, avoiding a second read through and saving us time. Here's how to turn a table into a linear function on the SAT. Question 8 states, for the linear function f, the table shows 3 values of x and their corresponding values of f of x. Which equation defines f of x? In this case, all my answer choices are in slope-intercept form. So what I'll start by doing is finding the intercept. In this case, since I'm given the x coordinate of 0, I know that my y-intercept will be at 29, which means I can get rid of b and I can get rid of d. Next thing I'm looking at is slope. Okay, I see that when I go over 1, I go up by 3, which means my slope is going to be 3x. So my answer there will be answer choice A. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question about similar triangles. Question 9 states, right triangle PQR and STU are similar where P corresponds to S. If the measure of angle Q is 18 degrees, what is the measure of angle S? Okay, so we know Q is 18 degrees. Okay, we also know then that T is going to be 18 degrees since these are similar triangles. Okay, now we want to solve for the measure of angle S. The measure of angle S is the same as the angle measure of P. So what we can do here, since this is a right triangle, okay, we know that 90 is going to equal our angle measure S, so S, plus our angle measure that is 18 degrees, so that would be angle measure T. Okay, so plus 18 degrees. 90 degrees equals S plus 18 degrees. That means that S is going to equal 90 minus 18. 90 minus 18 will leave us with 72 degrees. So 72 degrees will be our answer for the value of angle S. So our answer is B. Here's how to answer this question about scatter plots on the SAT. Question 10 states a scatter plot shows a relationship between two variables, X and Y. Which of the following equations is the most appropriate linear model for the data shown? In this case, since we're looking for a linear model, I'm going to go ahead and find about where the y-intercept is. It's right around 10. I see my slope is going to be negative. So if I'll go down to my answer choices, anything with a positive slope I can get rid of. So that means answer choices A I can get rid of, and answer choice C I can get rid of because they both have positive slopes. Then I'm looking at my y-intercept. My y-intercept needs to be right around positive 10, which I see I have in answer choice D. So D, we have that positive y-intercept somewhere around 10. Then we also have that negative slope of around 1. So D will be our correct answer there. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question. Question 11 states a given equation describes the relationship between the number of birds B and the number of reptiles R that can be cared for at a pet care business on a given day. If the business cares for 16 reptiles on a given day, how many birds can it care for on this day? Well, we know we can plug in 16 for R then. If we plug in 16 for R, we're going to end up with 5 times 16, which will equal 80. So then we would have 80 is equal to 80, okay, which means that the value of B has to be 0. Okay, so our answer is A. Here's a trick to help you move faster on the SAT math section. If we take a look at question 12, it asks, what is an equation of the graph shown? If I glance at my answer choices, I see all my y-intercepts are the same, so I'm really worried about my slope here. I see my slope is negative, which means I can get rid of anything with a positive slope. The next thing I see is I've got to calculate the negative slope and see what it is. Well, I see that right here. I go down by 2, and I go over by 2. Now, the key thing that they're testing you on is whether or not you're taking a look at what the units are, okay? Because if you look here, even though we only have one dash that we are changing, we are actually moving over to the right by 2 units. So the key thing here is to make sure that you're paying attention to what your units are on your x-axis and your y-axis. So as we can see, we are going down by 2 and we are going to the right by 2, which means that our actual slope here is just negative x. Okay, so our answer there is C. Here's how to answer this SAT math question super quickly. Question 13 states if x over 8 is equal to 5, what is the value of 8 over x? Since we know that x over 8 and 8 over x are just flipped, all we got to do is take this 5 over 1, flip it to 1 over 5, and that'll be our answer. Here's a trick to help you be way more efficient on the SAT math section. Question 14 states the solution to the given system of equations is x, y. What is the value of y? The key thing to pay attention to on questions like this is what you're asked to answer with. In this case, it's the value of y, which means there's a chance we don't have to calculate the value of x. If we take a look at this system of equations, whenever you see stacked equations like this, you want to look to add or subtract this bottom equation from the top one. And sometimes that might mean that you have to multiply the bottom or the top equation by some number in order to get to the value you want to answer with, which in this case is y. So to get y, we want to get rid of x. So let's take a look at if we can do that. Well, if we multiply this bottom equation by 4, we're going to end up with 24x. And then we can go ahead and subtract this bottom equation from the top equation. And then we'll be left with a y value and then a constant. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're gonna have 24x minus 4 times 6x, so minus 24x. Our x's are then gone. Then we have y minus 4y, because we have to distribute this 4. So y minus 4y is gonna leave us with negative 3y is equal to 48 minus 4 times 72, which when we put in our calculator will give us negative 240. So from there, we isolate y by dividing both sides by negative 3. So we can go ahead and divide both sides by negative 3. And that's going to leave us with positive 80 as the value of y. So our answer there is 80. Here's a trick to solve this SAT math question way faster. Question 15 states line T in the xy plane has a slope of negative 1/3 and passes through the point 9, 10. Which equation defines line T? First thing I'm seeing is I've got this slope of negative 1/3, which means I can get rid of answer choices A and B, and I'm left with C and D, the only difference with the two being their y-intercepts. Now, since I know that this is ultimately going down and I've got these points 9 and 10, if I plot that point just roughly, I know my y-intercept is going to have to be somewhere above 10, right? Because we got to be going down throughout this time. So because we have these points, that's why we know that. Thus, our answer cannot be C, because C would require us to have a flat line in order to hit that point. So we know that that cannot be true, and we know our answer there has to be answer choice D. Here's how to interpret exponential growth word problems on the SAT math section. Question 16 states the function f of x is equal to 206 times 1.034 raised to the power of x models the value in dollars of a certain bank account by the end of each year from 1957 through 1972, where x is the number of years after 1957. Which of the following is the best interpretation of f of 5 is approximately equal to 243 in this context? Well, we know that 243 is ultimately what the value of f of 5 is. Therefore, that 243 is the amount that is in the account after 5 years after 1957. So that would put us at 1962. Okay, so let's go ahead and find the answer choice that matches up with that interpretation. We have option A, the value of the bank account is estimated to be approximately $5 greater in 1962 than in 1957. No. B, the value of the bank account is estimated to be approximately $243 in 1962. Yes, 1962 is 5 years after, thus the F of 5, and it's equal to that $243 in value. Here's how to quickly answer this SAT math question using proportions. Question 17 states for a certain rectangular region, the ratio of its length to its width is 35 to 10. If the width of the rectangular region increases by 7 units, how must the length change to maintain this ratio? Okay, so what we know here is that our length is going to equal 3.5 times our width. And the way we get that is by having 35 over 10, right? If you were to rewrite 35 over 10, you get 3.5. All right, so now from here, we want to know if we increase our width by 7 units, how much will our length change? Well, we can just use this proportion right here. So all we would have then is 3.5 times 7, which will equal 24.5. So we know that we must increase by 24.5. Since we are increasing our width, we must also increase our length in order to maintain that ratio or proportion. So our answer there is B. Here's how to break down hard SAT math problems to make them easy and simplistic. Question 18 states square P has a side length of X inches. Square Q has a perimeter that is 176 inches greater than the perimeter of square P. The function F gives the area of square Q in square inches. Which of the following defines F? Okay, well, we know that ultimately the perimeter of square Q is going to be 4x plus 176. All right, that is equal to the perimeter of square Q. Okay, now the key thing here is we need to understand what we have to solve for, and that's the area of square Q. So in order to find the area of a square, we need to know the side length. So in order to find the side length here, what we can do is we can take this perimeter and we can divide it all by 4. So if we go ahead and take 4x plus 176, and we divide all of that by 4, that's going to leave us with x plus 44 as the value of the side length. Now, the area of the square then is going to be the value of the side length squared. So we know our answer there will be answer choice A. Here's how to quickly rearrange variables on the SAT. Question 19 states a given equation relates the distinct positive real numbers w, x, and y. Which equation correctly expresses w in terms of x and y? Well, in this case, all we got to do then is isolate w, as you can see in all our answer choices. So what we'll do here is we'll go ahead and divide both sides by 2. When we divide this side by 2, we see we have 2 times 7, which is going to equal 14. So we can go ahead and cancel both these 14s. Now we're left with x over y is equal to the square root of w plus 19. So we're going to go ahead and square this side so we can get that w out from underneath that square root. And since we're squaring that side, we also have to square this side. So what we're going to end up with then is going to be x over y squared is equal to w plus 19. To isolate w, we got to subtract 19 from both sides. So we're going to end up with w is equal to x over y, and that's all going to be squared minus 19. If we look at our answer choices, we see that that's going to be answer choice C. So C will be our answer for question 19. Here's something really simple about circles that you need to know for the SAT. Question 20 states point O is the center of a circle. The measure of arc RS on the circle is 100 degrees. What is the measure in degrees of its associated angle RS? Now, what you need to know here is that if you have an arc, for example, RS, and you have its associated angle, that associated angle is going to be the same degrees as the arc. So the answer here is just 100. And if you want to see this sort of drawn out, I'll do that really quick. Okay, we have center O, and we're drawing R, O, S. So R to O to S. Okay, we're told that the arc RS is 100 degrees. Well, that means that the angle also has to be 100 degrees. Here's how to quickly solve this difficult SAT math question. Question 21 states the expression, and then I'm not going to say that, but you can read it, is equivalent to ax to the power b, where a and b are positive constants. X is greater than 1. What is the value of a plus b? Pay really close attention to here. This is free response. It'd be very easy for someone to answer with the value of a or b or a times b. We need to answer with a plus b. Okay, that being said, let's go ahead and solve. So what I see here is that I'm taking the 5th root and then the 8th root. So I've got a 6, and then we've got 5th root of 3 raised to the power 5, which would leave us with just 3, since that's 5 over 5, which is to the power of 1. Okay, so I'll just write that as power to 1, so you understand that. Next thing we have is x to the 45 over 5. Okay, so x to the 45 over 5 is the same as x to the power of 9. Okay, so we have x to the power of 9. Now we have to multiply that by this root 8 and then 2 to the power of 8, which is the same as 2 to the power of 8 over 8, or 2 to the power of 1. And then we have to multiply that by x to the power of 1 over 8. All right, so from here, it's pretty simple. We're going to take this 6 times 3 times 2, and 6 times 3 gives us 18. 18 times 2 gives us 36. So now we have 36. Okay, so now we have 36. Now, the next thing we've got is this x to the power of 9 times x to the power of 1/8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and convert this 9 into something where the denominator is 8 as well. So I'll do 9 times 8, and that's going to give us 72. So we'll have x to the power of 72 over 8. And now I can go ahead and add 72 and 1 to get me x to the power of 73 over 8. Okay, now we know that our value for a is going to be 36. Okay, so a will equal 36. And we know that our value for b is going to equal 73 over 8. So from here, what we have to do is we have to sum these two values together. Now, in order to sum these together, I need to convert this 36 into also being over 8. So I'll go ahead and convert that. So that's going to be 36 times 8, which will give us 288 over 8. So now we have 288 plus 73. 288 plus 73 is going to leave us with 361 all over 8. So our answer there is 361 divided by 8. Here's how to answer this difficult question about calculating the area of a triangle on the SAT. Question 22 states a right triangle has side lengths of 2 root 2, 6 root 2, and root 80. What is the area of the triangle in square units? Key thing we have to figure out here is what is the hypotenuse out of these three lengths, because we know the formula for the area of a triangle is equal to 1/2 the base times the height. So what I notice here is that I've got 2 root 2, 6 root 2. So this is obviously the greater. So we know one of our legs will be that 2 root 2. Now between 6 root 2 and root 80, what I know is if I take 6 and I square, I get 36. Okay, so what I could do is I could rewrite 6 root 2 is equal to root 72. And I get root 72 because I take 6 squared, that gets me 36. And then I multiply that by that 2. Okay, so I know that ultimately this root 80 is what will be the hypotenuse. So therefore, I know that my base and my height values can be represented then as that 2 root 2 and then that 6 root 2. Okay, from here, it's really easy because we see this 2 is going to cancel with this 2. And we're going to be left with a is equal to 6 times root 2, which we know will end up equaling 6 times 2, which will equal 12. Okay, so our answer there would be answer choice B. Here's how to solve one of the most difficult questions on the SAT math section. And even though I think this question is kind of pointless and stupid, I'll still show you how to solve it. Question 23 states the expression 4x squared plus bx minus 45, where b is a constant, can be rewritten as hx plus k times x plus j, where h, k, and j are integer constants. Now, if you ever come across on the SAT them saying that something is integer constants, that probably means it's going to be required in order for you to solve the problem. So pay close attention to it. Which of the following must be an integer? So once again, if they're telling you that something needs to be an integer, pay attention to that always. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by expanding this right here, this hx plus k times x plus j. I'm going to expand it out because as you can see, we're going to need to end up getting the values for, h, k, possibly j as well in order to get our answer. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to end up with 4x squared plus bx minus 45 is going to equal, and now we'll go ahead and expand on this. So we'll have hx squared, and then we'll have plus kx, and then we'll also end up with a plus jhx as well. So we're going to have plus jhx plus kx, and then we'll have a plus kj as well from this k times j. Okay, so from here, let's go ahead and try to simplify this right side. So we'll still have hx squared, but I see I have this common factor of x, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that out. So we'll end up with plus x times jh plus k, and then plus kj. All right, from here, let's start getting what things equal. We see that we're going to have a negative 45 is equal to the value of k times j. The other thing that we see is that we have this bx, not necessarily anything we can really do with that at this point. We know that 4 is going to equal the value of h since we have 4x squared and hx squared. So we also know that 4 would equal the value of h. From here, this is the point where it really becomes important to pay attention to the fact that h, k, and a j have to be integers. Because they have to be integers, I can then state that k must equal negative 45 over j. If we see this, that negative 45 over j, then we know that that's an integer. If we also see that j is equal to negative 45 over k, we know that that would have to be an integer as well. And then obviously if we see, the value of just h. So let's go ahead and run through these. We have option A, b over h. Obviously we don't have the value of b, so that's not going to be our answer. At least, not at this point. B over k. Once again, I'm not really looking for the value of b. Down here, 45 over h. We know h is 4. 45 over 4 isn't an integer. It is a decimal, but it's not an integer. And then we have C, 45 over k, which we know would actually have to be our correct answer here. And I'll go ahead and explain why, right? Like I said, we have j is equal to negative 45 over k. We know that j is an integer. Just because there's a negative doesn't mean that it's not an integer, right? So Our answer there would have to be answer choice D, because this ultimately has to be negative, and then 45 over k has to be an integer. Keep in mind that if we have -3, for example, that's an integer as well. So our answer there would be D, and that's how you solve this really difficult SAT math problem. Here's how to efficiently solve this difficult SAT math problem. Question 24 states, in the given system of equations, A is a constant. The graph of the equations in the given system intersect at exactly 1 point. Anytime you're told that a system intersects at exactly 1 point or exactly 2 points, or that it never intersects, pay close attention to that. In the XY plane, what is the value of X? Always pay close attention to what you're asked to answer with as well. In this case, it is the value of X. Okay, so that means we might not actually have to solve for A. Okay, we just need to solve for the value of X. All right, so immediately what jumps out to me is I have Y equals and Y equals. So I'm gonna go ahead and substitute this 3X plus A over here for Y. And then I'm going to work to set it all equal to 0. And the reason why I want to set it all equal to 0 is because I want to end up using b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0. Because if this value is equal to 0, then that means that we have one real solution, or in other words, we intersect at exactly 1 point. So that's ultimately what I'm trying to get in terms of the form. So I want to set it equal to 0. To do that, I'm going to have 2x squared, and then I have this minus 21x, but I also have to subtract 3x from both sides. So once I do that, that's going to end up leaving me with negative 24x, and then I have plus 64, but I also have to subtract a from both sides. So that's going to give me plus 64 minus a. Now what I'm going to do here is I just want to deal with the c value. I don't actually want to deal with 64 minus a. So I'm just going to go plus c, and then I'll state up here that c is equal to 64 minus a. All right, from here, we know that our b value is negative 24, so we'll have negative 24 squared minus 4 times our a value, which is 2 times c. And we know that that's all has to equal 0 for there to only be one real solution. Now, negative 24 squared is going to give us 576 when we put it in our calculators. So we have 576 minus 8c is equal to 0. We can rewrite this as 576 is equal to 8c by adding 8c to both sides, which therefore means that c is going to have to equal that 576 divided by 8, which is going to equal a value of 72. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and erase the value of c here. I'm going to put in 72. We'll put in that it equals 0 as well. And then I'm going to erase everything down here. Okay, so from here, we're going to look to factor out what we can and solve for the value of x. So I see that 2 is a common factor in all of these, so I'll factor out a 2. I'll be left with x squared minus 12x plus 36 is equal to 0. From there, I'm looking for numbers that multiply to get 36 that will have a sum of negative 12. So from there, I'm looking at 6 as the value for that. So that would be x minus 6 times x minus 6. Okay, now we factor this out. We see that x will have to equal 6. So our value for the value of x then would be 6. So our answer there would be C. Here's something you need to know about isosceles right triangles for the SAT. Question 25 states an isosceles right triangle has a hypotenuse of length 58 inches. What is the perimeter in inches of this triangle? All right, so let's go ahead and write this out. Anytime you're given a triangle or a circle questions on the SAT, it's usually helpful to write it out. So we're given our hypotenuse. Now, keep in mind that since this is an isosceles right triangle, we know that it's a 45, 45, 90 triangle, which has this special property where the side length x will be the same side length since isosceles, and then the value of the hypotenuse would be x times the square root of 2. Now, this is important because when we have our given hypotenuse of 58 inches, I would elect to rewrite this actually as, and I'll just write that this is equal to 29 times root 2 times root 2. And you'll see why I'm writing that in a second here. So times root 2 times root 2. Now, the reason I'm choosing to write it like that is because then we know that our values down here would be 29 times root 2, since they just don't have that extra root 2 added on to them. And that, since they're isosceles, they're going to be the same. Now, from here, we want to find the perimeter. So the perimeter is pretty easy to do. We're just going to add in all these side lengths. We'd have 29 times root 2, and we'd actually multiply that by 2 since we'd be adding it to itself. So that's the same as multiplying by 2, which is ultimately, I'll go over what that'll equal out to in a second, but we also have to add on to that then our value of hypotenuse, which we know is 58. Okay, so from here, we have 29 root 2 times 2. That's going to end up leaving us with 58 root 2 plus 58 as our value of our perimeter, which we see is going to be equal to answer choice C. So C will be our correct answer there. Here's how to solve one of the most difficult questions on the SAT. Question 26 states in the XY plane, a parabola with vertex 9 and negative 14 intersects the x-axis at 2 points. If the equation of the parabola is written in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are constants, which of the following could be the value of a plus b plus c? Now keep in mind, we always want to pay attention to what we're asked to answer with. In this case, that is the value of a plus b plus c. So we need to know the value of all three values. So first thing we know is our vertex. So if we're given our vertex on a parabola question like this, we're probably looking to use vertex form. Now vertex form would be y is equal to a times x minus h squared plus k, where our vertex is hk. All right, well, we know our vertex, so let's go ahead and substitute in. So we're going to have y is equal to ax minus 9 squared minus 14. Okay, from here, we want to get these values a, b, and c, which means we need to get into the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. So to do that, let's go ahead and expand this x minus 9 squared. So we're going to get y is equal to a times x squared minus 18 minus 18x. And then we would have plus 81 minus 14. Or that'd be plus 81, plus 81 minus 14. All right, so now from here, we need to distribute this a. So we got to distribute the a to the x squared, to that negative 18x, and to that plus 81. So I'm going to go ahead and erase what we have here. So we're going to have y is equal to ax squared minus 18 ax plus 81a minus 14. All right, so now from here, what I'm gonna look to do is get the values of a, b, and c. So let's start with a. So we know that a is going to equal just a. It is what it is. Now b is going to equal this value of negative 18ax, or negative 18a, since that x is included right here. So negative 18a. Our c value is going to equal 81a minus 14. So minus 14. All right, so from here, I want to sum these all together. So a plus b plus c is going to equal a minus a plus 81a minus 14. Now from here, what we're going to look to do is go ahead and combine these a terms. So what we'll have then is a minus 18a, which will give us negative 17a. Negative 17a plus 81a will give us positive 64a. So we'll have 64a minus 14. Now, what I'm immediately noticing and that I want to look at is we have to keep in mind that this intersects the x-axis at 2 points. Now, because we're intersecting the x-axis at 2 points, but we know our vertex has a y-coordinate that's below that x-axis, we know that we must open up. So our parabola must look like this, like a smiley face. We must open up to cross that x-axis. Well, that means that the a value must be positive. So if our a value must be positive, then we're going to have 64 times some positive number. Let's just pick 0.001 just as an example here. Okay, and then we have to subtract 14 from it. So we know that we can't ever get below negative 4. We can't even reach negative 14, right? Because this is going to be some positive number and we're subtracting that negative 14. So we can't get to negative 14. We can't get to negative 19 and we can't get to negative 23. Okay, we would have to have that value be negative 12. That's the only possible value. So our answer has to be D. Here's something you need to watch out for on the SAT. Question 27 states function f is defined by f of x equals negative a to the power of x plus b, where a and b are constants. In the xy plane, the graph of y equals f of x minus 15 has a y-intercept of 0 and negative 99 over 7, where the product of a and b is 65 over 7. What is the value of a? So a couple things you need to look out for here. Number one, what are you asked to answer with? In this case, it's the value of a, so that's the only thing we should really focus on solving, unless there's something we need to solve before in order to get to the value of a. Next thing, we are given that the product of a and b is 65 over 7. So let's go ahead and write that. A times b is equal to 65 over 7. Now, the main thing you need to watch out for in order to avoid getting stuck on this question or getting it wrong is the fact that we have y is equal to f of x minus 15. If you ever have a transformation like this on the SAT, you really need to pay attention to it, because if you don't, you're probably going to end up getting it wrong. So in this case, we have f of x is equal to negative a to the power of x plus b. Well, we know that y then must equal a negative a to the power of x plus b minus 15. Okay, and that's a really important distinction. Now that we have the value of y, let's go ahead and substitute in our points. So we have this point of x being 0, so that would equal then negative a to the power of 0 plus b minus 15 is going to equal that value of negative 99 over 7. So we have negative 99 over 7. Now from here, what we're going to look to do is solve for the value of b, and then we can use b in order to get the value of a using this equation up here. So to solve for b, we can go ahead and write this, and I'll try to write it out a little bit bigger up top. So as you can see, we had a to the power of 0, and any number to the power of 0 is 1. So that leaves us with this negative 1 plus b minus 15. Now from here, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and add 1, or add 7 over 7 to both sides. Now once I add 7 over 7 to both sides, I'm left with negative 92 over 7 is equal to b minus 15. I'll do the same thing with that 15. So I'll add 15 times 7 over 7 to both sides. If I put my calculator here, 15 times 7, that's going to give me 105. Okay, so if I add 105 over 7 to both sides, that's going to end up leaving me with b is equal to 13 over 7. All right, so now that I have my value of b, I can go back and I can solve for the value of a. Now, how can we do that? Well, if we go ahead and divide both sides by b here, we would get a is equal to 65 over 7 times b. Okay, well, we know that the value of b is 13 over 7. So if we go ahead and plug that in for the value of b, 13 over 7, we see that these 7s are going to cancel, and we're going to be left with 65 divided by 13, which is going to equal 5. So our answer for the value of A, which we're asked to answer with, always check that, is 5. Here's how to quickly interpret this line graph. Question 1 states the line graph shows the estimated number of chipmunks in a state park on April 1 of each year from 1989 to 1999. In our y-axis, we see we have the estimated number of chipmunks. X-axis, we have year. Based on the line graph, in which year was the estimated number of chipmunks in the state park the greatest? Well, we see that the greatest or maximum point is right here, which we see is going to be in the year 1994, so our answer there is B. Here's a tip for unit conversion questions on the SAT. Question 2 states a fish swam a distance of 5,104 yards. How far did the fish swim in miles? What you're going to do is you're going to take your number of yards, 5,104, and we'll use y to represent yards here, and we want to multiply in a way that gets rid of the yards. We want our yards on the bottom. So we want that 1760 yards per 1 mile with yards on the bottom. Now, as you can see, our yards will cancel and we'll be left with our distance in miles, which when we put this into our calculator will give us 2.9 miles. And as you can see, our only unit that is left is miles. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. Question 3 states which expression is equivalent to 12x cubed minus 5x cubed. Key thing here is since you have x cubed and x cubed, you just do that 12 minus 5. That's going to leave you with 7x cubed, and your answer there is going to be C. Here's a tip for the SAT math section. Question 4 states what is the solution xy to the given system of equations? If you see that you have 5y equals x, you can go ahead and take this x and you can substitute in that 5y. This will help you solve y, and then afterwards you can solve x. So let's go ahead and do that. 5y plus y will give us 6y is equal to 18. From there, we divide both sides by 6, and we'll see that y is equal to 3. Now, at this point, we have to go ahead and we can actually just take a look at our answer choices and see that our answer has to be A. And the reason our answer has to be A is that's the only answer choice with 3 as our y value. So as you can see, you don't always have to solve for both x and y. Sometimes you can solve for just one of the variables. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question. Question 5 states the point 8, 2 in the xy plane is a solution of which of the following systems of inequalities? Well, we have our x point of 8 and our y point of 2. So let's go ahead and check. Well, if we plug in 8 for x, we have 8 is greater than 0. That's true. Now, is 2 greater than 0? That's also true. So our answer has to be A. Here's something you need to know about absolute value for the SAT math section. If you take a look at question 6, it says, what is one possible solution to the given equation? Well, here we have the absolute value of x minus 5 is equal to 10. So the way that we're going to set this up is first by doing x minus 5 is equal to 10. When we do that, we see if we add 5 to both sides, we'll get x is equal to 15. So one of the possible answers here is 15, but there is another possible answer. When you have absolute value like you do here, another way, or your other answer here would be negative x minus 5 is equal to 10. From there, you distribute that negative sign to your x and also to your minus 5. That's going to end up giving you negative x plus 5 is equal to 10. You would subtract 5 from both sides, and you would get negative x is equal to 5. And then from there, you would get that x is equal to negative 5. So negative 5 could be the other answer to this question. Here's how to efficiently solve this SAT math question. Question 7 states the function gives the total number of people on a company retreat with X managers. What is the total number of people on a company retreat with 7 managers? Well, in this case, we just plug in 7 for X. So we would have f of 7 is going to equal 7 times 7 plus 1. 7 times 7 is 49. 49 plus 1 is 50. So our answer there is 50. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question by plugging and chugging. Question 8 states which table gives 3 values of x and their corresponding values of h of x for the given function. All right, so the first thing I'm going to notice is that all of these have these x's of 1, 2, and 3, so it's going to be pretty easy to solve this. I'll start by plugging in 1 for x. If I put in 1 for x, I have 1 squared minus 3. I know 1 squared minus 3 is going to give me a value of negative 2. Therefore, I can get rid of A. B is still a possible answer because that is true. C I can get rid of, and then D is also a possible answer because that's true. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to jump to 3 just because I know it's really easy. 3 squared minus 3, well, 3 squared is 9, 9 minus 3 would be 6. So I see that I have 3 and 6, which is true. If I look here, 3 and 3 isn't true, and 3 and 3 isn't true. My answer there has got to be answer choice B. And the reason, just to point this out really quickly, the reason I chose 3 is because I saw that 2 and 1 here are both the same. Okay, because 2 and 1 were the same, and B and D, and those were the two that I had it narrowed down to, there was no point in checking them. I went ahead and moved on to using the x value of 3. Here's something you need to know about when the exponent is 0 for the SAT. Question 9 states the function f is defined by f of x is equal to 270 times 0.1 to the power of x. What is the value of f of 0? Well, if we plug in 0 for x, we have 0.1 raised to the power of 0. Now, 0.1 raised to the power of 0 is like any number raised to the power of 0. It's going to equal 1. Therefore, you're going to end up with 270 times 1, which is just going to equal 270, and your answer will be answer choice D. Here's something you need to know about margin of error for the SAT. Question 10 states to estimate the proportion of a population that has a certain characteristic, a random sample was selected from the population. Based on the sample, it is estimated the proportion of the population that has the characteristic is 0.49, with an estimated margin of error of 0.04. Based on the estimate and the margin of error, which of the following is the most appropriate conclusion about the proportion of the population that has the characteristics? A couple things I want to point out here. Number one, we are taking a random sample. It's very important we take a random sample because if we don't, we can't apply it to the general population. It has to be a random sample. In this case, it is, so that's perfect. Now, the next thing we need to note is that the estimated proportion of the population that has a characteristic is 0.9 with an associated margin of error of 0.04. So what that means is answer choice A. It's plausible that the proportion is between 0.49 and 0.53. And you get that by adding 0.04 to 0.49 and subtracting 0.04 to 0.49. So our answer there has to be answer choice A. Here's a tip to help you move faster on the SAT. If you encounter a word problem, you see it's more than 3 lines, try to write out the equation or system of equations or system of inequalities that comes up in the question as you read it on your first read through. That way you don't have to do a second read through when you're done reading the question. So let's go ahead and show an example. A moving truck can tow a trailer if the combined weight of the trailer and boxes is no more than 4,600 pounds. Well, that means that 4,600 pounds must be greater than or equal to the combined weight of the trailer and the boxes. Now, what is the maximum number of boxes this truck can tow in a trailer with a weight of 500 pounds if each box weighs 120 pounds? So we'll use B for the number of boxes. Okay, now we have to keep in mind here that we just got to solve for B. So we'll just subtract 500 from both sides. That's going to end up leaving us with 4,100 must be greater than or equal to 120B. We'll divide both sides by divide both sides by 120. Okay, 4,100 divided by 120. We can put that in our calculator. When you put that in your calculator, you're going to get 34 repeating. Okay, now keep in mind that B has to be less than that, so the maximum number of boxes would be 34. So our answer is A. This SAT math question is a great example of when it can be a great idea to use Desmos on the digital SAT. Question 12 states, what is the positive solution to the given equation? Well, what I would do here is I would take this and set it equal to 0. So I'd have negative 4x squared minus 7x plus 36 is equal to 0. Now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and put it in Desmos, and then I'm going to solve for what the positive solution is by looking at where it equals zeros, or in other words, where it crosses the x-axis. Now keep in mind, we need the positive solution. So the positive solution here we see is 2.25, or in other words, 9 over 4. So our answer there is going to be answer choice B. Here's how to quickly answer this probability question on the SAT. Question 13 states the table summarizes the distribution of color and shape for 100 tiles of equal area. If one of these tiles is selected at random, that's a key component here, what is the probability of selecting a red tile? Express your answer as a decimal or fraction, not as a percent. All right, so ultimately here we are selecting a red tile. We see the total number of red tiles is 30, and this is out of a total of 100, so that'd be 30 over 100, which will calculate out as a decimal of 0.3, so our answer there is 0.3. Here's something you need to know about parallel lines for the SAT math section. Question 14 states, for the given function f, the graph of y equals f of x in the xy plane is parallel to line j. What is the slope of line j? Well, since they're parallel, they have to have the same slope, which means that line j must have a slope of 2. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question that deals with proportions and differences. Question 15 states a proposal for a new library was included on an election ballot. A radio show stated that 3 times as many people voted in favor of the proposal as people who voted against it. So we have 3 times the number that voted against it, which I'll represent as an A, is equal to the number who voted in favor of it. Social media posts reported that 15,000 more people voted in favor of the bill or of the proposal than voted against it. Okay, so we also know that the number of people who voted in favor is equal to the number who voted against it plus 15,000. Based on these data, how many people voted against the proposal? So in this case, we want to solve for A. Well, we already have what F is equal to, so we can go and substitute in. So we would have F is equal to A plus 15,000, so A plus 15,000. From here, I'll go ahead and isolate A by dividing both sides by 3. So I'll have A is equal to A over 3 plus 15,000 over 3, which would simplify down to 5,000. From there, I'll go ahead and subtract A over 3 from both sides. A minus, I'll just write this out, A minus A over 3 is going to equal out to 2A, so 2/3 times A, which is equal to 5,000 still. Next thing we'll do is we'll multiply both sides by 3 over 2. So we'll multiply both sides by 3 over 2. Okay, keep in mind that 5,000 times 3 over 2 will give us 7,500. So we'll have 7,500 then is equal to A. So our answer there is answer choice A. Here's something you need to know about intersecting parallel lines on the SAT. Question 16 states, in the figure, lines M and N are parallel. If X equals 6K plus 13 and Y equals 8K minus 29, what is the value of Z? So always pay attention to what you're asked to answer with. In this case, that is the value of Z. Well, to calculate the value of Z, we need to know what this angle right here is. Now we know that that angle has to be the same as the value of angle Y and the value of angle X. So we can go ahead and just put Y as the angle measure there as well. So what we ultimately need to do is we need to get 180, which is the value of this semi-arc, right? And we'll take that, or that, that angle measure, right? 180. We have to then subtract angle y, and that'll give us angle z. So we need to solve for angle y first. Well, in order to solve for angle y, we know that x and y are equal to each other. So we'll set these two together and we'll solve for k, and that'll give us the value of angle y. So we have 6k plus 13 is equal to 8k minus 29. Now from here, I'll go ahead and subtract 6k from both sides. Once we do that, we'll be left with 2k. On our right side, we'll go ahead and add 29 to both sides. We can start isolating k even further. That's going to leave us with 42 is equal to 2k. We'll divide both sides by 2, and we'll get that k is equal to 21. So k would equal 21. From there, we can go ahead and solve for the value of y. All right, so we have k is equal to 21. So we have then the value of, we'll solve for x just because it looks like it's a bit easier. So we'd have the value of x is going to equal 6 times 21 plus 13. Okay, 6 times 21 is going to give us 126. 126 plus 13 is going to give us 139. Then we have to do 180 minus 139 to get the value of z, and that's going to leave us with 41. So our answer there is C. Here's a trick to help you on the SAT math section. Question 17 states in the given equation, p is a constant. The equation has no solution. What is the value of p? In this case, asked to answer with the value of p. Always pay attention to what you're asked to answer with and pay attention to key information. For instance, the equation has no solution. Well, because it has no solution, we know it's set equal to a constant. We also know that we have x and a value that will ultimately be with x. So because of this, if there's any sort of number next to x, then we know that we're going to have at least one solution. So in order for there to be no solutions, we need to get this set equal to 0. So ultimately what we need then is negative 3x plus 21px to equal 0. Well, in order for that to be the case, we can go ahead and add 3x to both sides. We'll get that 3x has to equal 21 times p times x. We see our x's will cancel, and we'll be left then with 3 is equal to 21p. In order to solve for p, we'll divide both sides by 21. We'll see that p is equal to 3 over 21, which we know is equal to 1 over 7, so our answer has to be B. Here's a trick you should know about quadratics for the SAT. Question 18 states the function f is defined by the given equation. For what value of x does f of x reach its minimum? Well, if you have a quadratic like this, your value of x at which f of x will reach its minimum or maximum will be the midpoint between the two x-intercepts. We see here our x-intercepts are going to be 10 and negative 13. And the way that we get those is by taking a look at x minus 10, setting that equal to 0, adding 10 to both sides. And then you see x equals 10. Same thing that you'll do for x plus 13. You subtract 13 from both sides when it's set equal to 0, and you get that x equals negative 13. Now, from here, we're going to take our two x-intercepts. We are going to sum them together, and then we'll divide by 2 to get the midpoint of them. And that'll be the value of x where f of x reaches its minimum. In this case, that's going to give us negative 3 over 2. So our answer will be D. Here's a tip that's extremely helpful for the SAT, and that is the vertex form of a quadratic. And I'm going to illustrate this with question 19. The question states the function f of x is equal to 1/9 x minus 7 squared plus 3 gives a metal ball's height above the ground f of x in inches x seconds after it started on a moving track, where x must be between 10 and 0, which are both inclusive. Which of the following is the best interpretation of the vertex of the graph y equals f of x in the xy plane? This question's way easier if you understand what this vertex form is. Well, vertex form at its simplest would be f of x is equal to a, which can be some coefficient, x minus h squared plus k, where your vertex is going to be h comma k. So as we can see in this case, our vertex would be at 7 for our x value. Okay, so I'll write 7. I'll just rewrite this. Okay, our vertex would be at 7 and 3. Okay, so that's going to be where our vertex is. So understand vertex form is going to help you a lot. Now, we have to keep in mind that 7 is not any sort of height. 7 is just the time, since it's that x value. Now, the actual height here is 3. Now, the other thing we need to understand is whether this is a function that is opening up or down, and you get that from the a value. Okay, and our a value is positive, which means that our graph is going to open up like a smiley face. Now, because that's the case, we know that that vertex will be a minimum. It'll be a minimum point or a minimum height. So if we look at our answer choice, we have option A. The metal ball's minimum height was 3 inches above the ground. We know that that'll be the correct answer because we ultimately have that minimum height at 7, 3, 3 being the number of inches it is above the ground. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question about triangles. Question 20 states in triangle JKL, cosine of K is equal to 24 over 51, and angle J is a right angle. What is the value of the cosine of L? Well, with triangles and circles questions, I always recommend to go ahead and just draw them out because it is very helpful to visualize. Okay, in this case, we know that we have a right triangle. We also know that angle J is going to be the right angle, so we can go and put J here, and then we'll put KL. Now we're asked for the value of cosine of L. Okay, we know that the cosine is our adjacent over our hypotenuse. All right, so in order to calculate this, we need to know the values of the hypotenuse and the adjacent one. Now we also know that the value of the cosine of K is 24 over 51. Okay, well, if the cosine of K is 24 over 51, we know our hypotenuse is 51. We know that the adjacent side length is 24. So from here, what we'll do is we'll do 51 squared minus 24 squared is equal to LJ, this line, squared. All right. Now, what we can do then is we'll just take the square root of all this and the square root of LJ squared, and that'll just give us the value of the length LJ. Okay, so once we do that, if we put that in our calculator, that is going to give us a value of 45 for LJ. So we have 45 here now. Now we're asked for the value of cosine of L. So we can go ahead and have the adjacent, which is 45 over our hypotenuse of 51. So 45 over 51, which can be simplified down if we divide both sides by 3 to 15 over 17, or you could also put it in your calculator. And if you do that, you're going to get a value of 0.2. Okay, so answers are here and here. And you could also take the value of 0.8823, and that would be accepted as well by the SAT. Here's how to solve this SAT math question that deals with an equation that has no real solution. In question 21, it says in the given equation, b is a positive integer. The equation has no real solution. What is the greatest possible value of b? So a couple key things here. If you're told that an integer is positive or negative, always pay attention to it. Next thing, we know that we have no real solution. So we're asked for what the greatest possible value of b is. What you need to understand here is that for a quadratic to have no real solution, the value of b squared minus 4ac to be less than 0. So from here, let's go ahead and get the values of b, a, and c, and we'll plug them in. So we know that our value of b here is just b, okay? It's just what's in front of the x. So we have b squared then minus 4 times a. We know our a value is going to be negative 1, so I'll just change this to a plus 4, and then I have it multiplied by c. Our c value is negative 676. All right, from here we have 4 times negative 676, and that'll give us a value of 2,704. So we're going to have b squared then minus 2,704. Okay, we know that this has to be less than 0. So from here, I'll go ahead and add 2,704 to both sides, and I'll end up with b squared must be less than 2,704. At this point, we take the square root of both sides to isolate b. So once we do that, we're going to be left with b must be less than 52. Now, keep in mind, your answer for the greatest possible value of b is not 52, because we have to have a b value that is less than 52, and it has to be a positive integer. So the next highest positive integer that is less than 52 is 51. Okay, so the maximum possible value of b is 51. Here's how to solve this tricky SAT math question. Question 22 states if a new graph of 3 linear equations is created using the system of equations shown, and the equation x plus 4y equals 16, how many solutions xy will the resulting system of 3 equations have? Well, let's start by going ahead and plotting this third equation. So we see we have x plus 4y equals negative 16. Now I'm going to go ahead and convert that into slope-intercept form so it's easier to graph. So what I'll do is I'll start by subtracting x from both sides. That'll give me 4y equals negative x minus 16. From there, I'll divide both sides by 4, and that's going to give me y is equal to negative x over 4, or in other words, negative 1/4 x. And then I have that much minus 16 over 4, which is equal to minus 4. So I'll go ahead and plot that on this graph. Okay, so I have this minus 4, and then I'm going up by about 1/4 per. So I'll just go ahead and go over 4, and then I go up by 1. All right, and if I go ahead and do that, I'll just kind of draw a rough line because we don't need it to be perfect. And as we can see, if we extend these lines, okay, here's where our crossings will be. Now, as you can see, there's not any single point where all 3 of these lines intersect. Now, there are points where 2 of the lines intersect, but there is no point where all 3 intersect at one time. So the answer here is 0. Many people would be tempted to pick something like 1 or maybe 2, but the correct answer is 0 because it's about where all 3 of these lines intersect at a single point, and that never happens. Here's something you need to know about the formula for exponential growth on the SAT. Question 23 states the function f gives the value in dollars of a certain piece of equipment after X months of use. If the value of the equipment decreases each year by P% of its value the previous year, what is the value of P? Now, keep in mind, we're talking about how much it decreases each year. Now, what you want to take a look at is your growth factor here. Now, your growth factor is 0.64, which means we are decreasing in value by 1 minus 0.64, which is 0.36, or in other words, 36%. So our answer here is C. And one thing I do want to point out here is that many people might be tempted to take a look at this x over 12 and think that that changes something here, but it doesn't. Okay, you are ultimately decreasing each year still by that 0.36, right? Since we have this growth rate of 0.64, which means we are decreasing by 36% every year. Here's something you need to know about medians and ranges for the SAT. Question 24 states the dot plot represents 15 values in dataset A. Dataset B is created by adding 56 to each of the values in dataset A. Which of the following correctly compares the medians and ranges of datasets A and B? Well, we know that if we add 56 to each of the values in dataset A, we ultimately are just going to change these values, but we're not actually going to change the range, or in other words, the distance from the minimum to the maximum. We are just going to change what value the minimum is and what value the maximum is, but not what the range is or the difference between the two. So our range will stay the same. So we can go ahead and write that range is going to stay the same. I'll just represent that as range is equal. Now, the next thing we need to take a look at is the medians. Well, obviously, if we're adding 56 to each of these values, they will ultimately change. For example, 22 plus 56 would then become 78, and then we'd have 79. And then right here, we would have 80, 81, and 82. So ultimately, obviously, our median then is going to increase significantly. Okay, so our median will increase, but our range will stay the same. Okay, so option A, we have the median of data set B is equal to the median. We know that's not true. Option B, we have the median of data set B is equal. We know that's not true. Option C, the median of data set B is greater than the median of data set A. We know that's true. And the range of data set B is equal to the range of data set A. We know that is true. So our answer is C. Here's why you need to know the equation for a circle on the SAT. Question 25 states the equation x squared plus y minus 1 squared equals 49 represents circle A. Circle B is obtained by shifting circle A down 2 units in the xy plane. Which of the following equations represents circle B? So first, I want to show you what the circle equation is. The circle equation would be something like the circle equation is this: x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared, where r is your radius, k is the center y value, and h is the center x value. So in this case, your center would be hk. All right, now that I've shown you the circle equation, let's go ahead and talk about how you can quickly answer this as long as you know the circle equation. Well, all you're doing here is you're just shifting circle A down by 2 units. So you're not affecting the x value of the center, and you're not affecting the radius. So those need to stay the same. And just on that, you can get rid of A and you can get rid of C. Now, as you can see, the next difference is going to be obviously the k value. Now, you have to understand that if you're shifting the circle down by 2 units, you need to know that that minus k means your center is at k. So if you need your center to move down, then you have to ultimately add 2, okay? Because if you want to move that center down 2 units, you have to add 2 because there's that minus sign in front of k. All right, so then what you do is you take this minus 1, you add 2, and you get y plus 1, so your answer there has to be answer choice D. Here's how to solve this very difficult SAT math question about surface area. Question 26 states that 2 identical rectangular prisms each have a height of 90 centimeters. The base of each prism is a square, and the surface area of each prism is k centimeters squared. If the prisms are glued together along a square base, the resulting prism has a surface area of 92 over 47 k centimeters squared. What is the side length in centimeters of each square base? All right, well, we know that the surface area of each prism, and keep in mind it says they are identical rectangular prisms, we know the surface area of each is going to be k centimeters squared. So we know the total surface area, if they were kept separate, would be 2k centimeters squared. Okay, we also know that when they are glued together then, the total surface area of everything then becomes 92 over 47k, which is obviously less than 2k, right? So the difference there is what we want to find. So it'd be 2k minus 92 over 47k. Now, we know that that's ultimately going to equal 2 times the area of each of those squares. So that would be 2 times s squared, where s is going to represent our side length of the square, which is what we want to solve for here. All right, so let's go ahead and get a value for k here, because we're going to need a value of k to then plug into another equation. So as far as what that other equation would be, let's go ahead and find what that is. So we know that we have a height of 90 centimeters on the rectangular prisms, and we know that the side length is going to be s. We'll represent that as s. So we then know that the surface area for the individual rectangular prism will then be represented as 90, which is the height, times our side length, which we're going to represent as s. So in other words, we can write that as 90s times 4, since we have 4 of those side lengths for each part of that rectangle. Okay, so 4 times 90s, and then we would have that much plus 2s squared, okay, because we also have to account for the square on the top and the bottom of the rectangular prism, and that's all going to equal k. All right, so if we can find the value of k, then we can substitute in. So let's go ahead and do that. 2k minus 92 over 47k will leave us with 2 over 47k. And then from there, we need to solve for k, so we'll multiply both sides by 47 over 2. Now, once we do that, we'll obviously end up with k then is going to equal, we'll have these two cancel out, so we'll have 47s squared. Okay, so let's write that neatly. K is equal to 47s squared. All right, now let's go ahead and substitute in for k. So we have 47s squared. Now I'm going to scroll down so that we can continue writing out this question. So From here, 4 times 90s will give us 360s. We have this plus 2s squared, and we have this 47s squared. What I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to start moving everything over to this right side so we can get set equal to 0. Now, the reason that I want to move everything over to the right side is so that I have a positive coefficient in front of s squared, just because that generally makes questions easier. So let's go ahead and do that by subtracting 2s squared from both sides and subtracting 360s from both sides. Once we've done that, we see that 0 is going to equal 45s squared minus 360s. From here, we can factor out 5s from both that 45s squared and that negative 360s. So once we do that, we'll have 0 is equal to 5s times 9s minus, it looks like that's going to be 360 divided by 5 will give us 72. So from here, we'll go ahead and set this equal to 0 again. So now we're going to have 0 is equal to 9s minus 72. From here, we'd add 72 to both sides. Once we do that, we're going to have 72 is equal to 9s. We divide both sides by 9. 72 over 9 is going to leave us with 8. And we see that 8 will be our value for s, which we see is going to be answer choice B. So B would be our correct answer here for question number 26. Here's how to answer this difficult SAT math question about percentages. The question states 210 is p% greater than 30. What is the value of p? Well, we know that we start with the value of 30. Then we want to multiply by 1, because if we don't increase at all, we still need to multiply by 1, plus the percent that we are going to increase by. So that would be p over 100. Now, we know that we ultimately need to equal that to 110. From here, we distribute our 30, which is our initial value, to 1 plus however much greater we are increasing, whatever that percentage is. So that will give us 30 plus 30 over 100, which can be represented as 0.3 times p. That's all going to equal 210. From here, we subtract 30 from both sides, and we're going to get that 0.3p is equal to 180. From there, we'll divide both sides by 0.3. 180 divided by 0.3 is going to leave us with 600 for the value of p. So the value of p is going to be 600. Now, one thing that you really need to pay attention to here is the wording. Okay, the wording is that it is p% greater than 30. That's really important, because you don't know if sometimes they'll say, hey, p is it's p% greater than 30. Sometimes they'll say it's p% of 30. Sometimes they will say it's p% less than 30. So always pay close attention to the wording with percentages questions, because if you don't pay attention to the wording of percentages questions, you're going to get it wrong. It's really, really important. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and consider sending a super thanks to help support my channel. Additionally, please drop a comment below letting me know what videos you want me to make in the future. And if you are looking for additional educational services that I offer, please check out my website, haydenrhodea.com.